Since it's finished, let's go back. Suming yawned, and then just about to let Xiao Yi open the portal, Ling Xian grabbed him. What's wrong? Looking at the small hand on his shoulder, Suming was confused. Ling Xian looked at him, and there was a hint of excitement in his eyes. Shall we go deep and dig into the bottom? Hearing this, Suming suddenly had some bad premonitions. This Nima, this is to visit the enemy's lair at night? However, before he could stop it, little Lilideo showed an excited smile. Then, in his confused eyes, little Loli also immediately replied, yes, I like it. After that, the two looked towards Suming in unison. What do you do with me? What can I do? Now that the votes are 2-1, Suming said that he was also helpless, and could only accompany them to mess around. Seeing that he also agreed, both women showed a smug expression. Without further ado, let's go first. After that, the little Loli pulled Ling Xian and rushed directly towards the dark dimension. Seeing this, Suming had no choice, and quickly increased his speed and followed closely. In this way, the three of them marched towards the depths of the dark dimension in unison. The speed of the three people was very fast, and from time to time they cooperated with the spatial passage to hurry. Just like that, after 2 hours, the three hurried to the depths. And in this position, everyone can more clearly feel which scepter released the coercion. Feeling that coercion, Ling Xian's face was also a lot more serious. Looking at Suming, who was still very calm, the corners of her mouth showed a good-looking curve. Next, we have to be careful if that big guy finds out here. Don't be afraid, Sister Ling Xian, even if the Dormammu family finds us, they don't dare to take anything from us. Little Lori looked calm. She is not wrong in what she said, even if Dormammu jumps again now, but in front of these two strong second generations, Dormammu will defeat the two at most, and then respectfully send them away. After all, even if he had the scepter of the Cord of Life, it was still a little difficult to fight the words of the two founding gods without being recognized. Therefore, little Lori did not panic at all. However, after Ling Xian heard these words, he couldn't help but glance at Suming, and then said helplessly, we are not afraid, don't forget, there is one of us. Hearing this, little Loli suddenly showed her expression, and then said helplessly, okay then let's be careful and don't be discovered by that guy, Suming. He doesn't want to talk at all now, no way, people are fighters, he can only rely on himself. However, he quietly turned on his shielding system to prevent being discovered by Dormammu. Half an hour later, they finally approached the central hinterland, the center and very eerie of the dark dimension. At this moment, what appeared in front of the three of them was a very wonderful world. A mass so rich that it could not be condensed here, and the amount was so large that Suming could not forget it at a glance. The energy kept tumbling, as if it was pregnant with something, like an endless majesty like a tide, one after another, madly gushing. Seeing this scene, the three of them were surprised. Is this something gestational? Suming was the first to speak up and asked the two. I don't know, but I know that Dormammu should be in here. Ling Xian spread his hands, indicating that he didn't know either. Then let's hurry up and go inside and see what tricks he is playing. After seeing all this, little Loli was not afraid at all, but was a little eager to try. Good. When he arrived here, Suming had no intention of retreating, and took the lead in rushing towards the black water-like substance in the center. After Ling Xian saw him take the lead, his eyes also showed appreciation. After the two women looked at each other in unison, they followed closely behind. After entering the ink-like substance, Suming found that although this thing was like ink, it was unusually viscous. Let his speed drop too much. However, fortunately, he has a random field. Even if some black water is a little sticky, this speed is not too slow. Along the way, the three did not speak, and rushed to the deepest part in unison. Another hour passed. This viscous environment changed, and suddenly the surrounding side suddenly disappeared from the viscous liquid around it. Arrived. Suming's expression was solemn, and his heart became more and more careful. After that, both women followed and appeared here. After seeing this, little Loli also showed a happy smile. Then, without saying a word, he took out a small mirror the size of a palm. When you get here, you should be fine. As you say, try to inject magical energy into the mirror. Suddenly, the small mirror suddenly shone generously, like a small sun. After a few seconds of lasting, those brilliant rays suddenly stopped and all disappeared. In its place is a somewhat blurry picture. No Blu-ray quality. Looking at the blurry picture quality like a mosaic, Suming frowned. Hearing this, little Loli couldn't help pouting, and then said dissatisfied. Some look good, you still want blue light. In this regard, Suming only spread his hands. I didn't say much anymore, just looked at the small mirror. Inside the mirror is a strange scene, as if in a temple. Inside the hall, strange things lined up one after another, worshipping towards a high sarcophagus. Those things are also disgusting to watch. At first glance, it looks like a patchwork of humans and animals. That sarcophagus should be the guy inside. When Ling Xian saw the sarcophagus, his tone was very determined. Hearing Ling Xian's words, Suming was also a little surprised. Immediately, though, he reacted. Dormammu, although very large in the movie, is a behemoth. However, in his backstory, he is a human wizard who falls into the dark dimension and eventually becomes the king of the dark dimension. Therefore, the appearance of this sarcophagus is not an accident. Looking at those shrimp soldiers and crab generals who sacrificed Dormammu, Suming was a little surprised. Unexpectedly, Dormammu still has so many shrimp soldiers and crab generals. At a cursory glance, he saw where the priests were nearly 10,000 soldiers.
Hey everyone, welcome to our channel, and thank you for your support. If there's a favorite novel on the channel and you want the next part, you're just one step away. Become a Patreon member and I can make it depending on your tier. Thank you for your attention.
Soldiers in the hall. It seems that our task is quite heavy. After seeing all this, Suming was also emotional. He also thought that after getting rid of Cassius, Dormammu would be alone. As a result, there is still an army here. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. After seeing all this, Suming was also emotional. He also thought that after getting rid of Cassius, Dormammu would be alone. As a result, there is still an army here. At this moment, Suming's whole person was uncomfortable. He actually has so many followers, I have nothing to count. After seeing these strange things, the neighboring county and the little loli also frowned tightly. But at this time, something happened to the scene again. I don't know what happened. Many of those things who were kneeling began to get up, and then quickly left the hall, all disappearing from everyone's field of vision. At this time, the coffin emitted a faint vibration, as if something was going to rush out of it. At the same time, that coercion also increased suddenly, as if the copper pavilion wanted to release some shocking beast. Seeing this, everyone was also surprised. Is this coming out? What's going on? As if there is something wrong with that Dormammu? Little Loli covered her small mouth even more, and her eyes showed a trace of curiosity. I don't know, it seems that something has changed. Ling Xian was also a little surprised by this, and she didn't know what was happening now. However, after seeing this, Suming did not have the slightest optimism, but frowned. He was now thinking about where those things had just gone. After all, the good ones who had just bowed down and sacrificed, suddenly came a wave of retreats, and there was a problem with how to look at it. Looks like you're being instructed by something. Suming's mind turned rapidly, thinking about these things. But what the hell are those big guys doing? After thinking for a long time, he didn't have the slightest clue, and he was about to start fighting, and as a result, he made such a trouble, and he also felt a little irritable. However, at this time, he suddenly felt a thick threat. This threat, coming from nowhere, as if falling from the sky, caught him off guard. Moreover, this threat is very great, and the cold hairs of the whole body suddenly shudder. As if he suddenly transferred into a piece of ice and snow, the whole person couldn't stop trembling. The sudden crisis made Suming's mind more urgent. Where is it exposed? What else the hell is not taken into account? At this moment, his mind was also surging rapidly, wanting to know what was his situation, and wanting to find out where this crisis came from. He observed silently and found that there was no difference with little Lori, and the two were still observing the sarcophagus in the mirror with great interest, as if they wanted to find out something. The two of them don't feel that way. After some observation, he also came to this. The strength of the two of them is higher than mine, and the crisis I can feel, they will definitely have a trace of sensing, but the two of them are not different. After thinking silently, Suming came to an astonishing conclusion. Now, there is only one case. Perhaps, this crisis is fatal for me, but for the two of them, there are at most thrilling situations. After coming to this conclusion, Suming looked at the small mirror in the little Loli's hand, his eyes solemn. Come to think of it, there seems to be only one reason. That is, something, as if they had been discovered. Thinking of this, Suming also made a quick decision, and quickly said to everyone, go quickly, these things have found us. After speaking, he didn't care about the shocked looks of the two. Then, in the midst of two screams, one hand picked up a thin waist, and then quickly began to rush outside. The energy of the space gem was activated, and the extremely fast energy began to pour towards the drive. For a while, the speed of the mech suddenly increased. In the blink of an eye, Suming pulled a stream of light and flew towards the periphery of the dark realm. And the two daughters in his arms also quickly recovered after being shocked. However, the two women's minds are also different. Little Loli still has nothing, but Ling Xian is ashamed. Feeling the same body temperature coming from his waist, Ling Xian's whole mind began to sluggish. The jade-like skin of the whole body changed suddenly, as if covered with a layer of pink mist, and the entire body temperature began to rise rapidly. However, none of these Suming discovered or paid attention to it. Now, in his eyes, there is only a hurry, only escape from this damn dark dimension. But little Lori didn't feel any shame. Why don't we use spatial passages? Isn't this way of rushing very tiring? Little Loli looked at Suming's rapid speed, blinked her eyes, and couldn't stop asking. Hearing this, Suming's head was also suddenly startled. Yes, obviously there is a space passage, why do I have to fly so hard? After connecting this, he was about to ask Xiaoyi to prepare the spatial passage. Only, at this time, it seems that their conversation was overheard. At this time, he suddenly spoke up. No, don't use the spatial passage now, at least until you pass through that dark mask. The dark membrane, Suming knew, was the area that looked like black ink. However, he still has some doubts about this. It's just that although he is puzzled, he still chooses the words of phase spirit appearance. After all, for that thing, spirit appearance must know more than him. Sister, why do we have to go through the spatial passage in the back? Little Loli adhered to the principle of asking if she didn't understand, and immediately asked the doubts in her heart. Now it seems that those guys should only know that someone is watching, and do not know our specific location, otherwise they would have come a space jump and would have come long ago, so they're still at a time when they're positioning us. Ling Xian's tone did not feel strange because he was pinched, but he was still so determined. But shouldn't we hurry up and run at this time? Little Lori's tone was even more puzzled. However, after hearing this, Suming showed a thoughtful expression. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Philo Novel app. Ling Xian's tone did not feel strange because he was pinched, but he was still so determined. But shouldn't we hurry up and run at this time? Little Lori's tone was even more puzzled. However, after hearing this, Suming showed a thoughtful expression. At this time, Ling Xian was not flustered at all, but gently explained. Now at this time, we can't mess around, we can't space jump, once we do space jump, that guy will definitely know. However, as long as we leave the range of the dark membrane, their perception will drop a lot, and even if we jump, they may not be able to calculate the direction of our jump. Now, if we want to get to Earth, we have to go to the position we started, but that position requires at least 4 jumps, and now that we are exposed, then we will have a hard time. After all, in the dark dimension, as long as Dormammu gives an order, it is estimated that our jump site will be guarded anymore. After hearing this explanation, little Lori nodded abruptly. Okay, then we have to speed up even more, at least when they make us dumplings, get out of here. After hearing Ling Xian's explanation, Suming also immediately, the energy exploded again, and the speed increased several times again. However, at this time, Ling Xian felt that as time passed, the temperature of the big hand on his waist was getting higher and higher, as if he was going to burn himself. At this moment, Ling Xian found that his head was also becoming more and more confused, as if he wanted to indulge in a strange feeling. Thinking of the current situation, Ling Xian also immediately cut off all the strange emotions in his heart, and then said to Su speechlessly, "So what? Can you put us down?" Hearing this, Suming, who was galloping rapidly, reacted, and the great beauty of Ling Xian was still around his waist. After realizing this, he couldn't help but gently knead the big beauty around his waist. For a while, the hands were slippery, and even through the clothes, you could still feel the Tao. It's obviously a virtual body, but the feeling is still so real and good. After sighing again, Suming put Ling Xian down with a calm expression. As soon as Ling Xian was put down, he also immediately returned to his nature, looking at the realm of the dark mask that was getting closer and closer in front of him, and his expression was also solemn. Okay, now we are about to enter the zone of the dark mask, be careful, the environment inside is still a big disadvantage for us. Before entering, she still reminded softly. Then, after giving little Lori a look, the two of them protected Suming in it without understanding. For this, Suming was very moved, and did not refuse. After all, the life-saving things on these two people are also incomparably many, and he is not worried at all, but worried about himself. The two of them were one in front of the other, one left and one right firmly protected, and the three of them formed a diagonal formation, rushing towards the dark membrane. 3 streams of light quickly plunged into the dark membrane that was like pitch-black glue, and in an instant, Suming made up that strange sound in his brain. In the dark mask, the speed of the 3 was once again quite a lot. However, in the case of 3 people flying at full strength, it is still very impressive. Half an hour later, when he saw that the end of the dark membrane appeared ahead, the accident finally came. A pitch-black tentacle seemed to slash through the endless space from the endless place, stabbing towards Suming. And the dark membrane that caused great trouble to Suming and the 3 did not have any impact on that tentacle, but in the dark mask, the speed of the tentacle increased by 3 points again. At this moment, the sense of crisis in Suming's mind reached its peak. Before the tentacles could approach, Suming's long sword had already appeared in his hand. The current long sword has changed greatly. The originally pitch-black sword body disappeared, replaced by a sword body that was as transparent as crystal. Moreover, this sword body also emits a faint fluorescence. The fluorescence is not large, but it is very tough, even if it is in the dark dimension, even if it is in the dark membrane, the fluorescence of this sword is tenaciously blooming. At the same time, the moment his long sword arrived, little Loli and Ling Xian had been preparing for a long time. Let me see what kind of role his shrimp soldiers and crabs will be. Looking at the galloping shot, Suming stopped the two of them from making a move, wanting to see the strength of this kind of thing. Good. Seeing that he took the initiative to ask for help, the two women did not refuse. After all, although this offensive looks relatively fierce, it is only a sniper countless light years away, and the lethality is not very large, and it is also possible to train Suming. Therefore, little Lori showed a very interested look, and almost took out popcorn. Ling Xian, on the other hand, was under martial law next to him with a solemn face. She was ready, as long as Suming couldn't support it, she could also give support as soon as possible. Although, she doesn't know where her inexplicable idea came from. However, she now has another feeling that she does not want to see this man hurt. Perhaps, I like to see him laugh, I don't know when it started. For this, she can only give herself such an explanation. For this, Suming didn't think much about it. Instead, he prepared with a solemn face. The next moment, the tentacles cut through the mask of darkness and stabbed straight towards his skull. Think too much. Suming drank lightly, and the long sword in his hand moved with his heart. At this moment, his spirit was highly concentrated. The next moment, the long sword and the tentacle suddenly intersected. Bell. Even if it was a vacuum, a metallic clash, accompanied by the huge vibration of the long sword, was easily perceived by Suming. As soon as his mind moved, the huge force was also absorbed by his mecha. Looking at it, the originally dark shot also appeared a huge gap at this moment. Moreover, this long sword seems to be very corrosive to this tentacle. The gap in the tentacles is still expanding and expanding on the long sword. In the blink of an eye, the gap in the tentacles held by the three people was almost half. With another sword, this shot can already be completely cut off. Seeing this scene, Suming's eyes also showed bright colors. In the blink of an eye, the gap in the tentacles held by the three people was almost half. With another sword, this tentacle can already be completely cut off. Seeing this scene, Suming's eyes also showed bright colors. At the same time, the movement in the hand is a little faster, the mecha is also running at full strength, the lightsabers are sliding, and the light curtains are constantly chopping on the tentacles. And the shot that was more filled with dark energy was also suddenly broken under his strong attack. Snap. The next moment, the broken tentacles completely turned into a stream of pure dark energy. Suming solved the battle cleanly, which really surprised Ling Xian. It's nice to be able to do this as an ordinary person. In her tone, praise, surprise, expectation, all emotions are contained in it. Brother, so, it's still quite powerful. Little Lori's eyes were also approving. I know, Blue Knight. Seeing that the two women inexplicably began to discuss themselves, Suming also looked helpless. I think, those words that praise me, put it later, okay, good. After hearing this, the two women also nodded in unison, and then followed Suming towards the outside without slowing down. Feeling the great resistance around him, Suming was also very helpless. Unfortunately, we are inside the dark membrane, otherwise we would have been able to jump in space. In this special space of the dark membrane, the space is extremely unstable. Once you jump in this place, under the impact of dark energy, you can't make the wormhole collapse, and everyone will have to GG. Therefore, they can only proceed after leaving the void breaking out of the dark membrane. However, since there is a dark shot, it means that those monsters have found their tracks. It means that the army behind them should also arrive immediately. Therefore, several people did not dare to be distracted, and began to rush towards the junction not far away with all their strength. The strength of Ling Xian and Little Loli is naturally very high, and the speed of the two who are second only to the founding god is naturally not slow. On Suming's side, because the mecha used the space gem function, the energy was close to infinity, so without counting the energy loss, the speed of the mecha did not fall behind in the slightest. However, you can see it from the speed of the black tentacles. Although this dark membrane has a great limiting effect on their speed, for those dark creatures, it seems to be like a fish in water here, and the speed is not reduced. So it didn't take long for them to get tangled again. Moreover, this time it is not just a tentacle, 300 teams of dark creatures. 300 dark creatures, as ugly as ever. Unknown masses, tentacles, scales, mucus. Anyway, as long as it is disgusting, these things are there. The speed of 300 dark creatures was amazingly fast, and they had just seen it. The next moment, these dark creatures rushed directly in front of them and blocked their way. Quick fix. Looking at the dark creature in front of him, Suming looked at the two women, and after seeing the eager look in the eyes of the two women, he also whispered instructions. Although the 300 dark creatures are certainly not their opponents, the purpose of these guys is simple, that is, to entangle them while waiting for the arrival of the dark army. He knew this, and the two daughters of Ling Xian were naturally clear. Therefore, the two women also nodded in unison, which was regarded as responding to her. Then, the speed of the three did not decrease but increased, and directly with the killing intent, they rushed towards the squad of dark creatures in front. The next moment, the three of them then came into contact with the squad of dark creatures. Suming didn't care about the battle between the two women, and now he was just trying to kill the enemy. Under the infusion of energy, the fluorescence of the long sword in his hand is generous. At this moment, the fluorescence of the long sword seemed to be the first light of dawn, and everywhere the light went, all the darkness was a little weaker. Even, in his feelings, even the black viscous liquid in this vicinity has slowly faded black, although the speed is very slow, but it can also affect the nearby environment. And those dark creatures seem to hate this kind of light. After seeing this situation, these guys also roared in unison, and then rushed towards Suming. After seeing this, his eyes also shone generously. Just so you guys try the sword. After silently chanting in his heart, he also took the initiative to greet him. The long sword waved, and the light flashed. A dark creature was cut off and turned into pure dark energy. After dodging a sharp claw, swing the sword again. Another pure dark energy. For a while, Suming's hands did not stop, and the streamers kept rotating in his hands. And the dark energy around him is also accumulating more and more. Because of the lightsaber and random field in his hand, these dark energy did not merge into the dark membrane, but instead gathered together to form a black ball the size of a basketball. Moreover, as he killed more dark creatures, the larger the black light mass. By the time Suming cleared the battle in front of him, the light group had already reached the size of a fitness ball. At this time, the two women finally cleaned up the dark creatures on their side. Unlike his side, every time they killed a dark creature, those pure dark energies would merge into the surrounding dark mask. For a while, the already pitch-black dark film around them was already dark and could not see its original face. Seeing this, Suming was also a little surprised. What does this dark membrane seem to be bringing? After thinking slightly, Suming also immediately came up with an idea. However, for this, he did not choose to stop it. After all, he did not have any good solutions. And after the two of Ling Xian finished the battle, they were also surprised to see the black big garden ball beside him. That energy, what's going on? Ling Xian directly asked his biggest doubt. For this, Suming could only spread his hands. I don't know, maybe my long sword has a restraining effect on it, they can't melt it. After thinking, Suming also gave a guess. I don't know, maybe my long sword has a restraining effect on it, they can't melt it. While thinking, Suming also gave a guess. It should be so, but this dark film is a little weird. Ling Xian also sensed the strangeness of the dark mask. But that's not something we can do right now. The two were talking, but little Lori didn't hear it at all. Now she looks at the black garden ball, and her eyes show a thick longing. Finally, she still couldn't bear the desire in her heart. A pair of big eyes of Shui Lingling stared at him tightly, and there was a strong color of expectation between her words. Brother So, can you give this to me? Hearing this request, Suming was still a little surprised. However, after thinking about it, he knew that little Lori should be ready to take this as food. Just now, the dark creature was a little difficult for her to accept. In her words, those guys were so ugly that she couldn't eat them. Otherwise, little Loli is estimated to be able to solve the battle in one bite. However, now that those guys have been destroyed, what is left is also pure energy, which is simply a fatal temptation for the little Loli now. But Suming thought that if the little Loli didn't eat it, then this dark energy would stay here, and then feed this unknown dark membrane. In this way, it is better to give the little Loli a mouth. After thinking of this, Suming did not obstruct. Yes, you can eat. After hearing these words, little Loli's little eyes also showed happiness. Thank you, brother So. After shouting, he threw himself at the big black ball. Moment. Little Loli's whole person was buried in the black ball, and the black ball seemed to leak at this moment, and it began to shrink sharply. Less than a second. What was originally a black ball the size of a person turned into the size of a candy. At this time, the little Loli also touched her little belly, then picked up the candy and quickly threw it into her mouth. Snap, not bad, it tastes a bit like an alpine. Smashing her mouth, little Loli also commented on the dark energy. Okay, now that things are settled, let's go. After seeing that the little Loli was done, Suming was not ready to delay, called the two, and prepared to leave. Good, after the matter was over, the two of them delayed at all, followed Suming one after another, and continued to hurry. However, what they didn't know was that after they all left, the dark essence that was integrated into the dark membrane also disappeared quickly, disappearing in a blink of an eye, and a dark membrane was digested. The three continued to hurry, and soon they broke out of the dark mask and came to a place where space jumps could be used. Xiaoai. As soon as he left the dark mask, Suming also immediately called to Xiao Yi. Master, rest assured, it has been prepared for a long time. The next moment, Xiaoai also replied immediately. At the same time, an aperture quickly appeared in front of him. Go. After Suming whispered, he was the first to get into the aperture. And little Loli and Ling Xian did not open a channel this time. After all, the fluctuation of a channel is still relatively small. If all three of them open a passage, it will attract the monsters behind them in minutes. Therefore, the two also followed closely and got into the passage. The next moment, the same passage suddenly disappeared, and there was nothing. And just after the passage disappeared, a giant hand suddenly appeared from the dark mask. This hand didn't say a word, and directly shot at the location where the spatial passage disappeared. The next moment, the whole space was like glass, crackling, and shattering. This blow directly shattered the space, which was simply terrifying. And Suming's anxious people are also unusually lucky. If they took another second, it would be very dangerous. The spatial passage is also going to be smashed by a palm, and several people will be involved in the spatial turbulence. Although they can't die according to the strength of the three of them, it is estimated that they will appear directly in an inexplicable position, and they will be directly lost in a space. And after this palm did not make a contribution, it also immediately broke through the air. It seems that it found the traces of several more people, ready to come to a chase and block. On the other side, although Suming did not say the performance of that palm, however, when the spatial passage was closed, the strong sense of crisis did remind him that they had been targeted by some existence in the dark dimension. Although, in terms of the sense of crisis just now, the strength of this aggregate existence should not be too strong, but that existence must have wanted to leave a few people here, and then wait for the appearance of Dormammu. Therefore, after Suming came out of the spatial passage, he immediately continued to build a spatial passage non-stop. Then, without delay, I went straight in. In this way, Suming kept building a channel, and then kept running for his life. Then, it went on 3 full days. After they appeared from the spatial passage, several people relaxed slightly. Now, there's no way he's going to catch up, right? Little Lori pouted and looked behind her, as if to cross an infinite distance to see the thing chasing behind them. Maybe. Ling Xian didn't have anything, but seeing little Loli like this, he couldn't help but hit her a little. I don't believe that the hell can catch up. Little Lori looked incredulous. Seeing the two women's indifferent looks, Suming was a little crying and laughing. I can only sigh that the hearts of these two women are really big, and there are chasing soldiers in the back, and under the heavenly trenches before, they are still so calm. However, he only sighed slightly. That crisis actually came again. This time, the crisis is more critical than the one just now. This time, without him saying, Xiaoai had already begun to build the spatial channel. The next moment, a golden aperture appeared. However, before he was happy, a palm burst out from the spatial passage on the side, and then did not give a few people time to react. Snap! With the sound of a whole space shattering, that palm directly slapped into the aperture where Suming built the channel. The next moment, that aperture flickered and disappeared. Underscore. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share, snap. With the sound of a whole space shattering, that palm directly slapped into the aperture where Suming built the channel. The next moment, that aperture flickered and disappeared. This time, it was very unexpected, which directly made several people a little confused. Especially the little Loli. She only felt that her face was hot. Although she still didn't know what it meant to hit her face, she felt very uncomfortable. Just now, she also swore that the monster could not catch up, and in a blink of an eye, she chased after it, and destroyed their passage. Looking at the palm that was quietly suspended in the sky and did nothing, little Loli became angry for the first time. You damn it! Little Loli stared at the gorilla-like palm tightly, and extreme flames appeared in her eyes. Then, 2 bright lasers shot out of her eyes. The 2 dangling lasers were extremely fast, and before the palm could react, they were directly shot through by the laser. Then, the palm suddenly turned into a stream of pure energy. After seeing this scene, little Loli's mood relaxed a lot. Humph, tell you to bully me. The little Loli smiled again, and her small mouth pouted slightly, which was extremely cute. Okay, we have one last jump left, don't delay. After hearing this, the 2 also nodded in unison, looking like a good girl. After speaking, after the space subsided, Xiao Yi started again, and another spatial passage appeared in front of everyone. And at this time, the 3 did not delay. The speed passed through the passage. However, what surprised them a little was that Suming had just passed through the passage and found that something was wrong. Master, because of the spatial turmoil just now, the spatial coordinate positioning is somewhat biased. At this time, Xiaoai's prompt tone also sounded immediately. After hearing this news, Suming and the others were also very shocked. What? Our coordinates are skewed. In an instant, 3 shocked voices sounded at the same time. No way, the space jump is like this, as long as it is offset a little, then in fact, it is an offset in light years. So, it's no wonder why they reacted so much. After all, if you don't get it right, after you go out, you will find hundreds of bosses waiting for you, and when the time comes, it will be called a thrill. Of course, after they came out of the spatial passage, it was the last situation. Hundreds of bosses waiting for them again. Yes, maybe that slap changed their intended line. Or maybe they were too lucky. As soon as they appeared from the passage, dense dark creatures appeared in their field of vision. This is trouble. Seeing everything from behind, Suming showed helplessness. Hey, I didn't expect us to be so lucky. Ling Xian didn't have any fear of this, but was a little excited. Not to mention the little Loli. When I see those guys, saliva is coming out. Seeing this, Suming also knew that at this time, there was no way to escape. Again, quick fix, don't delay. Suming also quickly determined the combat policy. Good, after nodding lightly again, the 2 women also did not hesitate and rushed straight towards the army in front. Suming did not act immediately, but observed it first, and then rushed forward without hurrying. Suming didn't rush forward in such a hurry, naturally there was his reason. Because, among these people, he found some inexplicable breath. Those breaths, the pressure on him, were very great. Those guys should be the legendary elite monsters. After thinking slightly, Suming also knew that these guys should have been prepared for a long time. But even so, I'm not afraid. With a chuckle, Suming's speed only increased suddenly, and then he rushed towards the vast army. The first is time. The 3 floating plasma cannons are rapidly charged. In the next second, 3 pillars of light suddenly shot out, with the momentum of tearing everything apart, shooting into the entire dark army. In a few seconds, the entire army was penetrated. At this moment, the dark army has already lost a lot of losses. On the other side, the 2 women finally fought with the army. The combat effectiveness of the 2 women naturally does not need to be questioned. With a wave of your hand, there is a large area of death. For a while, the entire Dark Army had already lost a lot of losses. After seeing this, the army on the opposite side also brazenly rushed towards Suming. It seems that you all treat me like a soft persimmon. Seeing this scene, he also shook his head helplessly. As soon as his mind moved, the long sword in his hand suddenly burst into light, as if it could cut through the darkness, and this long sword was also extremely dazzling at this time. Under his powerful energy infusion, the effects of these rays were only dazzling and beautiful. The light emitted by the long sword was like a small sun, and the numerous dark armies all emitted many expressions of discomfort under its illumination. At the same time, the momentum of each dark creature faintly decreased quite a bit. And at this time, Suming finally intersected with the army. The first to bear the brunt of the attack is a headless horseman, who rides a strange black horse with scales and long horns. Holding a long broad sword in his hand, like a knight of the Central European century, he slashed towards Suming fiercely. Facing the long sword that came straight ahead, he did not have the slightest timidity, but was a little curious. I'm curious, you guy has no head, how else can you see me? After muttering softly, when he saw the headless horseman's broadsword fall on his head, his longsword suddenly understood. Easily pull out a streamer. The long sword and the broadsword on the opposite side exchanged blows for the first time. Suddenly, a huge force kept coming towards Suming along the long sword. At that moment, he felt the long sword in his hand tremble constantly, as if it was about to fly out of his hand at any time. The next moment, Suming also made the most correct judgment. After the blow exchanged, he also immediately took advantage of this huge force, and the whole person suddenly pulled away. He had just left. Several arm-thick tentacles also suddenly popped out from the void, and then penetrated his original position. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Philo novel app. After the blow exchanged, Suming also immediately took advantage of this huge force, and the whole person suddenly pulled away. He had just left. Several arm-thick tentacles also suddenly popped out from the void, and then penetrated his original position. For those tentacles that suddenly appeared, Suming was not the slightest surprise, but he felt that his palm was a little numb, and he couldn't help but shake his palm gently. So much force. For the dark army here, Suming was very surprised. After all, being able to have this kind of strength under his light, the dark army here seems not simple. After tightening his thoughts, he also started to think very much. The long sword in his hand flashed again, and his speed increased instead of decreasing, and he rushed towards the headless horseman again. That moment, the broadsword in the headless knight's hand also moved in response to the sound, rushing straight towards Suming. For a while, the long swords in the hands of the two were constantly intertwined. The vibration in his hand also became more and more violent, as if he was about to get rid of his hand at any time. For this, Suming also fought hard, holding the long sword in his hand and resolutely not letting go. When he was on Earth, although he had learned sword skills, the enemies he encountered were all slashed with a sword, and he had never fought so realistically. At the beginning, Suming was still suppressed by the headless horseman. However, under Suming's strong learning ability, he also began to grow extremely quickly, and after more than a dozen handovers, he also fought with the headless horseman. This is simply a surprise for him. Looking at the tall headless knight in front of him, at this moment, Suming actually felt that it was a little cute. In the past, my sword skills were only limited to theory, but now I have such a good opportunity for actual combat, it is simply a godsend. After sighing softly, he also immediately seized the opportunity and kept rushing towards the headless horseman, looking like you must be separated from you. And for the spirit of parting his mind and paying attention to him, he was finally relieved. Since he has this idea again, then you should not bother him. At this moment, the power of Ling Xian also increased rapidly, and the jade hand tapped it, and it was a death and injury. What she is doing now is very simple, that is, to attract the attention of all the guys, so that these guys have no intention of disturbing Suming. Therefore, the current Ling Xian is not soft at all, and with every move, the strength of the subgod level is incomparable, and it has become a brand new meat grinder. On the other hand, Little Lori's battle is also very interesting. After seeing those armies, Xiao Luo's desire couldn't help it. The current big guy's appearance is still good, enough to be like a mouthful. Hence the little lowly bottomless stomach. The first time it was displayed in front of Suming's eyes. With a small mouth, like a dragon, in the area of tens of thousands of meters ahead, all the Dark Lords instantly entered her mouth. Not the slightest splash. This is his mouthful, slightly estimated, there is an army of tens of thousands. Then, for little Lori, these are just a tooth sacrifice, not even a big meal. Gently touched his lower abdomen. Little Lori's gaze showed satisfaction. Then, she set her sights on the rest of the Dark Army, and the rest of the Dark Army was directly stunned. They now want to ask, compared to this little lowly, who is the monster? You know, they are still meeting for the first time, and they swallow it directly, and there is no chance of resistance. For a while, with her glance, all the dark armies trembled in unison. They were really scared. Then, seeing that little lowly still had thoughts about these guys, these dark armies were about to cry. In the end, as a last resort, they could only rush towards Ling Xian in unison, looking like they were at home. No way, they are more afraid of that bottomless pit now than being shot to death by Ling Xian. After all, after being photographed to death, their energy can still escape in this space, and there is even a chance to resurrect. For a while, Ling Xian's side was like a fragrant bun, and all the dark armies rushed towards her, like that. I really wanted to be scared. Good fellow, are you really not afraid of death? Then I will fulfill you. Seeing this scene was also very gratifying. She also thought that these armies were not afraid of life and death, just to stop him, and she was slightly moved. However, seeing this scene directly made little Lori stupid. She also expected these armies to fight the tooth sacrifice, and as a result, now they all ran to Ling Xian's sister, directly leaving her without food. In this way, little Lori is not happy. Really, ducks to the mouth flew. Humph, you guys, you still want to run. Seeing her food run away, little Loli really couldn't bear it. Directly opened up with full fire, and pursued towards those large armies. And seeing that the little witch behind him chased after him, those dark armies were even more frightened, and the process of sending them to death was even more scrambling. Then, the speed at which Spirit Present reaped life skyrocketed again. And Suming's side is still at war with the Headless Horseman. This headless horseman is not like the weak chicken existence of those dark armies. Not only is his strength strong, but also above the swordsmanship, he has suffered a lot. At first glance, it is a boss. However, it was precisely because of this that when Suming fought against it, he also gained more. It didn't take long for Suming to rely on his learning ability to fight against the headless horseman without falling behind. Even, now he has a vague advantage. Okay, now we should end this fight. After sensing that his strength had soared, Suming did not intend to delay. After all, now that Ling Xian and little Loli have almost cleaned up all the trash fish, he also has to beat this boss down. Don't hold back. Therefore, after the two intersected and separated again, Suming did not continue to rush forward and fight him to death and me as before. At this time, the three energy cannons began to charge again. A faint light began to flicker from above the energy cannon muzzle. At the same time, as his energy infusion increased, the fluorescence of the long sword in his hand also bloomed. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. The 3 energy cannons began to charge again. A faint light began to flicker from above the energy cannon muzzle. At the same time, as his energy infusion increased, the fluorescence of the long sword in his hand also bloomed. Die for the rest of your life. Suming secretly said a sentence in his heart, and then suddenly accelerated, pulled out a stream of light, and shot straight towards the headless horseman. And this scene was naturally discovered by the headless horseman. In the face of this crisis, the headless horseman also began to desperately. The sat-horned horse OO light began to flicker, and the endless runes above the scales began to flicker. After a while, black flames began to appear above the horse's hooves. The flame burns out of thin air, there is no air. However, it was very terrifying, and even the surrounding space could not stop rippling, as if this flame could burn the heavens and the earth. At the same time, the broadsword in the headless horseman's hand began to glow pitch black. For a time, the headless horseman came to hunt everything in the world like a ghost coming out of hell. After everything was ready, the headless horseman also immediately rushed towards Suming. For a while, the great collision of light and darkness began. The next moment, the two collided. The brilliant power of light meets the dark force of destruction. For a moment, I saw that the space here seemed to be unbearable, and it couldn't stop shattering. For a moment, spatial turbulence swept towards the center of their engagement. However, neither of them flinched, as if they were looking at the turbulence of space that could shatter everything. At the same time, Suming's floating cannon was also charged. 3 pillars of light shot directly towards the headless horseman. And at this time, the wildebeest under the headless horseman's seat also reacted. The flames on the horse's hooves suddenly soared, enveloping the entire headless horseman in an instant. At this moment, the headless horseman turned into a monstrous ball of fire. And those flames, like barriers, directly blocked the pillar of light, and resolutely prevented the pillar of light from advancing by a single point. The energy cannon was not weak at this time, the energy was poured again, and the power of the light pillar doubled again. Flame defense, pillar of light breakthrough, light sword, dark broadsword. For a while, the two were so deadlocked here. Outside, it is a constant flow of space, and no one inside intends to regress. In the face of spatial turbulence, both of them have a way to save their lives, so they are completely fearless. However, at this time, if anyone loses the upper hand in the fight, it is a very troublesome thing. Both sides know this, so they insist on it. In this way, I didn't relax for a while. At this time, Suming couldn't help but be extremely glad that he had exchanged the energy of the mecha for space gems. Otherwise, if it were a previous block, such a high-intensity output would have been exhausted long ago. However, he is not worried about energy exhaustion, but the headless horseman is very uncomfortable. Although it is a dark dimension here, the dark energy he obtains is not endless, and the speed is definitely not as direct as the infinity stones. Therefore, it didn't take long for Suming to sense the lack of stamina of the headless horseman. This was not only discovered by him, but also by the headless horseman himself. However, there is no way it can do in this situation. Moreover, he did not expect that this person who did not seem to have any momentum would consume himself. This, somewhat beyond its expectations, exceeded its expectations. And with the passage of time, this gap has become more and more obvious. After realizing this, Suming's confidence also soared. However, it was clear that the abundant headless horseman did not intend to continue to drag on. He knew that if he dragged on like this, he would be defeated. Therefore, after making a decision, it is also a strong man with a broken wrist, directly gathered all the flames of the wildebeest on his broadsword. And at this moment, there is no flame obstruction. 3 laser beams bombarded its body directly. In an instant, 3 bull-sized holes appeared on the headless horseman. If these holes were on other monsters, those monsters would probably have died a long time ago. However, after these injuries appeared on the headless horseman, the impact was very small. Even his offensive did not slow down. On the contrary, with the blessing of the flames, the headless horseman's offensive suddenly increased, and he was directly forced to retreat by Suming. Then, this guy actually took advantage of the victory and chased, not intending to give him any chance to ease up. After seeing this situation, Suming was also very surprised. He still saw such a bold opponent. However, seeing the headless knight whose combat power had surged over there, Suming also became competitive. Let's see how strong your death throws are. With Suming's wisdom, he naturally saw clearly the purpose of the headless horseman. Intellectually speaking, the best way for Suming now is to pull away from afar, and then keep bombarding and interfering with energy cannons, until the Headless Horseman is consumed. However, Suming, who was now addicted to fighting, did immediately negate the battle, because he felt that his combat skills were going to achieve a metamorphosis in this battle, and this Headless Horseman will be his best whetstone. After thinking of this, Suming also immediately took action. The energy was poured into the drive and weapon again, and in the face of the imposing Headless Knight, Suming did not retreat, but rushed towards him like this. At this moment, the battle began again. Pitch black flames and brilliant light intertwined, extinguished, and intertwined with each other. Every sword of the Headless Horseman is extremely fierce, and his moves will kill him. However, the current Suming is not what he used to be. After such a long period of practice just now, his sword technique was not bad at all. While easily avoiding the attack of the Headless Horseman, the longsword in his hand can also threaten the monster from time to time. One comes and goes. Suming's long sword can now be said to be a dark nemesis, and under his energy infusion regardless of loss, the power of the long sword is extremely terrifying. As he cut through the black armor of the Headless Horseman from time to time, the power of light also poured into the Headless Horseman's body along his long sword. For a while, those rich light powers began to churn in this monster's body. In the beginning, that monster could also be suppressed and annihilated with its own rich dark power. However, since the first ray of light invaded his body, he had to be distracted to deal with it. In this way, the Headless Horseman, who had fallen into the downwind in the battle, added wounds again. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Philo Novel app. In the beginning, that monster could also be suppressed and annihilated with its own rich dark power. However, since the first ray of light invaded his body, he had to be distracted to deal with it. In this way, the Headless Horseman, who had fallen into the downwind in the battle, added wounds again. In this way, one comes and goes, and one goes down. The Headless Knight's wounds are increasing, the power of light in his body is also more and more in his eyes, and the moves in his hand are becoming more and more deformed. That's it, less than half an hour. The Headless Horseman could no longer support it, and the power of light in his body was not mentioned, and it had even reached the point where he needed to mobilize all the power of darkness to suppress it. Otherwise, once the power of darkness and light in his body erupts, he will be completely wiped out. For this, Suming also knew. After seeing this scene, he finally smiled. I won. Looking at the Headless Horseman not far away, Suming smiled. And at this time, his purpose was also achieved. There was no further delay. Xiaoai, Master, I have long been ready. After Xiao Yi replied, the 3 energy cannons behind him were also charged. 3 pillars of light mercilessly shot towards the Headless Horseman. The next moment, the Headless Horseman added 3 more bowl-sized holes, and the 3 wounds, like Mars, completely triggered the 2 opposing forces that were already very violent in the Headless Horseman's body. The next moment, the Headless Horseman was completely torn apart by 2 forces. Then, it exploded completely. That moment, waves of energy spread, and everywhere they passed, the small trash fish that were in the aftermath range were completely annihilated into dark energy. For a time, the surviving trash fish on the entire battlefield completely disappeared. This big explosion directly made all the already small dark army GG. At this moment, even Ling Xian and little Lori couldn't help but cast an appreciative look at Suming. You know, this Headless Knight is an opponent even for a sub-god level like them. However, Suming actually defeated him with his mortal body. For his level, he will definitely not think that what equipment strength is not his original strength. Therefore, they would look at Suming. Seeing the surprised looks of the two, Suming smiled slightly, and said to them, It's over, it's not too far from our Deo, go quickly. His suggestion was also adopted by Ling Xian. Well, I don't know what the hell thing of Dormammu is doing, but I don't want to play with it now. Well, I just don't know how Dormammu tastes. Little Lori's eyes showed a slight disappointment. She now feels a little unfed. It's all blamed on Sister Ling Xian. My big meal is gone, and I'm going hungry again today. After the little mouth muttered, the little loli caressed her lower abdomen, and also flashed lightly, disappearing in front of the 2 eyes. Seeing that little loli left the dark dimension directly, Suming was not delaying. The aperture suddenly appeared, and after passing through, he appeared in the bedroom again. Then, Ling Xian followed suit. However, what surprised Suming was that as soon as Ling Xian came out of the passage, the clothes on his body suddenly changed. The powerful clothes that were easy to wear and exercise just now also disappeared, and in their place were pajamas made of tulle, and they were still pink pajamas. Under the thin pajamas, the jade-like skin looms from time to time. This moment directly made Suming stunned. After Ling Xian took a bath, he fell asleep directly, and it was the first time he saw Ling Xian's pajamas. How? Does it look good? Feeling his gaze, Ling Xian also asked softly. Now, Ling Xian's voice was thick with seduction, as if the devil was whispering in Suming's ear. And for this goblin's performance, Suming was no longer very surprised. However, he also pinched his little hand without moving. A slight tingling woke him all up. Suming, you have to withstand the temptation, that's the devil. Then, in Ling Xian's confused eyes, Suming also muttered secretly. And after forcibly chanting the meditation mantra, his mind slowly cooled down. Of course, he never expected that his unconscious muttering would be clearly heard by someone. With Ling Xian's strength, his muttering could naturally be heard clearly. Hearing him refer to himself as the devil, Ling Xian is also a black thread. The old lady is also a big beauty. You call me a leprechaun, I will endure, but what the devil is it that ugly? Now Ling Xian was inexplicably a little annoyed. Now Ling Xian, the more he thinks, the more angry he is, the more he thinks. In the end, fortunately, he didn't care, and got directly into the quilt, without even showing his head, but only made a muffled voice, I'm sleeping, don't call me. Seeing this scene, Suming was also stunned. He really wanted to ask now, do you sub-god level existences also need to sleep? Of course, when he was about to ask, he suddenly felt a trace of danger. Although, this breath is somewhat inexplicable and cannot find the source. However, he still clearly perceived, for the sake of a small life, it is better not to ask. However, after seeing that the entire quilt was swept away by Ling Xian, he also shook his head helplessly. Fortunately, it was still summer, and he didn't need a quilt and was able to fall asleep. Therefore, after carefully lying on the bed, with the faint fragrance of the tip of his nose, Suming also quickly fell asleep. However, before he fell asleep, he seemed to faintly hear Miss Ling Xian's soft hum. This time, his dream was very comfortable, although it was less than 3 hours, but since he got up, his spirit was also very relaxed. However, when he opened his eyes, he found that the Yiren who shared the bed had silently got up. So comfortable. Silently stretched his waist, and the washing was completed. However, as soon as he walked out of the bedroom, he found that there was an orange cat in front of his bedroom door. Yes, orange cat. Or an orange cat with a nameplate. Meow. The little one glanced at him and chirped softly. Goo goo. In an instant, Suming thought of something and couldn't help but call out the name of this orange cat. _orange cat. Or an orange cat with a nameplate. Meow. The little one glanced at him and chirped softly. Goo goo. In an instant, Suming thought of something and couldn't help but call out the name of this orange cat. Meow. There was not the slightest distraction in the little one's eyes. After Suming squatted down, he gently picked up the metal nameplate around his neck and looked at it. It was determined that this little orange cat was the legendary Yuan Eater. Why are you here? Facing the legendary Yuan devouring beast, Suming was a little longing. No way, this kind of thing is completely unreasonable. However, according to the words described in the movie, this thing is generally very mild and there should be nothing wrong, right? After carefully observing it, he found that the little thing showed no signs of anger, and Suming also slowly let out a sigh. Little thing, say okay, I'll pick you up, you don't have revenge. First give the little thing a preventive injection, and Suming bent down to hold the little thing in his arms. The little guy is an orange cat in size, and he is also a slim little prince among 10 orange cats and 9 fat orange cats. After ravaging it fiercely, Suming walked towards the hall with Golem in his arms. When he arrived at the hall, he found that the hall was already full. Rajan, Swallow Sister, Fury, Black Widow, Tony, Thor, and even Gishi and Captain Marvel have arrived. And then, as it is now, it seems that these people are waiting for him. After seeing Captain Marvel, Gugu also immediately jumped out of his arms, and then ran into Captain Marvel's arms with a few strokes. At this time, Suming was still meeting Captain Marvel for the first time. The current Captain Marvel doesn't wear that standard uniform. It is a high-necked sleeveless body at home, and the perfect curves are undoubtedly displayed. And while he was looking at Captain Marvel was also looking at him. You're the Blue Knight. Captain Marvel stepped forward and glanced slightly, his eyes filled with curiosity. It was hard for her to imagine that this young man had saved the world and single-handedly repelled the army of the Zittery Starmen. In his opinion, being able to achieve achievements like Tony with a mortal body is already very powerful, and it already makes him feel a little incredible. Not to mention Suming's heaven-defying combat power. If it weren't for the video, or for Fury's repeated assurances of the truth, she wouldn't believe anything. Captain Marvel. Looking at the big beauty in front of him, Suming also smiled. To be honest, now this kind of home costume Captain Marvel still has a stunning feeling, and even in his opinion, Captain Marvel's appearance is just a loss. However, considering the essence of the spirit appear, it is still Captain Marvel that is more real. When the two met for the first time, they gave a hint of surprise, but they were very lucky. At this time, Gu Yi suddenly spoke. Okay, since we've all arrived, let's study it well. Hearing Gu Yi's words, everyone withdrew their thoughts and spoke seriously. When Gu Yi saw everyone like this, he also nodded with satisfaction, and then began to continue. As for our enemies, you all know the king of the dark dimension, Dormammu, who has obtained the scepter of the Court of Life. However, the strength of the life scepter, he can only exert 1/10 at most. Hearing this, Fury and Tony were a little confused. After all, for them, Dormammu could still understand, but the level of the life court really listened to the heavenly book. And Captain Marvel was somewhat silent. At this time, Ling Xian also stood up and continued to add to everyone. Yesterday evening, Suming and I went to explore the dark dimension with Gali and found that Dormammu had collected a lot of dark creatures and was doing some rituals within the dark membrane. Hearing his words, everyone except Little Loli and Suming was very surprised. He was not Thor, Captain Marvel, and a few ancient people, looking at the eyes of several people, full of shock. Their beings are very aware of the dark dimension. Inside, under the continuous erosion of dark energy, they can at most wander on the edges, entering the depths, especially in the dark membrane. They are simply looking for death. But also, people not only went, but also probed their old nest. This ability, they are also extremely admired. Especially for Captain Marvel, who was unfamiliar with Suming, his eyes were full of admiration when he saw him. However, at this time, Ling Xian's face was also very solemn. That ceremony was very weird. I thought about it for a night, and I thought that it should be a ceremony to enhance the power of the scepter, or a ritual to increase the affinity between Dormammu and the scepter of the Court of Life. Hearing this, except for Suming and little Lori, the others were taken aback again. You know, the current Dormammu gives them a headache. If they strengthen another wave, they will directly not have to play, directly GG. Seeing the ugly faces of several people, Ling Xian also smiled slightly, and then explained softly. However, the good news is that the priests came after us and we interrupted the ceremony. Hearing her say this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed a lot. However, Tony thought that it was also surprising that these people could escape from the pursuit of the Dark Army. At this time, Tony suddenly opened his mouth and asked the question he was most concerned about. How is the combat effectiveness of those dark armies? At this time, Suming stood up and gave a rough assessment. Almost every trash fish is equivalent to the strength of a steel puppet. They are all very strong, and some even I have to take them seriously. Hearing his words, Tony and the others fell silent again. They all know what kind of strength the steel golem is. After all, in the plot of Iron Man 2, everyone feels that pressure. Although, those steel puppets seem to be vulnerable in front of Suming's mecha. However, for the army of the earth, it is still invincible. And at that time, if Suming's mecha hadn't appeared, Tony would have been in trouble. Therefore, after hearing this result, everyone was silent. This is still a miscellaneous fish. Some soldiers, even if Suming is serious, then it is really a terrifying combat effectiveness. At this time, everyone felt a lot of pressure. Silence for half a ring. Fury solemnly spit out a sentence. But, anyway, we don't have a choice. Well, yes, I don't have a choice. Black Widow and Tony also nodded in unison. Silence for half a ring. Fury solemnly spit out a sentence. But, anyway, we don't have a choice. Well, yes, I don't have a choice. Black Widow and Tony also nodded in unison. It's just that the most important issue for now, no matter what Dormammu is doing, we can't let him succeed. Spirit now also immediately came out and repeated. Hearing her words, Captain Marvel also immediately stood up and said to several people, yes, he is celebrating his life now, and we will also do it. That's right, since everyone has arrived, I think we should directly kill the past and set the battlefield in the dark dimension. Gu nodded and agreed with this statement. Well, don't set the battlefield on Earth, the current Earth can't afford it. Fury must have been very supportive of this decision. After all, if he first thought about the Earth, if the battlefield was placed on the Earth, he estimated that just the aftermath of the battle could destroy the Earth. Well, without further ado, I think we should go now and not let Dormammu successfully complete the ceremony. Suming also expressed his opinion. I feel the same way, just because I'm hungry and need some food to cushion my stomach. Little Lori touched her little belly and licked her little lips. She was hungry. In that case, let's get started. After confirming it again, Suming also immediately made a decision. Seeing that everyone supported him, Ling Xian did not delay. With a flick of his hand, a portal appeared beside everyone. Yesterday, I left coordinates within the dark mask, through which we can go straight to the dark membrane, find Dormammu's lair, and annihilate it in one fell swoop. Ling Xian's hand made Suming a little surprised. He didn't even think about it at the time. Well, with this passage, I will definitely be able to catch Dormammu off guard. After everyone saw it, they also praised it one after another. Go, for the stability of the universe. At this time, Ling Xian was also the first to walk towards the passage. For my little belly. Little Lori also wiped her little mouth, then shouted, and followed closely. For the earth. After Suming cheered everyone up, he also followed closely behind everyone. Fighting for the land of birth. After a few moments, everyone entered the spatial passage, leaving only Tony. Tony, are you going to? Natasha saw that Tony had summoned Iron Man, hesitated, but asked anyway. Yes. Tony was succinct. Seeing this, Natasha seemed to want to say something, but in the end she did not speak. However, at this time, Fury, who had been silent for a long time, did immediately speak. But, your combat effectiveness. Hearing this, Tony was also a little silent. He knew that his combat power was simply insignificant in this true god-level confrontation. After all, Suming said that a trash fish is almost as difficult as a steel puppet, and you can imagine what kind of existence their opponent is. Therefore, after thinking slightly, a smile appeared on his face, and he immediately added, now, do we have any other choice? Hearing this, Fury was also silent. He knew that Tony was right, and they had no other choice. After all, if this battle is lost, the entire Earth will be swallowed by darkness. Now, they have to do their best. No matter how weak their combat effectiveness is, they must be counted. Fury also understands this. Well, good luck. Fury looked at Natasha, his eyes full of regret. This kind of fighting, they can't help at all. Well, we will definitely win. Tony nodded. In an instant, the helmet covered him, and then walked towards their portal without hesitation. After Tony entered, the portal disappeared instantly. And at this time, Pepper, who was hiding outside the door, sneaked in. However, at this time, she had long been unable to cry. She is also an insider of this battle. Perhaps, in the past, she would also advise Tony and Suming to stay away from this danger. However, now she has long been accustomed to Tony's life. She knew that she could not persuade, so she had to choose to bear it silently. The other side. It wasn't until Tony walked out of the portal that he found himself in a wonderful world. A world full of slime. In an instant, he felt that the entire steel armor was in a deep quagmire, and it was difficult to move. In this state, we will be 26% less fast and 13% more energy consumption. Jarvis also immediately gave a report. Hearing this result, Tony also nodded solemnly. And at this time, not only him, except for Suming's three, the others were the first to enter the area of the dark membrane. For a while, it was extremely uncomfortable. What are these things? Thor wields his hammer, intending to hammer away the liquid stuck to his body. However, it is of little use. These liquids were super viscous and contained a thick dark energy, and he was completely in vain, not only had no effect, but tired himself half to death. This is the dark mask, and you can reach the central area of the dark dimension by passing through this. Ling Xian saw the uncomfortable looks of several people, and immediately explained. This dark film is a little weird, let's leave as soon as possible. Captain Marvel had long since transformed into a double star form, and under the intense light, those liquids also retreated. Okay, let's speed up. Suming nodded, and then grabbed Tony's Iron Man. Then, the energy surging of the space gem also kept transmitting towards Tony. He knows that Tony's current Iron Man is far beyond the power of his movies, but in this environment, his energy consumption has always been a problem. And his action also relieved Tony a lot. Let's go. Seeing that several people had adapted, Ling Xian did not delay, directly cut through a ray of light, and shot towards the inside. After that, little Loli also followed. Then, Suming took Tony and also thought of following behind. Finally, and behind him, are Furyuki, Captain Marvel and Thor. Because Ling Xian took the lead, the speed of everyone also increased a lot. In this way, everyone spent an hour and came inside without the slightest incident. When everyone stepped into the core of the dark dimension, they felt a thick power pressing down on them. That moment, Xiao Yi also reacted immediately, and the energy shield soared, directly wrapping him and Tony together. When everyone stepped into the core of the dark dimension, they felt a thick power pressing down on them. That moment, Xiao Yi also reacted immediately, and the energy shield soared, directly wrapping him and Tony together. Suming and the others had already prepared, but the other few who entered for the first time were not prepared at all. For a time, everyone suffered a lot of losses. Even Gu Yi's face couldn't help but flush a little. She did, not to mention Captain Marvel and Thor. Captain Marvel was caught off guard, and his body couldn't stop shaking. Thor was even more direct, almost being pressed out of the injury by this wave of momentum. At this moment, Thor knew what kind of opponent they were facing now. Just the momentum can make him hurt, although there is also an unprepared relationship, but you can see the horror of the opponent. Be careful, Dormammu is not so easy to deal with now. Sensing this momentum, Gu Yi's expression was also very solemn. Although, he knew that Dormammu, who had obtained the scepter of the Cord of Life, was very powerful. However, she also did not expect that the current Dormammu had grown to this level. And at this moment, she was extremely happy. Fortunately she found Suming to help. Otherwise, she would definitely have nothing to do about that thing, and the earth would surely fall. And at that time, he was a sinner of the earth. Don't lose your mind, there will be a battle at any time now, be careful. Ling Xian looked at the endless dark space in front of him with a solemn expression. Suming waited until Tony adapted, and also slowly removed the effect of the defensive shield. And at this time, he had the heart to feel this momentum. It seems to be much stronger than yesterday night. Feeling this momentum, Suming's face was a little ugly. It was only a while later, and Dormammu had strengthened so much. This kind of speed directly made him a little desperate. We have to hurry, Dormammu's current strength is still increasing. He should be communicating with the scepter now, we can't let him continue to communicate. When Suming discovered this, there was no reason why Ling Xian didn't find it, and she also immediately gave instructions. Let's go faster. Suming nodded, and at the same time, his Xiaoai quickly built a teleportation channel. The direction of this passage is the source of momentum. Then, he was the first to get in. After that, several people also knew the seriousness of the matter, and did not delay, and followed one after another. Walk through the portal again. A few people saw a shrine. The temple is very large, like a huge one, supporting the heavens and the earth. The temple was quietly suspended above the void, pitch black. And the source of that momentum is in God. However, just as they were about to go inside, an unexpected event appeared. In the original emptiness and void, the Dark Army suddenly appeared. It was as if they were originally there, neatly arranged in the void, like a team of legions, arranged in an orderly manner, and at a glance, they were commanded. The Dark Army, you can't see the border at a glance, roughly estimated, there are hundreds of thousands of troops. Moreover, the strength of these hundreds of thousands of dark armies is not simple, and each of them exudes not weak power. What is even more terrifying is that these armies are unified, and although the momentum is not as strong as Dormammu, there is not much difference. At this time, as if they had received some instructions, those armies began to approach Suming in unison. They're trying to stop us. Seeing all this, Tony immediately had a guess. It seems that Dormammu is very short of time now. Suming smiled. Then we can't let it succeed. There was a chill in Ling Xian's eyes. Thor pinched the Meow Hammer in his hand and gave advice. Okay, we're here to help you stop these trash fish, and you're going to stop Dormammu. He knew that his strength was also the end of this squad, and it was still very difficult to deal with the current Dormammu. Therefore, he was also very wise to stay and clean up these trash fish. I'll stay too, and I'll leave everything to you. Tony did not hesitate and made a choice. Captain Marvel looked at Suming, and after looking at the army after all, she hesitated, and she also chose to stay. That. I'll stay too. Although, her current strength can already compete with Dormammu. However, she knew that the battlefield outside also needed a ruthless character to fight the field. So, she chooses to be outside and help Thor and Tony stop these armies. After all, if there were only Thor and Tony, it would still be very difficult for an army of hundreds of thousands. After seeing that the team had been allocated, several people nodded in unison. Let's go first. Ling Xian took the lead and rushed directly up, smashing all the gates of the temple with one punch. Xiaoai, we see you? Suming squeezed the long sword in his hand with a solemn expression. Master, don't worry. Xiaoai's tone was also very serious. At this time, a mysterious change occurred above his long sword. Above the hilt of the long sword, a golden bead like an eyeball shines brightly. For a while, the entire long sword was under this light, as if dyed gold. At the same time, a thick aura of light began to diffuse. In an instant, Dormammu's power suddenly disappeared, as if before his long sword, Dormammu's power was like summer snow, quickly melting. Feeling this scene, the most surprising thing was Gu Yi. Because, this feeling, she is also extremely familiar. What is this? Little Lori was also a little surprised. He could feel that if the original longsword was Dormammu's nemesis, now this longsword was simply born to restrain Dormammu. In this regard, Ling Xian was also surprised. Originally, Suming's longsword had already made her feel that it was a masterpiece, something that was completely impossible. However, after seeing this longsword, she knew that this ordinary man had been surprising her and kept her elusive. Whenever she felt that this was his limit, Suming would always come up with something that shocked her even more. Like this longsword. Warlock Eye. Looking at the surprised looks of several people, Suming also immediately gave an explanation. After Gu Yi heard this name, he also showed a clear look. Sure enough, but how could the Warlock Eye be with you? Suming also briefly mentioned a few words. I helped Odin once, and this is my payment. After hearing this reason, Gu Yike nodded gently. After the appearance of the Warlock's Eye, everyone's confidence increased a little. Okay, now that we're all ready, let's get started. After Suming saw that there were no problems with several people, he also rushed towards the gate. Good. Several people were not hesitant, and after seeing him up, they also followed closely. After a few moments, all that was left was Tony, Thor, and Captain Marvel. At this time, many dark legions quickly pounced after seeing this moment. The endless stream of dark monsters did not scare Thor and Tony, but aroused the pride of the two. Come on, I can't deal with Dormammu, it's still possible to deal with you little fish and shrimp. After a loud drink, the three of them did not retreat and rushed towards the army. Thor's Iron Man changed for a while, revealing a dense void. Then, moments later, the void ejected dozens of miniature missiles. The next moment the missile came into contact with the Dark Legion. In an instant, dozens of explosion points suddenly exploded. The energy tide also spreads out immediately. There were countless deaths and injuries. However, dozens of miniature missiles are insignificant for the huge dark army. And this time, Thor finally broke out. Raise the Meow Hammer. The dark space suddenly lit up with bursts of electric light, even in a vacuum environment, but everyone seemed to be able to hear the heaven-shaking roar. At this moment, Thor also urged the power in his body with all his strength. The lightning snake dance haunted it and turned into lightning armor. A hammer fell, and between the electric snake dances, countless dark creatures were completely incinerated into dark energy. And for Captain Marvel, she is even more relaxed. Under the double star form, the whole person is surrounded by a burst of light, and the Captain Marvel under this form is invincible. The energy light pillar is also littered without money. She is completely like a destruction machine, rampaging through the dark army. Everywhere it passes, all obstacles will be crushed and turned into the purest dark energy. Of course, these are her incidental jobs. Her main purpose is to find the elite monsters in the dark army and solve those things in case they disrupt the battle between Tony and Thor. After all, for these two people now, these elite monsters are still very powerful, and if they don't get it right, they will be damaged. The battle on their side was extremely hot, and Suming's side was indeed very deserted. After several people improved their state and entered the temple, they found that this place was different from what they expected. The outside of the temple looks very grand, and the space inside should be very large. After entering, I found that it was even more, and in the dark realm, there was still light flickering here, like a starry sky. In the middle, there is a horizontal one. On top of the sarcophagus, complex patterns emerge, outlining mysterious energy. Streams of energy began to slowly extend out. Just a hint can give a sense of despair and coldness. Moreover, to their great surprise, in front of the sarcophagus, before an iron rod was inserted, it was a bit like incense. Of course, all are not fools. If you look at this stick, you can guess it. This ordinary stick is the legendary life court mentally retarded. Sure enough, this guy is communicating with the scepter, trying to make the scepter more compatible with himself. After Ling Xian saw that scepter, his face was also a little ugly. However, he should not have succeeded yet. We still have a chance. Gu nodded, looking at everything in front of her. Her face became more solemn. Anyway, let's get started. Little Lori doesn't care so much. A small face did not relax in the slightest, and when his eyes looked at these things, his momentum instantly rose. At this moment, she is no longer a gluttonous little loli, but a real subgod level terrifying existence. The tender little hands began to stroke. One after another streamers began to rotate, and the terrifying aura between the light and extinction began to condense. I'm going to start. Little Lori's expression has never been so solemn. Well, it can't be dragged on. Ling Xian also nodded. As soon as the jade hand was held, the fluorescence rose, like a firefly, and it was beautiful in an instant. However, Suming could see that the murderous intent in this was extremely terrifying. Even if he was in the mecha, the feeling of being on his back was extremely obvious. Well, after many years of fighting, I have been looking forward to this moment for a long time. Gu Yi tapped his finger, and thin golden lines began to derive. A moment later, I saw that one protractor after another also appeared in her hand. To be honest, it was the first time that Suming had seen Gu Yi go all out. The momentum, although not comparable to Ling Xian and Little Lori, is also extremely terrifying, and the easygoing and elegant elegance of the past has all disappeared, replaced by seriousness and killing. I can't hold back. At the moment of the decisive battle, Suming did not keep it anymore. The power of the mecha has reached its maximum, and the majestic energy can't stop pouring out from the space gem. The long sword, shield, and drive device are also the first time that such a high energy impact has been ushered in. For a time, the long sword in his hand completely turned into a golden sun, completely illuminating this starry sky, and even the terrifying aura in the sarcophagus was forced back by this light. At the same time, Xiao Yi also emerged from in front of Suming. A golden gemstone adorns the white jade-like forehead, complemented by a gothic loli-inspired group makeup. The current little loli is very cute, but in terms of momentum, it is not inferior to Gu Yi at all, and even stronger than Gu Yi's momentum. Xiao Yi was not idle during this time. Since the fusion and the mind gem, what Xiao Yi has been doing is to fuse more deeply with the mind gem. And Xiaoai seems to be naturally more suitable for the mind gem, and the degree of integration with the mind gem is also extremely terrifying. Therefore, Xiao Yi's current momentum is not weaker than Gu Yi's at all. And Xiao Yi is also So Ming's biggest hole card now. Xiaoai, Mecha, Gu Yi, they already have 3 infinity stones here, and it can be said that they have pulled the combat power as full as possible. Of course, Xiaoai's appearance really surprised everyone. After all, her state is really wonderful. Between the unreal and the real, there is nothing, but the momentum of the battle is indeed very terrifying. This kind of existence completely made them a little confused. Gu Yi knew about Xiao Yi's existence, but when he saw Xiao Yi had not yet fused the heart gem, and the momentum did not have this kind of horror. However, it has only been a long time since this momentum, and this momentum has been like this. Xiao Yi's state was very surprised when she had seen her, let alone Ling Xian them. Even if Ling Xian is a subgod level, even if his father is eternal, even if he doesn't know how many tens of thousands of years he has lived. Chapter 114, The Scepter Revival. Xiao Yi's state was very surprised when she had seen her, let alone Ling Xian them. Even if Ling Xian is a subgod level, even if his father is eternal, even if he doesn't know how many tens of thousands of years he has lived. However, when she saw Xiaoai, she was still very shocked. From her point of view, she naturally saw that Xiaoai was not an entity. However, officially because of this, she was very shocked. Because, she saw some kind of trace of herself from Xiaoai. Not physical, not virtual, just like them. However, you must know that they are subgod level, and only the strength of the subgod level has this treatment. However, although Xiao Yi's momentum is very strong, that is, the strength of the heavenly god group is almost the same, there are still 108,000 miles away from the subgod level. However, Xiaoai has this kind of existence. Of course, his virtual body and spiritual appearance were also 108,000 miles apart. However, this still couldn't stop Ling Xian's curious gaze. When Xiao Loli saw Xiao Yi, her eyes revealed infinite surprise, and the flashing light was like a small star. After all, the two of them seem to be about the same age from the point of view of their appearance, and even, she is a little older. In other words, she became a sister. Not the smallest anymore. Hey, who are you? Little Loli instantly forgot about business, a pair of eyes blinked, staring at Xiao Yi couldn't help asking. Seeing this, Xiaoai also introduced himself. My name is Xiaoai, and I am the master. However, before he finished speaking, he was interrupted by Suming. Xiaoai, now you are my sister. In fact, Suming was also a little surprised by Xiaoai. After all, Xiao Yi has not revealed his true body in front of him for a long time, and even he doesn't know that Xiao Yi's current state is already so good. It's all about one person. For this, Suming naturally can't treat her as his own, and now Xiaoai is his sister. Hearing his words, a gentle smile appeared on Xiaoai's serious little face, and he continued. My name is Xiaoai, what brother's sister, mage. Hearing this self-introduction, everyone also smiled gently. In that case, let's start putting it together. After speaking, Xiaoyi's little face showed a solemn color. The little hand slid gently, and the golden thin line changed a lot, and after a while, a pair of golden protractors appeared in her hand. For now, Xiaoyi's magic comes from Ancient One, but its power seems to be far beyond Ancient One. Between the movements, there was already a thick power that began to emanate. Strike together and break that sarcophagus. At this time, seeing that everyone was ready, Ling Xian also stood up and commanded. Her words did not fall, and everyone who had been prepared for a long time rushed towards the sarcophagus. Suming bore the brunt. The energy cannons burst into light in unison, and in an instant, 3 thick pillars of light were launched towards the sarcophagus. In the blink of an eye, the pillar of light was already close to the sarcophagus. However, at this time, above the sarcophagus, those carved reliefs suddenly bloomed black, as if devouring everything, and began to appear. Various monsters began to emerge from the relief, as if they were loyal guards, firmly guarding the sarcophagus. The laser rays that destroyed everything were like weak flashlights in front of these monsters, and under the bombardment of the 3 laser rays, there was no reaction. For this scene, Suming was not surprised at all. After all, good villains are also Dormammu, and if there is no defense, it is called an accident. I would like to know how hard this shell is. Looking at this layer of black images, Suming showed a disdainful smile. The light of the long sword in his hand increased by 3 points again, and in the distance, the black image began to retreat. There were no delays. Suming cut through the space, and with a golden streamer in his hand, he slashed fiercely on those images. The moment of contact, it was as if a red-hot knife had entered the butter. Even in space, even if there is no air, those hissing sounds are transmitted to everyone's ears. At the same time, the golden light was also unprecedentedly dazzling, and every ray of light was like a sharp sword, easily tearing through the protective layer formed by those black shadows. Followed by, the golden lightsaber was also cut on the thick sarcophagus. Block. It was like the sound of metal clashing instantly resounded in everyone's minds. Meantime, a huge force was also transmitted along the lightsaber on Suming's body. For a while, he couldn't catch it, and the result of his blow was only a finger-deep hole in the sarcophagus. At this moment, Suming was very surprised. After all, he himself knew that the long sword in his hand was simply his painstaking effort, but even such a long sword, for this sarcophagus, it was still a little inadequate. Together, let's tear this thing down first. Ling Xian also discovered this situation, and the streamer in his hand couldn't stop turning, and at the same time, he immediately shouted to everyone. Hearing this, everyone also followed the words, and the moves in their hands rushed towards the sarcophagus in unison. The next moment, endless light shrouded the sarcophagus. At this moment, the sarcophagus seemed to be activated. The black light bloomed again. In a trance, Suming seemed to hear the whispers of death. However, this time the fight shows that they have the advantage. 2 sub-god levels, 1 heavenly father level, as well as Xiaoai and Suming. Their plastic surgery is extremely luxurious. Even Thanos, who is holding the Infinity Gauntlet, has to kneel down again and call Dad. Therefore, although the resistance of the sarcophagus looked very tough, it was shattered in just a moment. However, when the sarcophagus was about to break, before the sarcophagus, the iron rod that was ordinary and like a burning stick suddenly changed. In an instant, the stick seemed to have woken up from sleep. The endless divine light began to ripple. Between heaven and earth, the rules of order began to manifest, and runes flowed endlessly, as if a god began to recover. At this moment, the aura of terror began to spread. Just a hint, Suming seemed to see some ancient ferocious beast, like the feeling of Meng's back, which made him shudder a little. Seeing this scene, the most incredible thing is the spiritual appearance. The scepter is revived, how can it be? She looked at the radiant, rune-surrounded iron rod, and above her delicate little face, she revealed a thick look of shock. Oh my god, I don't think I can eat this meal. After little Loli saw this scene, her little face was even more crying, as if she was regretting her lost meal. Chapter 115, Take the initiative to ask for help. It's actually revived, and that's troublesome. When Guyi saw the iron rod like this, he also showed disbelief. Of course, more about their own concerns. Guyi's worries are not unfounded. The resuscitation of the scepter, for them now, is definitely the biggest trouble. The scepter of the Court of Life, which represents the Court of Life, is engraved with the word and the law. Although there is some gap with the Life Court, it is equivalent to a blow to the Life Court when it breaks out with all its strength. This level of power is no longer acceptable to these people now. Suming estimated that if this thing broke out here, there would be little Loli and Ling Xian, and the rest would be GG. Even the time gems of the Ancient One could not save them. For this, he is also a little anxious. However, he also knew that under the current situation, he could not be in a hurry. After thinking about it, he also came to a conclusion. Now there is some trouble. The sarcophagus and this scepter have been connected. We are attacking this sarcophagus now. Not only will the sarcophagus not be broken, but it will cause the revival of the plenary there. After hearing his words, everyone also nodded, obviously agreeing with this statement. Abominable Dormammu. At this moment, little Lori was a little angry, and her little feet couldn't help but stomp her foot, pouting, and looking unhappy. Now, what are we going to do? Ling Xian has no way to do it now. She also did not expect that Dormammu would do this. If they directly moved and the scepter was revived, no one would be able to escape. However, if you don't do it now, then once Dormammu and the scepter communicate thoroughly, they will be very troublesome. For this, even Ling Xian, who did things very crisply and neatly, felt an incomparable headache, and did not know how to start. And hearing her words, everyone did not speak. As we all know, this seems to be an unsolvable situation. Even the little Loli, who was resentful of Dormammu, did not interject. In that case, unless we can disconnect this connection, then we will only have to wait for Dormammu to succeed. In the middle of a ring, Gu Yi still spoke, which was regarded as giving away. However, hearing her method, everyone was silent for a while. This method is not difficult to say, but in this case, they are also very difficult. After all, now the state of the scepter is almost completely revived, like a boiling oil pan. As long as there is a little Mars, it is basically direct. At this time, it is not so easy to go up and break its connection with the sarcophagus. After all, a slight slip, the scepter bursts out, and they are in trouble. Therefore, even the spirit that is most confident in himself is silent at this moment. The current situation seems to be an unsolvable situation. If you want to stop Dormammu, you have to destroy the sarcophagus. If you want to destroy the sarcophagus, the scepter must be revived, Benjiji. However, without destroying the sarcophagus, once Dorma's plan succeeds, they will often be in trouble. Moreover, to destroy the sarcophagus, it is necessary to prevent the connection between the sarcophagus and the scepter. However, now the scepter is again a case of bombing when it comes to Mars. Tricky, very tricky. And at this time, Suming pondered for a moment. Then suddenly he spoke. Then I'll do it. After speaking, he did not pay attention to everyone's thoughts anymore, and flew straight towards the sarcophagus. And his action naturally shocked them very much. Seeing him go directly, after Ling Xian hesitated for a moment, his delicate little face was also full of expectation and encouragement. Although theoretically speaking, she can't do it at this level herself, the few people here basically can't do it. However, after seeing Suming take the initiative to ask for help, she also immediately gave a trusting attitude. Although, she is also very strange. As for the little Loli, she looked like she believed Suming from beginning to end, and after seeing his action, the little Loli's smile was only a little brighter. Furyuki's expression did not change, but in the depths of her eyes, there was still a look of expectation. And the other side, Suming flew towards the sarcophagus. However, the distance is only less than 1,000 meters, and for now, it seems like a heavenly graben. Near the scepter, the law manifested, and the runes of the rule were also inscribed in the void little by little. Everywhere is intertwined with truth and reason. These are the areas he should carefully avoid. After all, he didn't know if he was contaminated with these laws, it would cause a chain reaction. Therefore, he also became more and more careful along the way. And, as he got closer and closer to the scepter, the infinite power emanating from the scepter is also increasing exponentially. Even though he had increased the strength of the shield in the random realm to the maximum, he felt very uncomfortable. It was as if a giant mountain was walking, and the breath seemed to be stopped by something. Just this little bit of travel, he spent more than 10 minutes. When he reached the vicinity of the scepter, the whole person almost collapsed. However, at this time, he still held on and moved towards the scepter little by little. More than 10 minutes passed. He also finally came to where the scepter was. At this moment, he made a little unexpected discovery. Although viewed from a distance, the scepter is shining brightly, surrounded by runes. However, when viewed up close, there is nothing special about the scepter. It is a burning stick that we usually use. No divine light, no runes. Only, above the stick, there are some fine prints. It's just that the print is very shallow, and if you don't pay attention, it's really not easy to find. It's just that from time to time there is a hint of streamers circulating on top of the print. After secretly marveling at the scepter, Suming did not forget the purpose of his coming here. Xiaoi, help me check in the system, is there a way to solve the current state of contact? Yes, although he has the lowest strength, he took the initiative to ask Ying to do this, because he has the biggest hole card in his hand, the system. And the system did not disappoint him. Xiaoyi also immediately inquired about what he needed. 7th generation connection shield, able to shield some very close ties, including mysterious symbiotic relationships. Of course, the technology of the 7th generation is not cheap. Directly let him bleed heavily. This was the first time that Suming had inquired about such advanced technology. You know, in the system, the upgrade of each generation of technology, the effect and cost are also exponentially rising. However, even if the system is sold expensive, he has no choice. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. This was the first time that Suming had inquired about such advanced technology. You know, in the system, each generation of technology upgrades, the effect and cost are also numerically rising. However, even if the system is sold expensive, he has no choice. Bought it, by the way, buy a copy of all the materials. Suming also decisively ordered Xiaoyi. Okay, brother, things have been transferred to your wrist space. The things arrived, and Suming also began his final preparations. Immediately afterwards, he sat near the sarcophagus in his confused eyes, and then laid out one thing after another, and finally played his work where he was. And his action made several people confused. After all, a person sitting on a coffin, while playing with some gems, crystals, modules, as if playing with blocks, how to look at it feels extremely strange. Brother Suming, what is this doing? Little Loli asked directly to Ling Xian and Gu Yi, and for this question, Ling Xian and Gu Yi were also confused, and shook their heads in unison. However, after thinking slightly, Ling Xian gave a hint of speculation. Perhaps, he thought of some way to disconnect. So soon. Hearing his guess, little Lori's small eyes revealed a very surprised look. Well, it should be. Ling Xian was not very sure, and his tone was always a little hesitant. Although he knew that Suming's intelligence was unmatched, and he believed that he had his own methods, the speed still surprised her. Maybe, he's different. Furuaki also nodded. Hearing the two say this, little Loli also showed a look of expectation, and a pair of eyes also stared straight at Suming, without blinking, as if she was afraid of missing some wonderful situation. At the same time, his mouth also immediately said to everyone, "Then mine is going to take a good look, and I'm looking forward to it." For the thoughts of several people, Suming naturally did not know. He is now thinking about the composition and principle of the device. After all, he now has only one raw material, and there is no way to buy a second time for many things. After all, there is not enough money. Therefore, he now needs to be extra careful. In addition, the pressure he is currently under in this position is also extremely huge. Now he is as if a stone has been pressed against his chest, and he is extremely uncomfortable. The mind was running rapidly, and one case after another was sent out by him. It took a full 3 minutes for him to think of the most appropriate solution. Since that's the case, then I'll do it. Once a success. After checking the general eye again, he found that there was nothing wrong with the design, and he started to manufacture the isolation device. And he did it. Ling Xian and several people also immediately discovered it. Brother Su made a move, it seems that he wants to make something. Seeing things appear in Suming's hands, little Lori was not surprised, but she was a little puzzled by what Suming began to make. At this point, Ling Xian is also a little puzzled now. After all, in their opinion, even if Suming's intelligence was against the sky, however, it is too mythical to want to cut off this mysterious contact method by some scientific way. However, although intellectually speaking, they felt that Suming was dying. However, for everyone's emotional feelings, they still believed in Suming very much. For this situation, Suming had no way to explain it. After all, science and mystery are all the same. Now he has made the 7th generation of isolators, and he has long transcended the boundaries of mystery and science. The things in my hand kept turning. It didn't take long for the things in his hand to be put together one by him according to the design drawings. After a while, a small tower-like thing appeared in his hand. This thing is very small, that is, the chopsticks are long, a bit like the Eiffel Tower after countless times of shrinkage. On top of the crystal clear tower, there are many jewels. At first glance, this thing does not look like a scientific product, but rather a handicraft. It looks crystal clear and very good looking, plus the streamers that flow from time to time, it is simply a masterpiece. He believed that no girl in front of this thing could resist its attraction. And that's exactly what happened. After seeing the appearance of the small tower, several people were stunned. What is that? It's so beautiful. Little Loli took the lead in pointing to the small tower, her small hand covered her small mouth, and her small crystal eyes were full of expectation. I don't know, but beautiful is really beautiful, I want one piece. Ling Xian doesn't have that feeling of wisdom beads in his hands now, and now he is like a girl who sees roses when she is in love, and his little eyes are also flickering with a careful heart. Although Gu Yi also likes things, she has also experienced it, and instantly closed her mind, and couldn't help but ask the two women, "But what the hell is this thing for?" "I don't know, but if it looks good, it's over, and the rest doesn't matter." Now the little Loli has been completely attracted by the appearance of the small tower, and has completely forgotten the reason for coming here now. Hearing this, Ling Xian reacted, quickly glanced at little Lori, and then replied to Gu Yi, "It seems that it should be a device to shield the signal of the scepter and the sarcophagus." Her tone was filled with confidence, as if she had seen this thing. Hearing this, little Loli finally reacted, and then opened her big round eyes, her eyelashes fluttered, and immediately asked, "Why, Sister Ling?" Seeing that little Loli was fouled again, Ling Xian did not have the slightest way, and also explained to her softly, "This thing, I've seen on Earth, a scaled-down version of the signal tower." Hearing her explanation, little Loli immediately showed an expression of "I'm still young, but don't lie to me," and then continued to retort, "Sister Ling, that's Earth, and it's just a signal tower. She has also been on Earth for so many years, and she must know about signal towers. But what is that thing? What is this? Can it be comparable?" For the demolition of the little Loli, Ling Xian was not angry at all, as if he was already very familiar with this scene. Or the dismantling and incomprehension of little Lori, Ling Xian was not angry at all, as if he was already very familiar with this scene. I saw that he was not in a hurry, and said again, "Don't talk too much," I said. Since this kind of thing is designed on the Earth, obviously this thing has a strong response to signals. And now, what we need to cut off is the connection between the sarcophagus and the scepter, in other words, cutting off the sarcophagus and the scepter only to see the signal of communication. Although there is some gap between this signal and electromagnetic signals, they are all signals in the final analysis. Ling Xian explained a lot in one breath, which made the two a little confused. However, although they didn't understand it very well, they couldn't help but think that Suming was right. Ling Xian's performance made Suming a little surprised. After all, what Ling Xian said was basically not far from 10. This device is the isolation device, which is used to hijack the signal between the scepter and the sarcophagus. And he made it, and let the big stone in his heart fall to the ground. After that, he didn't pay as much attention either. Xiaoai, find me the hub for the connection between the two. Without delay, Suming also immediately asked Xiaoai. Hearing this, Xiao Yi also immediately manifested beside him. At the same time, the soul gem on his forehead was also generously shining. Xiao Yi's eyes suddenly became extremely deep, as if there was a sea of stars inside, containing the entire world. At the same time, the little eyes also immediately scanned the sarcophagus and scepter. Xiaoai, as the top intelligent life, her strength is naturally not to be underestimated. A moment later, Xiao Yi pointed to an open space with an excited look and said to Suming, "Brother Suming, where?" As he spoke, Xiao Yi's little hand waved gently. In an instant, thin line projections appeared between the scepter and the sarcophagus. Suming knew that these lines were the signal lines that Xiaoai detected to connect the two, and this is where the signal is densest in one place. All signals are basically where they meet, that is, the red dot is the hub of the signal handover. After seeing Xiao Yi's key marking, Suming also reacted immediately. Without hesitation, he rushed directly up and inserted the small tower directly above the red dot. Then, he also immediately flicked a crystal on the small tower. With this move, it was as if he had started some chain reaction. Everything suddenly began to change. First of all, the crystal clear small tower began to glow, and the gems seemed to be small suns, emitting a dazzling light. Meanwhile, the scepter also changed immediately. As if the power had been cut off, the surrounding manifestations began to slowly hide, and the suspended runes began to slowly fade, as if all visions had slowly begun to disappear. At the same time, Suming also felt that the pressure on his body suddenly relaxed a lot. Now he still feels a little uncomfortable, but compared to the feeling just now, he is now in heaven. And this change was naturally discovered by the little loli who has been paying attention. What's wrong? It won't really be a recovery, right? Little Lori looked at the vision that gradually faded, and her brain reaction was a little sluggish. Hearing her say this, Ling Xian gave him a helpless look. So obvious, it seems that the connection between the scepter and the sarcophagus has been severed. Hearing him say this, little Loli suddenly realized. So it was, I said what is going on now, I thought I was going to gather strength and come another wave. Ling Xian has now completely given up treatment for little Loli. He didn't pay any more attention to him, and a pair of eyes were also staring at Suming tightly, and the tenderness in it was about to overflow. Suming's action surprised her very much. Although she believed in Suming very much in her heart, she also knew that the difficulty of this matter was very great. Even, she found it very difficult to deal with a subgod level 1. However, she never expected that in less than half an hour, the connection between the scepter and the sarcophagus would be interrupted so easily. Moreover, there was no accident, leisurely walking, everything was completed very elegantly. At this moment, she herself did not find that there was always this shadow of Suming in her heart. After Gu Yi saw this scene, he also took a breath. She knew that they were only one step away from final victory. And when all the visions disappeared, the iron rod continued to become ordinary, just like an ordinary iron rod, without any abnormalities. It's just in the garbage heap, you can't find that. At this time, Suming walked up, grabbed the scepter, and then pulled him out of the stone slab. Although his action was very simple, they were terrified when they saw it. You know, although the connection between the scepter and the sarcophagus has been cut off now, God knows what backhand Dormammu has prepared from time to time, and it is really his risk to take it so rashly. However, seeing Suming take out the scepter without any accident, they were also relieved in their hearts. For Suming, the most important reason why he took this scepter was that he didn't want Dormammu to get it. Moreover, Xiao Yi also told him that in this state of isolation, the scepter could be taken away. He believed in Xiaoai and knew that he must not give Dormammu the scepter. Therefore, taking advantage of this time, snatching the scepter is also the most ideal choice. After the scepter arrived, it was as he had imagined. Although this scepter did not echo him, it did not resist him to pick it up. Unlike Thor's Meow hammer, if it doesn't recognize you, you can't pick it up. And the main reason for his judgment is still Karmoda, who, as an ordinary person, actually runs around with a scepter. He didn't believe that Kalmoda could pick up the scepter, and he couldn't pick it up as a person chosen by the system. And it turns out that he really didn't guess wrong. And after he got the scepter, he immediately threw it into his wrist space. Then, too, he left here non-stop. After all, he believed that if he took away the scepter, Dormammu would come out right away. Phila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share, and after he got the scepter, he immediately threw it into his wrist space. Then, too, he left here non-stop. After all, he believed that if he took away the scepter, Dormammu would come out right away. For now, even if Dormammu does not have a scepter, but he has been getting the scepter for so long, God knows how much benefit he has gained from the scepter and how much strength he has improved. Therefore, he does not hold on, even if he avoids it. After all, with the help of Ling Xian and little Lori, his pressure would be much less. And when he returned to the team, several people immediately gave him a thumbs up, and even the little loli had already pounced, holding his little hand and not letting go. Brother Suming, you are so powerful, much more powerful than sister Ling Xian. Her words made Sumingdo couldn't help but smile, and then couldn't help but touch her little head, messing up all her smooth purple hair. And Ling Xian now seems to have given up treatment, and there is no hint of blame. Since the scepter has already been taken, let's take them down directly. After whispering a few words, they did not delay and rushed directly towards the sarcophagus. For a time, everyone began to fight hard, and the momentum also exploded to the peak, and everyone began to break out their strongest offensive with a posture of doing their best. For a time, everyone was shining. One attack after another kept rushing towards the sarcophagus. For the sarcophagus, these are very terrifying offensives. After all, the current sarcophagus does not have the scepter of the cord of life as protection, and everyone is also throwing off their arms. Next second, numerous divine lights fell on the sarcophagus in unison, and the dark shadows on the sarcophagus had not yet appeared, and they had been crushed by the divine light. Followed by, in Suming's eyes, the sarcophagus erupted with a shocking light. At this moment, the entire space seemed to be quiet, and all the time seemed to be paused. Boom. At the same time, the sound like thunder also exploded in his mind in an instant, and the energy tide generated by the explosion also spread out instantly, and everywhere it went, everything was annihilated, and even the space here was swept by the energy tide and turned into smashes. And this temple, under this offensive, was completely annihilated, leaving an endless void in place. Inside the void turbulence kept surging, as if it wanted to devour everything. The aftermath of the explosion was terrifying. Even though Suming had adjusted the shield to the maximum, he could feel that he was like a small boat in the sea, and he could only follow the waves in the wind and rain. And just when he couldn't hold on, abruptly, a slender jade hand came to his waist and pulled him into a warm embrace. This moment, it was as if he had entered a warm shelter. Everything seemed to be in the past, leaving him with only safety, warmth, and a faint unknown scent, and a piece of softness. Suming was not a fool. This touch, this fragrance. But little loli, it's not the old woman Gu Yi. Everyone present saw that the imperial sister Ling appeared. After knowing who it was, the only worry in Suming's heart also disappeared, and he lay comfortably in the haven, waiting for the energy tide to disappear. Nothing outside seems to have anything to do with him. It's okay on their side. Outside the temple, Thor, Tony, and Captain Marvel, who were entangled with those armies, also sensed an energy sweeping towards them at the moment of the explosion. Captain Marvel was also the first to react, and without hesitation, he pulled one, and then the double star energy exploded rapidly, directly transformed into a colorful streamer, galloping towards the outside. At this moment, her speed, if not the speed of light, was quite close to the forehead. As soon as the three of them left the battlefield, the energy tide had already broken through the temple and directly swept the entire battlefield. It's almost a little bit away from them. They were gone, but those dark creatures on the battlefield were directly confused. The speed of the energy tide was so fast that the army of those dark creatures did not react, and it was annihilated by that tide. Moment. The originally dense army of darkness completely disappeared, and not a single hair remained. For this, on top of Captain Marvel's originally confident face, he now also had a strong look of shock. She definitely didn't expect that the battle inside had reached this level. This energy tide, if she hadn't slipped fast, the double star form would not be able to hold it. Moreover, this is still the aftermath of the battle, the tide of energy. One can imagine how intense the battle inside has reached. She was so shocked, let alone Thor and Tony. Tony looked at the energy tide that followed closely behind, feeling the powerful power emanating from the tide, and the fear in his heart couldn't stop spreading. Our opponent, what the hell is it? At this moment, he was also blindfolded. Under this power, his brain has completely stopped thinking. If Tony was fearful, Thor was slightly ashamed. Although he took the initiative to clean up the miscellaneous soldiers outside, in fact, he still had some thoughts in his heart. After all, no one wants to admit that they are here to make soy sauce. Tassal also has the heart of a Lord C. Moreover, he still had a thought in his mind. That is, Tony's master and apprentice should be left outside. After all, their apostle group battle is very powerful. As for him, he must be going to enter and fight the boss for 300 rounds. However, in view of the fact that he lost the last competition between the two, he was embarrassed to open his mouth with this proposal. In other words, in the deepest part of his heart, he still thinks that he is stronger than Suming. But, for now, feeling the feeling of being on his back, Thor suddenly had a feeling. That is, fortunately, I didn't go in this powerful battle. Even if he soul faces this kind of aftermath, even the slag will not be left, let alone take the initiative to fight. While giving birth to this thought, he couldn't help but feel ashamed, and at the same time admired Suming. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Philo novel app. Feeling the feeling of being on his back, Thor suddenly had a feeling. That is, fortunately, I didn't go in this powerful battle. Even if he soul faces this kind of aftermath, even the slag will not be left, let alone take the initiative to fight. While giving birth to this thought, he couldn't help but feel ashamed, and at the same time admired Suming. The three of them also had their own thoughts, and they were rushing to the front. However, the speed of the energy tide is not slow, and it is also closely chasing. Along the way, all the dark stars were also instantly annihilated under this tide of energy. However, although the speed of this energy tide is fast, as time passes, the speed of the energy tide has finally slowed down. The three of them also slowly opened the distance. After noticing this phenomenon, the three of them were also much relieved. The three of them are gone, and their mission is also completed, stopping the harassment of the Dark Army. For Suming's side, the battle had just begun. Now at the center of the explosion, all is a void turbulence. Fragmented space debris is also everywhere. At the center of the explosion, the original sarcophagus disappeared, replaced by a gentleman in a black dress. The gentleman wears a hat, a well-cut tuxedo, a stick in his hand, and a peaceful face, as if he were a saint with compassion. Of course, there is no need to remind that there is no one else who can appear here at this time period except Dormammu. For this, the Ancient One is not surprising. However, for Suming, this scene simply made his worldview suffer a violent shock. Dormammu turned out to be a gentleman? In Suming's mind, it was all about this question. He is now frightened by Dormammu, and the whole person is not good. You know, in the movie, that look, open mouth to rule the earth, but also kill people at every turn, the king of the dark dimension, the existence of the Heavenly Father level combat power, and the Dormammu who got the scepter of the life cord is very ugly. The whole person is a big black man, not a human at all. As a result, hitting in front of the eyes, Dormammu jumped out and said that he was a gentleman. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that this product was personally typed by Suming, who told him that this was Dormammu, he wouldn't believe it. However, he turned his eyes and thought, in Japanese, the meaning of gentleman is not perverted. Thinking of this, Suming seemed to understand something. It turned out to be an old gentleman. However, he also thought about this, and after deserting slightly, he also immediately returned to his body and mind. And the other side, Dormammu was forcibly invited out, and it stands to reason that he should be extreme. The correct script should be, this goods come out, just a big monster, and then shout something I'm going to kill you, dare to destroy my good deeds. Such words, and then embarrassed into anger, directly throw big moves. However, since the script was wrong, it seems that Mew has not started playing according to the original script. I saw that after Dormammu saw them, he was not anxious at all, nor panicked at all, and there was not the slightest anger in his eyes, as if an ordinary gentleman had woken up, with a smile on his face, like a spring breeze. And he looked like this, and Ling Xian also looked solemn. She couldn't imagine it now. This Dormammu didn't feel a little flustered when he saw them? Is this fearlessness or bluffing? Ling Xian is now a little tangled. After all, the current Dormammu is too weird. She couldn't feel the slightest breath, as if this guy had never existed. However, her intuition told her that the guy was there, and it was not an illusion. That's what aroused his alarm. If she couldn't feel Dormammu's words, then they would be in danger. In other words, this Dormammu should be on the same level as the founding god. Thinking of this, Ling Xian couldn't help but feel a headache, even though she had the last psychological preparations. But when this kind of thing happened, she felt that she really thought too much. And she is very cautious. Little Loli swallowing sister performance is more direct. I saw her with wide eyes and a deep curiosity on her face, looking at Dormammu with a curious baby. Sensing his gaze, Dormammu on the other side suddenly spoke, and asked him with a gentle face. What's wrong, little one, do I have flowers on my face? Suddenly hearing his question, several people were slightly startled. Especially Suming. However, now that he has given up treatment, God knows what kind of things will happen to this broken Dormammu. He didn't want to care about it at all, of course, the main thing was that he couldn't manage it either. On the other side, little Loli heard Dormammu's question, and her little face was still a little surprised. However, in an instant, it turned into a happy color. Looking at Dormammu, who had a gentle smile, she hesitated, and then asked, So, are you Dormammu? Yes, otherwise, who am I? Didn't you come to me? Why don't you even know me? Dormammu's kind smile was still the same, and he answered little Lori's question softly. Hearing this answer, little Lori was even more surprised. I couldn't help but continue to ask in a hurry. No, aren't you a monster? Hearing her words, Dormammu was not angry at all, but smiled slightly, shook his head and said softly, Monster? Everything is appearance, it is false, just like you, what I am is up to you. At this moment, Dormammu was like a philosopher, and every word contained a huge truth, and several people were stunned when they listened. Suming is like this, let alone little Loli. Her face was completely dazed, but there was one sentence she understood, and she couldn't help but continue to ask. You say, you're just like us, have you reached my father's level? After little Loli asked this question, Suming and the others stared at Dormammu closely, wanting to hear Dormammu's own answer. And Dormammu didn't seem to have the slightest defense, nor did he care that this issue was so sensitive, let alone hide it, but said it very loudly. Yes, my current strength should be similar to those founding gods. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. After little Loli asked this question, Suming and the others stared at Dormammu closely, wanting to hear Dormammu's own answer. And Dormammu didn't seem to have the slightest defense, nor did he care that this issue was so sensitive, let alone hide it, but said it very loudly. Yes, my current strength should be similar to those founding gods. Dormammu's tone was very nonchalant, as if we were usually lamenting the good weather today. However, this flat tone in everyone's mind, like a heaven-shaking sound, made several people silent. Especially Ling Xian. At the beginning, she had some guesses that Dormammu should have entered the level of the founding god in one step. However, although there is a lot of evidence, it is all her speculation. Moreover, she still had a trace of luck in her heart. However, now this sentence can be regarded as completely destroying his fluke. Now she only has a bitter smile and helplessness. She was the most aware of the horrors of the founding god's level. After all, although the little loli has the same identity as her, the little loli is a subgod level of half a wild range. And she had spent a lot of eternity with her father, and she knew the horrors of that level. That's really a thought to live and a thought to die. Even the entire universe is not a big deal in the eyes of that level. That kind of existence can completely restart the universe and restart the timeline of the universe. It's so overbearing. Of course, this level of existence is also constrained by the life court, and will not shoot at will, let alone restart the timeline at will. After all, for them, the prosperity and balance of the universe is what they want, and nothing else. Therefore, in general, the existence of the level of the creation god is generally hung up every day, basically not asking about the world, so that the universe basically has no major affairs. But now there is a variable like Dormammu. Creation god level existences want to destroy the earth, it is simply a matter of minutes, and they feel a little troubled now. Of course, it is not only Ling Xian who is serious about Dormammu's strength, but also Gu Yi. As an opponent who has been fighting against Dormammu for many years, Gu Yi is naturally familiar with everything about Dormammu. Originally, the two heavenly fathers can still be safe with each other, don't come and invade, I won't trouble you. However, I didn't expect that Dormammu directly made a big jump and instantly rose from the heavenly father level to the creation god level. This made him a little uncomfortable. This level directly breaks their original face, even if there are so many of them, there is no way. And for Suming, it was a headache now. Perhaps their ability to create gods was not clear enough, but Suming had seen it in a real way. Obtained the level of the Infinity Gauntlet, people snapped their fingers, and half of the entire universe was destroyed. Therefore, even if he prevented Thanos from gathering infinite gluttony, Providence immediately arranged a Dormammu of the same level? At this moment, how did Suming feel as if he was being targeted? However, now is not the time to think about these questions. If the creator god level is there, then they will be in trouble. They are worried and afraid here, but for little Lori, she does not feel too afraid, but is like a little girl, with little stars shining in her eyes, and said with a pleading look, "Uncle, since you are so powerful, can you not invade the earth?" Hearing that little Loli was ready to fool through, several people also secretly had some thoughts. After all, the current Dormammu is at the level of the creation god, I believe he can't look at this earth. Thinking of this, everyone was also slightly excited, and they stared at Dormammu in unison. And Dormammu was slightly startled when he heard little Loli say this, and then he was silent there. He also seemed to be thinking about the possibility of little Lori's proposal. In this way, Dormammu sat there, bowing his head and pondering, and a little momentum slowly diffused out. And Suming and the others were also nervously waiting outside, waiting for the final result. It took half an hour. Dormammu seemed to have thought of something and regained his head. Seeing him like this, everyone immediately became nervous. At the same time, the power in his hand is slowly condensing, as if he is about to start fighting if he doesn't agree with each other. Even the little Loli has changed her cute image, her little face is full of seriousness, and the streamer in her hand turns, which is also a look like if you don't agree, I will hit you. Seeing everyone like this, Dormammu was not annoyed at all, but with an inexplicable look, he glanced at them gently, and finally stopped at Suming. At this moment, Suming seemed to be targeted by a fierce beast, and even his breathing couldn't help but stop, and the creepy feeling made him very uncomfortable. And after Dormammu saw Suming, his face also showed a little puzzlement. It was as if there was something on Suming that he couldn't see through. For a while, the scene was also dead silent. Ling Xian looked at this scene, and his eyes also showed an extremely anxious look. If he hadn't had some scruples now, she would have rushed over. In this way, the tense gaze lasted for about 3 minutes. A gentle smile suddenly appeared on Dormammu's face, like a kind old man. At the same time, the pressure on Suming's body also dissipated suddenly, without a hint of sign. At this time, he took advantage of this time to adjust his state and strive to deal with sudden battles at any time. Just when everyone was extremely nervous, Dormammu finally spoke. His tone was as soft as ever. The little one is right, I am now a creation god, I can't see the earth anymore, and I will also start to maintain the balance of the universe. Hearing this, everyone's nervous mood suddenly relaxed, and the solidified atmosphere suddenly became active. For a while, everyone's faces couldn't help but smile. Even Furuiki, who was an opponent with Dormammu, smiled gently. She is not the kind of fool who clamors all day to expel darkness. Although you also came out of the earth, you can still go to the earth to see. After so many years, the earth has changed very terrifyingly. I believe you will be interesting, and you will definitely find your own fun. Hearing her words, Dormammu was a little moved. Before he became Dormammu, he was also a human mage, and also a mage of earth. After inadvertently tuning into the dark dimension, he became the current Dormammu. It's just that he is from earth. However, at that time, he did not know how many years ago, and what the earth was like now, he did not know, at most from the mouth of his slave Cassius. However, in Cassius's mouth, the earth is now completely depraved and needs to be returned to his arms and cleansed again. This is also the reason why he chose to devour the earth. However, seeing Suming's others, he also knew that Cassius was completely deceiving him. The purpose was to let him rule the earth, and then they could act as a blessing. Therefore, returning to his hometown is still a little bit of expectation for him. He was pondering, and Suming and the others did not bother, giving him enough time. That's it. Dormammu sat in the void, contemplating on crutches for nearly 3 minutes. Only then did he raise his head and say to the crowd, "Then I'll go to the earth to see. I don't know what this planet looks like now." Dormammu's tone was very sincere, but also with a touch of longing. After hearing this, everyone sighed slightly. "But, uncle, do you want to change your name?" "Dormammu, why does that sound weird?" Little Lori was not afraid at all, and said directly to Dormammu, "Oh, weird?" Dormammu was a little surprised. "Yes, it feels awkward, and it doesn't look like a person's name." Little Loli was childlike and unreservedly said what she thought. Dormammu wasn't angry, though. Now his personality is simply good, as if he is safe and will not be angry. After pondering for a while, he also asked the little Loli with a curious look, "So, what do you say should be changed?" Little Lori raised this question. She must have her own answer in her mind, and in the face of Dormammu's question, she also immediately answered the question. "Charles, I think Char fits you." Charles. Hearing this, Dormammu did not say, looked down and thought, carefully savored the meaning of the name, and wanted to see how he was very much himself from time to time. A moment later, Dormammu finally raised his head and looked at several people with a smile. "Well, starting today, I'm here." "Yes, Charles Tree." The first to react was the little Loli, who directly sent cheers. Listening to her voice, Suming and several people are also very happy in their hearts. Only if Charles chooses to integrate into the earth, then Suming believes that this environment of the earth will definitely bring Charles very unforgettable memories. At this time, Charles's time bomb is solved. Since Uncle Charles has already decided, let's go back to earth first. Suming also ended the conversation in time, and then explained softly, "Well, that's what I thought." Charles did not refuse the offer either. Hearing him say this, everyone also nodded in unison. "Then let's go." Although Charles seems to be kinder, he does not procrastinate at all, and his mind moves. Everyone only felt that the heavens and the earth had changed for a while, as if the world had turned upside down. For a while, even Ling Xian was a little dizzy, as if he was doing a roller coaster. Ling Xian is like this, let alone Suming. At this moment, he seemed to have turned hundreds of circles in place, and the whole person was a little unstable. However, after a while, he also calmed down quickly. After clearing his thoughts, he fixed his eyes, only to find that they had now left the center of the battlefield and arrived at the edge of the dark dimension. Moreover, he also saw Tony and Captain Marvel. This moment, but he was surprised. You know, from here to the center of their battle, there is a dimensional distance, and under this distance, even if they use the teleportation channel, they have to use it 4 times to reach. However, Charles's method directly used the ability of the Great Shift to move all of them. Not only did the distance shock him, but there was also no opportunity and time for them to resist, and they appeared here in an instant. In addition to him, Ling Xian also immediately discovered this fact. After discovering this fact, she was more thankful than shocked. She was now somewhat glad that she did not go to war with Charles. After all, this ability is that she can't do it. She can easily appear anywhere in the universe. This ability can only be done at their father's level, and even among the creation gods, those who can do this step are gifted existences. And this ability is also very strong. If they had gone to war just now, even Charles would have lost because he was not too powerful. However, even if he loses, there is no way they can kill Charles. After all, Charles, who had this ability, wanted to retreat. It was too simple, and they couldn't do anything. Of course, compared to them, Captain Marvel's shock is more intense. From the time Suming appeared to the end, he was not given the slightest reaction time. Without any warning, Suming and several of them appeared in front of her, and it felt as if Suming and the others originally existed in this place, but they didn't see it. And this feeling makes Captain Marvel very bad. After all, some people appear next to you in an instant without you noticing. No matter how you look at it, it is a potential threat. However, now she didn't care about this matter first, but stared at the big tree that suddenly appeared. When Suming entered, there were 4 of them. But how did it become a 5-person squad when it came out now? Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. Suddenly approached by several people, still without a trace of notice, Captain Marvel was naturally extremely shocked. However, now she didn't care about this matter first, but stared at the big tree that suddenly appeared. When Suming entered, there were 4 of them. But how did it become a 5-person squad when it came out now? And the extra old gentleman naturally received great attention. And the first time she saw Charles, her intuition told her that this person was very dangerous. Even, just by looking at this old man, she felt that feeling like a man's back. And at this time, Captain Marvel was also very curious, who is this person, and what is the relationship with Suming? Moreover, from the current point of view, she should not be an enemy, looking at that kind appearance, or maybe a friend. In an instant, she connected with the aftermath of the battle ahead and came to a startling conclusion. This person won't be the father of Ling Xian and star-devouring Mei, right? Captain Marvel also knew the identities of Swallowing Sister and Ling Xian, and naturally she also knew what level of existence their father was. Moreover, this level of battle, if parents are notified to help, it is not impossible. Therefore, Captain Marvel only opened his mind at this time. However, when she thought of Charles's identity, her whole person couldn't help but get nervous. After all, in front of her was a creation god who thought of destroying the existence of the universe. And Captain Marvel already had some speculation, but for Thor and Tony, it was still suspicious. No way, this Charles looks now, if you give him a pipe, they will definitely think that this is in cos Sherlock Holmes. Seeing this, Tony and the two were confused. Who is he? And where did he come from? How did they meet? In an instant, several questions appeared in their minds. For this moment, the two were also confused. Without passing, apparently at this time, everyone did not have the mind to explain to them. However, for this moment, they did not say, but Charles took the lead in saying, "You are all very good, and there are still a few people who can be looked up to." Hearing this, Thor and Tony were speechless for a while. Who is this? It looks like a drag. Thor looked a little dazed, but Tony was very clever, and directly through short-range wireless communication, quietly asked Suming, "Who is he? It looks very powerful, and it is worth him to know?" Hearing this question, Suming did not hide it, but replied softly, "What? He's Dormammu." Suddenly hearing this reply, Jun Nike was shocked without the slightest surprise, and directly exclaimed loudly, "Dormammu. You know, this name is thunderous as the boss they are facing. Only, isn't Dormammu going to remove the elephant? And now what's the situation?" Now at this moment, Tony's mind is already confused. And although they are in a vacuum, they all have miniature radios in their ears. Radio, in turn, is the default teaming band. And Tony's voice naturally reached everyone's ears through the radio. At this moment, I don't know, Tony, Thor, and Captain Marvel are more confused. Like Tony, they saw that this old man had no way to connect this pleasant-looking old man with Dormammu, who did everything evil to devour the earth. Moreover, they are also confused now. What do these people mean? Don't fight anymore? And what about the aftermath of the battle just now? What is the situation now? What should we do? In an instant, countless questions kept rising in the hearts of several people. And Dormammu also seemed to know the questions of several people, and after smiling slightly, he also explained to several people, "Yes, I'm Dormammu, but now I've changed my name to Charles." After seeing him admit, Tony, Thor, and Captain Marvel's expressions completely froze, and their serious expressions seemed to be about to go to war at any time. Especially Thor and Captain Marvel. The electric light around Thor is constantly flickering, and he can transform into Thor at any time. And Captain Marvel was even more exaggerated, the double star form directly erupted, and the brilliant brilliance enveloped her entire body. In that way, it is like starting a fight without saying a word. Seeing the appearance of several people, Suming was not surprised at all. After all, this is not much different from when they first met Dormammu. However, although he was not surprised at all, he also knew that he should stand up and explain the matter clearly. Therefore, after sorting out his thoughts, he immediately explained to several people. The current Uncle Charles has been promoted to the Genesis God level, and he no longer needs to devour the earth, but as a person who came out of the earth, the current uncle still misses the life of the earth very much. Suming's explanation is still quite ingenious. It not only points out Charles's current strength, but also subtly tells a few people that you should still converge and don't make the atmosphere so embarrassing. After all, if you really fight, you may really not be able to fight. Secondly, it is to explain the reason and purpose of Dormammu's appearance here, and tell several people, don't get excited. And hearing his explanation, several people showed confusion in their eyes. After all, this news was so exciting that they couldn't help but say that they didn't understand the operation of the big guy at all. However, when they saw that the others did not object, and then they investigated the possibility that Dormammu had brought them all under control, they reluctantly accepted this fact. It's just that when they say the wrong style of painting Dormammu, no, when they should be called Charles now, their confidence is slightly greater. After all, the harmless appearance of Charles now is too deceptive. After figuring out this fact, the atmosphere here suddenly eased a lot. After seeing that the atmosphere eased, Suming's hearts were also a lot relaxed. Although the possibility is very small, he is really afraid that these people will directly start fighting, not listening to the explanation, angering Dormammu, and directly coming to a big battle. However, the situation has been moving in the direction he planned. However, at this time, Captain Marvel suddenly asked a question. What about the aftermath of that battle just now? Although the possibility is very small, he is really afraid that these people will directly start fighting, not listening to the explanation, angering Dormammu, and directly coming to a big battle. However, the situation has been moving in the direction he planned. However, at this time, Captain Marvel suddenly asked a question. What about the aftermath of that battle just now? Since Charles didn't want to devour the earth, how could such a powerful battle aftermath erupt? Could it be that it wasn't Charles who fought them, but someone else? At this moment, Captain Marvel also wanted to know very much who caused the aftermath of the battle. Hearing this, several people smiled slightly, and then explained slightly. It's just that we had a chat with Charles, and we also want to know how powerful the Genesis God level combat power is, and we also want to know how much the gap is. Hearing Ling Xian's words, Captain Marvel was even more shocked. Just a fight, can cause such a big battle fluctuation? If you fight to the death, will the entire dark dimension be torn apart? At this time, Captain Marvel couldn't help but glance up at a few people again. After everyone was done, there was no delay. After Xiao Yi built the channel, everyone also left the dark dimension from the passage. After leaving the dark dimension, they came out of the passage and came to the Stark Tower. It's already dusk. However, at this time, they did see a few people, Fury and Natasha. The two of them had not left since Suming and they left the Earth, and they wanted to stay here, trying to know the result of the battle as soon as possible. After seeing everyone appear, the two of them also breathed a sigh of relief in unison, and the stone in their hearts was finally put down. God knows how powerful their ordeal was during this time. After all, this is a battle that they can't help with, they can't say the course of the battle, and they don't know what the situation is now. They were in the edifice, and they had no choice but to pray to the legendary God to bless the Earth. After all, this level of battle, they are completely inaccessible. Moreover, what worries them the most is that this battle is still very important. The slightest mistake is that the entire Earth will be GG. Therefore, in the time when Suming had no news, Natasha and Furina were restless. And at this time, seeing that everyone walked out of the passage very easily, there was no trace of fatigue after the battle. Fury relaxed at the same time, but also a little. Although he hadn't had time to ask, he could see from Suming that their purpose should have been achieved, at least the Earth was saved. Otherwise, they wouldn't be laughing so happily. However, it is precisely because of this that Fu Changhe doubts. After all, this kind of demeanor and spirit makes people completely unable to relate to such things as experiencing a vicious battle and then returning to cultivation, but it gives people the feeling that they should be traveling and calmly going to the blue. With this doubt, he also wanted to inquire thoroughly. However, just as he was about to ask, the afterglow from the corner of his eye finally noticed a trace of abnormality. An extra, unidentified person. A man dressed like an old gentleman who was very formal. And at this moment, Natasha also found out. However, the two did not open their minds like Captain Marvel, but they were very confused, and they were confused about Charles. And Suming also noticed the doubts of the two at the first time, and did not hide it, but introduced Charles to the two, and said the fact that the Earth had been saved. And when Natasha and Fury heard the narration of several people, their faces were also very strange. He now had absolutely no idea how to describe his inner thoughts. Uncanny? Amaze? Mysterious? Groove? Anyway, this thing sounds very absurd to them at first. After all, a world-class big boss is suddenly going to be good now? This kind of story, even in the novel, dares not write so, but now it is happening in front of them. And at this moment, for Fury, things are so bizarre. However, seeing Charles, that is, Dormammu, the expressions of the two also changed. Well, although the two are ordinary people, they are not ordinary people, and even if they are weird about this news, they do not make a fuss, but silently think about the changes inside. For a while, Fury seemed to accept this fact. I saw him, slowly exhaled, and then looked at Charles with a one-eyed look, and his tone was very solemn. First of all, thank you very much to Mr. Charles for cancelling his plans. Secondly, as the director of SHIELD, I also very much welcome Mr. Charles to settle on Earth. Finally, I hope that Mr. Charles can take into account the reality of the Earth, be able to live safely on the Earth, and if there is trouble, you can contact us at any time. Fury's tone was very formal, and it could be seen that he was very attentive to Charles. However, thinking about the strength of this big guy, he also has to be sad, otherwise, it will be a time bomb if he can't get it right. For this, everyone is not surprised. However, for Natasha, it was a bit of a surprise. After all, Fury said this, which is equivalent to taking the entire SHIELD as Charles's backing. It can even be said that no matter what trouble Charles makes, as long as it is not too big, SHIELD will wipe his ass. However, after she thought of Charles's identity, she was relieved. Well, I think so too. Charles also nodded in agreement. Seeing Charles's unexpected good speech, Fury and several people put their minds down. Then Uncle Charles will be handed over to you. Suming also immediately instructed Fury. Now Charles should be the best choice to hand over to Fury. After all, the identity, as well as the placement, need them to shoot. Okay. Fury looked at the kind Charles and nodded cautiously. After that, he did not delay, went directly over, saluted Charles, and then said, Mr. Charles, please come with us. Trouble. After Charles nodded, he walked downstairs with his crutches. Fury did not delay, went directly over, saluted Charles, and then said, Mr. Charles, please come with us. Trouble. After Charles nodded, he walked downstairs with his crutches. And at this time, Fury and Natasha followed closely after greeting several people. Charles is a big guy, but he can't have an accident. After the three left, Suming looked at everyone and had a headache. What, now that everything is settled, don't you have anything to be busy with? His meaning is very clear, that is, now that the matter is settled, should you go back to each house and find your own mother? Just don't stay here, he doesn't have any kung fu entertainment anyway. Thor also understood what he meant at the first time and reacted immediately. There is still something to do in the Immortal Palace, I'll go back first. After speaking, Thor also immediately flew towards the distance. He wants to go to the Immortal Palace and summon the Rainbow Bridge, but Stark Mansion is definitely not good, so he needs to fly farther, at least to the suburbs. Thor was gone, crisply and neatly. However, what made him speechless was that the remaining Captain Marvel, Ling Xian, and little Loli didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Just when Suming was a little confused, Pepper finally appeared from behind the door, and after holding the cooing Pepper, he also cried with joy after seeing a few people. No one knew the pressure she was under during this time. If Pepper hadn't been preparing this mentally since she met and accepted Tony, she would probably have collapsed long ago. And after seeing Pepper, Tony was also heartbroken, directly went over and hugged her, and then couldn't help comforting. This wave of dog food, Suming was a little caught off guard, but he also extinguished his idea of picking people. After that, several people also naturally settled in Stark Building. Thanks to the fact that there are more rooms in Stark Mansion, and Tony, a rich man, is there, a few people can lie down. For several people, living in Stark Mansion is also the most ideal place for them. Needless to say, now she didn't even find herself. If there was nothing to do all day, the thing she wanted most was to stay with Suming. Of course, although she is not so clingy now, living in Stark Mansion is also her best removal. And for the reason why the little Loli chose here, it is even simpler. Just because Tony has money, he can let her fight the tooth sacrifice. No matter how bad it is, Stark Tower also has a huge energy supply reactor. As for Captain Marvel, she chose this place to know more about Suming. To be honest, Suming was like a mystery, constantly attracting ropes. Therefore, she chose to stay here, just to see what kind of demon Suming was, and even to the extent that she couldn't look back on it. Secondly, it's awkward to say. The last time she came to Earth, Fury was a little shrimp at that time, and the time was too long. Many things, she did not know, did not have a place to live. Therefore, choosing this place is also a very ideal place to live. Of course, for this, Suming did not stop it now. After solving the danger of Dormammu, he did not immediately return to the laboratory, but was invited by Ling Xian to have a good time all over the United States. This trip to the United States was a complete relaxation for him. Ever since he crossed over, Suming had been in a state of nervous tension. After all, at that time, when he knew about the Marvel Universe here, he almost cried. Every day I think about how to increase my strength, or how to get out of the hands of Thanos and his old man, where there is time to relax. After that, even if he solved the New York invasion, he was more urgent at that good time, just to prepare for the later time. So, this is the first time such carefree play. After all, the current Earth is guarded by a creation god several times the existence, and he is not panicked at all now. After traveling all the way, his relationship with Ling Xian is getting better, and from time to time he adds the gags of little Loli, but it is more and more like playing with his daughter as a little couple. Of course, during the tour, Suming was easy to tolerate. However, even so, he with a unique temperament, and the extremely beautiful Ling Xian, and the little Loli of the eccentric elf, the three have attracted a lot of attention. There is even their family on the internet, and they are all hot. However, after transferring this America, Suming is also ready to start studying his own science and technology. On this day, Suming said goodbye to a few people and teleported directly to the moon. The factories on the moon are not stopped, and the mechanical army is getting bigger and bigger. Just over a month. His mechanical legion has already taken shape, and during this period, Xiaoi is still in charge, and a large part of his resources are devoted to the production of weapons, otherwise his mechanical legion will be even more terrifying. And he came back, the purpose was very clear. It's about finishing the production of the Doom. When he traveled, Xiao Yi had already built the general structure of the destroyer, and all that remained was to install the core components. For example, the drive device, the space jump device, the energy engine, the shield, the communicator, the positioning device, everything needs to be used by him. Then, he also removed the cosmic cube from the mecha as an auxiliary function for the spaceship's space jump energy and peacetime engine. After all, now that there is no Genesis God-level battle, the energy module is enough. And after he finished the design drawing, he gave the design drawing to Xiaoi and let him manufacture it according to the design drawing. Then, he took out the life court scepter in the space bracelet. Looking at the unpretentious iron bar in his hand, Suming couldn't help but sigh. I really didn't see that this iron rod turned out to be the scepter of the court of life. After thinking about it, he sighed again. However, this is also fate. This sentence is not his nonsense. After all, this scepter has not been in Kalmoda's hands for 10 years or 3 years. However, Karmoda did not find the special feature of this scepter, and then turned to Dormammu, and Dormammu saw the special feature of the scepter at a glance. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Fila No. After all, this scepter has not been in Kalmoda's hands for 10 years or 3 years. However, Karmoda did not find the special feature of this scepter, and then turned to Dormammu, and Dormammu saw the special feature of the scepter at a glance. This has to be said, this is fate. Without that life, without that strength, even if the treasure is placed in front of your eyes, you don't know. It's just that when Suming thought so, he couldn't help but knock around with the stick in his hand. Then, in despair, he discovered that there was nothing special about anything other than the sound of metal clashing. However, there is nothing special about me looking at a stick. After muttering softly, he couldn't help but pull the iron bar closer to take a look. After getting closer, Suming found that the print-like patterns on this iron rod were really good looking. It is dense, but it does not look like it was carved artificially, but rather like it is naturally formed. Moreover, the iron bar is also a natural color, without any traces of artificial carving. After seeing this scene, Suming finally nodded with satisfaction. He can only see these anomalies now. However, he was also very satisfied with this, and he believed that even if he did not know the power of this iron rod now, he should know the ability of this iron rod based on the anomaly he found. Well, at least it won't be like Karmodo, who picked up sesame seeds and lost watermelons. However, after seeing these extraordinary, he did not delay the effort, but directly threw things to Xiaoai. Xiaoai, help me test it and see what is so powerful about this thing. Yes, brother. Xiao Yi also manifested immediately. The soul gem on the jade-like forehead also bloomed brightly. After that, the golden light on the mind gem also instantly shrouded the scepter. Time. The originally ordinary scepter finally revealed a trace of its extraordinary. The moment when the golden light shrouded, the textures on the original scepter were also shining brightly, and the streamers were constantly circulating on the scepter. For a time, a distant and powerful aura diffused above the scepter. At this moment, Suming felt a great terror. It was as if this scepter was about to be transformed from an ordinary iron rod into a beast that chose to eat people. However, just as Suming was about to let Xiao Yi stop, he found that the Dao momentum was just like that, and there was no intention of increasing at all. After thinking of this, Suming also breathed a sigh. The streamers turn, and the golden light is also brilliant. At this time, the laboratory is also bright. However, at this time, Suming did find some problems, that is, Xiao Yi seemed to have some difficulty exploring this more scepter. As the golden light on Xiao Yi's forehead grew, Xiao Yi's body did become more and more illusory, as if it was about to dissipate at any time. Seeing this, Suming was a little panicked, and couldn't help shouting at Xiao Yi urgently. Xiaoai, if it doesn't work, forget it, I'll just say it casually. At this moment, Suming felt a little remorseful. After all, he got a little carried away, although this iron rod is usually useless. But, after all, it is the scepter of the court of life. Something of that level is not something he can spy on now. You know, this scepter can't even be handled by Dormammu's, let alone him. For a while, Suming's heart was also self-blame and shame. However, Xiao Yi didn't seem to hear Suming's words, and his little face was full of determination, as if he was connected with the rod of the life court, and he looked like he was dying endlessly. And Suming's worries in his heart that saw this scene became even more violent. In this case, he could not use his authority to forcibly order Xiaoai. After all, Xiao Yike is his sister now, she has her own ideas and thinking, and this kind of forced command means, he will never do. Secondly, this state is too weird now, and he doesn't know if forcibly ordering Xiaoai to stop exploring will cause any bad consequences. Therefore, he was only so anxiously observing. However, what reassured him was that although Xiao Yi's body had become more and more faint, it seemed to be about to disappear. However, Xiao Yi's eyes became brighter, as if there was some unexpected surprise. After discovering this, Suming was not too anxious, and waited so quietly. He believes in Xiaoai, and believes that Xiaoai will definitely not do things that he is not sure of. In this way, in Suming's anxious mood, about 10 minutes passed. 10 minutes later, the golden light on Xiao Yi's forehead suddenly disappeared. At the same time, the brilliance of the scepter at this moment also disappeared, and it became that ordinary iron bar again. Everything, as if nothing had happened, everything that appeared just now was an illusion. If you ignore Xiaoai, who is now translucent. Xiaoai, you don't need to be so impatient at all. Looking at the translucent Xiaoai, Suming also felt a little guilty in his heart, and couldn't help but gently stroke his hair with his hand. This is Xiaoai's favorite pose. However, Suming's big hand did not touch anything this time, as if the cute Xiaoai in front of him was a phantom. And this discovery made Suming couldn't help but be surprised. You know, the touch of Xiao Yike before is more and more real, even no different from real people. However, it has now returned to the pre-liberation period, and it is not even as good as at the beginning. After realizing this, Suming was also moved and ashamed in his heart. Xiaoai, you are like this. At this moment, he didn't even know what to say. However, Xiao Yi's delicate little face is also full of Xiao Yi. At this moment, she still closed her eyes, as before, smiling and enjoying Suming's love. And just like that, it lasted for a while. A minute later, Xiao Yi opened his star-like eyes and smiled at Suming. Brother, don't worry at all, it's okay, I just exerted too much force, just wait for me to rest. With the mind gem, I can recover in less than an hour, and not only can recover, but also go further and be more solidified. Xiao Yi's tone was very soft, as if he was whispering to Suming. Hearing her say this, Suming finally let go of his heart. Brother, don't worry at all, just wait for me to rest. With the mind gem I can not only recover, but also go further and be more solidified. Xiao Yi's tone was very soft, as if he was whispering to Suming. Hearing her say this, Suming finally let go of his heart. He also saw that the golden soul gem on Xiao Yi's forehead was still shining. Although, this light is not as bright as it started, and it is even a little dim. However, as these rays of light kept flickering, Xiao Yi's body also quickly solidified at a speed visible to the naked eye. After seeing this scene, a relaxed smile appeared on Suming's face. However, despite this, he still instructed Xiao Yi very seriously. Xiaoai, you can't do this in the future. You have your own plans, your own ideas, and I won't stop you, but in this case, you must at least tell me, otherwise I will be angry. Suming's tone was very serious, and even the last few sentences were already a trace of anger. And Xiaoai, who knew that he had made a mistake, also nodded with some fear. It was the first time she saw Suming angry, and for a while, in addition to being a little afraid, there was a deep curiosity hidden in her eyes. And then, when he saw that Suming still wanted to say a few words, Xiao Yi also immediately pounced and threw himself directly into his arms. The two white and tender calves tightly wrapped around Suming, and then the whole person hung around Suming's neck like this. Immediately afterwards, Xiao Yi made his own coquettishness. Okay, brother, Xiao, I promised you that I won't make you angry again in the future, and I will definitely ask for your consent first. Xiao Yi's tone is very sweet, and the coquettish technique is also pure and green, not stiff at all. And Suming, who was coquettish by Xiao Yi, was also very helpless in the face of trying to get through the level at this moment. Although no, Xiaoai's thoughts. However, when this place is Suming's dead cave, he can't resist the cute little Yaimen mixed hair. Therefore, after insisting, Suming was also worthy of defeat, and couldn't help but say to Xiaoai, Okay, your neck is about to be broken by you, I don't blame you. Well, I know that my brother loves Xiaoai the most. Hearing his words, Xiao Yi was also extremely excited, and did not hesitate to take a sip at Suming, and then jumped down with excitement. Feeling the familiar and real touch, Suming was also happy. Xiao Yi is right, now Xiao Yi has completely changed from virtual to real, and this recovery speed is also amazing. In such a little time, Xiao Yi's body has recovered to its previous peak. Moreover, at this time, the soul gem on Xiao Yi's forehead was still shining, but the speed and brightness of the flash were much weaker. However, Suming didn't care at all. After all, this does not just mean that Xiaoai chose this time, not Xiaoai suffered losses, but also a blessing in disguise. Further, after thinking of this, the smile on Suming's face became more and more obvious. At this time, he wanted to probe Xiaoai's bright eyes, so he couldn't help but ask Xiaoai, who was still happy. Xiaoai, did you discover anything just now? Hearing this, Xiao Yi, who was running around happily, also stopped instantly, and then quickly returned to Suming's side. Then, a pair of bright eyes stared at Suming, and there was a bright color on his small face. Brother, I found that the print on this burning stick is not a print, but a text. Text. Hearing this, Suming was a little shocked. He is a little confused now. The pattern on this is completely irregular, as if it is a naturally formed pattern. How can it be a text? Perhaps sensing his doubts, Xiao Yi also immediately explained. Brother, these words are very hidden, and they all use secret codes, which require some research and attempts to unravel. Cipher code. Hearing Xiao Yi's explanation, Suming was slightly relieved without this. He knows the code. This is like a secret language, only by knowing his specific arrangement can he reply to the desired information. And this kind of code is even more so, it is completely disordered, and it is not surprising that he can't see it. Xiaoai, show these secret codes. Yes, brother. Xiao Yi smiled slightly and let the back little hand wave. In an instant, a giant projection appeared in front of them, and above the projection was the pattern on the scepter. On it, the pattern is like a crack, densely packed and completely disorderly arrangement. Brother, look good. After whispering a word, Xiao Yi waved his hand again. In an instant, countless grids appeared on top of the projection. There is a part of the pattern in each lattice. Then, something magical happened. Each grid began to be arranged from scratch under Xiaoai's command. For a while, there was chaos above the projection. 3 seconds later, all of this, all over, and things above the projection began to change dramatically. A row of text appeared before his eyes. And at this time, Xiaoai's voice sounded again. Brother, I tried the 530 billion trillion permutation combination, and successfully pushed this combination to the performance. Xiao Yi's tone was full of pride. And this he is also proud of. This amount of calculation, can be completed in such a short time is also Xiaoai. However, Suming did not praise Xiao Yi at this time, but stared at the text on the projection with a pair of eyes. He didn't know what the projected words meant. However, he recognized the words on the projection. Because, the text on the projection is exactly the same as the text on the Monument of Lifetime. And this staff is clearly known to be the scepter of the Cord of Life. In other words, the Atlantean civilization that disappeared from the Earth and the Cord of Life are inextricably linked. Perhaps, Atlantis was created by the Cord of Life. After all, at their level, although they cannot directly participate in the event, they can create some of their own representatives to replace their own walking. The best example is the infinite creation of the Celestial God group. After coming to this conclusion, he knew why the Monument of Lifetime would allow any life to evolve to the apex. At the level of the life court, although you can't directly participate in the incident, you can create some of your own representatives to replace your own walking. The best example is the infinite creation of the Celestial God group. After coming to this conclusion, he knew why the Monument of Lifetime would allow any life to evolve to the apex. After all, this thing can be said to be left by the Cord of Life, and it is not a fuss to evolve to the apex. However, Atlantis actually had some contact with the life court, which still surprised Suming. This can also explain why his scepter is on Earth. After all, Atlantis originally lived on Earth. After thinking about this, a question instantly appeared in his mind again. Since Atlantis was supported or created by the Court of Life, and even left this civilization with such big fellows as the Monument of Life and Time and the Scepter of the Court of Life, how did this civilization disappear from the Earth? This question is critical. You know, the civilization of Atlantis is very mysterious on Earth, and even many people are wondering whether this civilization has ever existed. But, now, it seems that this civilization did exist, and it was more brilliant than they thought. After all, according to the description of the Lifetime Monument, the strength of that Atlantis will be very terrifying, at least not weaker than the entire celestial god race. However, it is very strange that such a strong civilization has not been passed down, and even the traces left behind have almost disappeared. This kind of civilization, unless the 5 founding gods make a move, it is impossible to make a move against the trans civilization. However, the uncivilized nature of Atlantis was created by the Court of Life, and even the founding god should know about it, and would not risk offending the Court of Life to forcibly erase Atlantis. Therefore, a terrible conjecture would appear in Suming's mind. Perhaps, Atlantis was created by the Court of Life, and he personally terminated it, and there is also his shadow behind it. Apart from this idea, Suming now couldn't find a reason at all. However, this is also a conjecture of his. How to verify it is a matter for the future. However, after having this conjecture, he also became a little wary of these creation gods and higher beings. After all, in the eyes of such people, maintaining the balance of the universe is the greatest task. In contrast, the existence of Atlantis has already upset the balance of the universe, which has led to disaster. And now, Suming's existence, needless to say, has broken the original balance, and this trend will be more serious, and even finally noticed by those beings. So, he suddenly felt the pressure. After thinking about it, Suming also immediately asked, "Can the text on it be deciphered?" Hearing this question, Xiao Yi also nodded, and then quickly replied, "Brother, with the text comparison of the scepter, the deciphering progress of the Monument of Life and Time will be much faster." After hearing this news, he also smiled. "Well, Xiaoi, you will now decipher the words on the stone tablet and the scepter." "Okay, brother, 10 days at most." Xiaoi also immediately gave the time. After dealing with the scepter, Suming had put all his attention on the destroyer spaceship. The architecture of this spacecraft has been completed by Xiaoi. Even a lot of basic systems. For example, life-sustaining, artificial gravity, and protection, basic weapons and other systems have been installed by Xiaoi. Now, Suming is going to get on those big guys. At this time, the lunar base has also changed greatly, and it can fully meet the needs of the production of the destroyer and assemble it. After studying the design drawings, Suming began large-scale procurement. Dawn crystal, to gold, field stone, vibranium. A series of materials were exchanged by Suming, and one by one the systems were assembled by Suming according to the design drawings provided by the system. In particular, the space jump drive device using the cosmic cube is used. This thing, the materials needed in it are also extremely expensive. Well, the most core components required for this drive device have been replaced by the cosmic cube, otherwise, he will really bleed. Secondly, what are the high-concentration plasma cannons, ultra-long-range laser polymer cannons, CA2 ultra-long-distance combat UAVs, and a new generation of energy fusion engines. Everything was taken out by Suming and then installed on this destroyer. Not stingy at all, even Xiaoi knows that the mainframe is made of vibranium, which is not only extremely hard but also autonomously absorbs and rebounds various energies. After all, Suming's definition of the destroyer was his invincible car. Of course, now there is still a long way to go from the goal of the invincible car. However, the foundation must be laid well, and only strong components need to be replaced in the future. With this idea blessing, the destroyer is now also a luxury. Once the various materials are sold, it is possible to buy another living planet. In this way, with Suming's efforts at full speed, his destruction horn was also slowly taking shape. Inside the factory, the pitch-black destroyer quietly stopped on the ground, like a sleeping war beast, murderous and restrained, and at this time, you can only feel the deterrence that diffuses within it. However, once activated, even the spirit must be cautious before this battleship. The destroyer did not have those inexplicable colors, so the color of the current destroyer is still the black of the steel that leaves the factory. For this, Suming was also very satisfied. The overall black destroyer looks more solemn and more matching the name. Add a little red, it looks more bloody and killing. Looking at it silently, he still changed the color scheme. As soon as his voice fell, the nearby robotic arm began to stain. 10 seconds later, the new destroyer appeared. The current destroyer is still mainly black, but on the edge, it is dyed red, and this time, it feels as if this battleship has not been washed frequently after killing. In an instant, that fierce aura rushed straight in, making Suming's scalp feel a little numb. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share, this. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Seeing the huge thing on the projection, even the most calm old man was very emotional at this moment. Is this what that blue knight did? After a middle-aged man saw this scene, he couldn't help but whisper, This question does not need to be answered, but after a young man saw this scene, his eyes also showed a feverish gaze, and answered his question with emotion. It should be, in that place, who else can get it out except him? Last time I made a transport plane, I don't know what kind of monster I made this time. After seeing this scene, an old man couldn't help but sigh. It seems that it should be an interstellar battleship, but this battleship is also a little too big. Even so far, on the moon base, it seems that he is the only one, right? Isn't it a waste to build such a large battleship? Yes, such a large warship can hold tens of thousands of soldiers. Yes, if this battleship was given to us, wouldn't we be invincible in the United States? Yes, waste. For a while, seeing the people who saw the appearance of the destroyer, the old problems began to commit again. Looking at these things, some couldn't help but start fantasizing. Cough cough. For this kind of thought, a big man of the Ministry of Defense also hurriedly coughed twice, wanting to forcibly suppress everyone's thoughts. In fact, hearing his cough, everyone also woke up from their fantasies. Groove, what was I thinking about just now? You actually want to hit the attention of this blazing star? Oh my god, it's good that I woke up early, otherwise I'm afraid I would have to GG. Yes. At this moment, the minds of those who had been thinking carefully just now were completely extinguished, and at this moment, everyone once again remembered the fear of being dominated by Suming. There are two sides to the story. While many leaders here were still discussing the impact of the destroyer, Suming had already driven the destroyer to the vicinity of Mars. Now on Mars, there is also his base, but not as full as on the moon, as long as it is responsible for mining some mineral deposits. Mars also has its own moons, and there are two, and these two satellites are the target of Suming's trip. This time, Suming wanted to test the firepower of the destroyer. After choosing one of the satellites, he also ordered Xiaoai to test the firepower. Brother, I'm going to start. After Xiao Yi prompted, the command of the ship. For a time, hundreds of guns on the battleship also immediately appeared from the inside of the battleship, and then opened and charged in unison. At the same time, above the battleship, the main guns, several secondary guns are the same. At this moment, the destroyer finally showed its fangs. The momentum of the firepower destroyer was amazing, and even in the command room, he could feel the creepy feeling. And the next moment, all the naval guns were already recharged, just waiting for his order to start firing. Xiaoai, launch. Looking at the barren satellite in his field of vision, he also gave the order to launch without hesitation. The words did not fall. The guns burst into flames. All the artillery fire shot towards the earth not far away, and from a distance, it was as if hundreds of meteors were smashing towards the ground, and there was something beautiful in the trance. Of course, these beauties are accompanied by strong murderous intentions. The next moment, all the artillery fire fell on the ground. For a time, brilliant light, mushroom clouds rising into the sky, and endless dust filled Suming's field of vision. At this moment, it was as if the satellite in front of me was about to explode, extremely unstable. And I don't know if it's too close, even the destroyer can detect the escaping tide of energy. The aftermath of the explosion lasted for more than 10 minutes before it slowly subsided. 10 minutes later, the explosion scene also appeared in Suming's eyes. On the satellite, the originally flat ground rock has now changed greatly. Large and small deep pits were all over the place where Suming bombarded. These pits vary in size, but the smallest reaches a diameter of 10 meters, and a depth of 30 meters. And the deep pit bombarded by the main artillery is even more terrifying, with a diameter of 100 meters and a depth of more than 300 meters. Moreover, above the pit wall, the original earth and rock have been completely glazed due to high temperature and high pressure, and these glasses are also shimmering with colorful light under the light mask, which looks good in an instant. And after seeing all this, Suming was also very satisfied. With this level of firepower, the Doom Suming alone can support an interstellar battle. Suming's experimental weapon power was not hidden but swaggered and tested like this. After all, for now, he is fearless above the earth, and after those people see it, they will not raise any thoughts except psychological fear and rejoicing. And that's exactly what happened. When the high-level officials of many countries saw him firing 100 shots, those dangerous thoughts were also quickly extinguished by themselves. It's more about fear and rejoicing. The most direct manifestation is the high-level thinking in the United States. See those big, round bowls? Wrong. Crater, everyone is also rejoicing. Fortunately they're awakening early, otherwise, those shells are estimated to fall on them immediately. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but tremble in unison. After the fear, more people are rejoicing, glad that the earth has such a protective deity, so that they can live their lives with peace of mind, do not have to worry all day, and there will be no wormhole in the sky from time to time. After Suming's muscles were revealed this time, he once again stifled the caution that those national leaders should not have, and the effect was surprisingly good, and it is estimated that it can last at least a few years. It is not easy to insist on this for a few years. After all, Lao Lu said well, it is impossible to want human beings to remain rational for a long time. Therefore, Suming will show his muscles after a while. And after showing his muscles this time, he also began to divert his gaze. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share, and this time, Suming moved his gaze to the depths of the starry sky universe again. Now the earth is already solid. Sol, Gu Yi, Little Lori, Ling Xian, and Uncle Charles. Wait. In the face of this luxurious lineup, even if Thanos collects the Infinity Stones, he is completely fearless. On the contrary, the purple potato essence has to kneel down and sing Conquest. Unless you encounter a life court level existence, the comfort of the earth is completely worry-free. Of course, when encountering that level of existence, it is useless for him to stay here. Therefore, he no longer has to worry about the affairs of the earth. As it should be, he set his sights on the universe. After all, the universe is so big, he also wants to look everywhere. There are also many planets in the universe. At this moment, Suming didn't know what was crazy, and said directly to Xiaoai, "Okay, Xiaoai, let's go on a trip that says go." "Okay, brother, I also want to see those strange civilizations in the universe." After Xiao Yi heard this, his eyes also lit up, obviously in favor of this decision. "Okay, Xiaoai, let's go." However, before Suming finished speaking, an indifferent voice sounded from behind him. Where is this going?" This voice seemed to come from the world of the cold winter moon, and after entering Suming's ear canal, the whole person shuddered a little. Hearing this, he knew who was coming without looking, and while coping, he turned his head slightly stiffly. "What? Why are you here?" A dressed spirit appeared behind him at some point. The current spirit show really surprised Suming, and he didn't apply powder, but the temptation between his eyebrows was even stronger, and people couldn't help but indulge in it. However, the current mood is not very good. Above the delicate jade-like face, the face is like frost, and the delicate eyebrows are only visible, slightly sad. That look, as if it was the original match who came to catch the mistress. Hearing his question, a sneer appeared at the corner of Ling Xian's mouth. "If I don't come, will you run away?" Now Ling Xian is a little angry. After nearly a month of getting along day and night, she found that she couldn't do without Suming. She also didn't expect that Suming would leave when he said that he would leave and not take her with him on a tour, which made her very angry. At this moment, she felt as if she was a grudge woman abandoned in Perta by her husband, and her resentment value could not be stopped. Of course, Suming was somewhat aware of this. He really didn't want to take the spirit with him. After all, he was still counting on Ling Xian to help take care of the earth, but when Lei was angry, no one restrained him. Of course, these are all reasons. After all, if Charles is really angry, there is no way to do it now. The most fundamental reason for him is that he went out to take his wife with him. Well, now Ling Xian's relationship with him has not yet developed to the point of his wife. However, it is also about the same. Therefore, Suming wanted to make a good wave, the last memorial of the singleness. Wouldn't it be beautiful if there was another interesting one? After all, if in the future, Ling Xian followed, it would really be impossible to wave. However, what he didn't expect was that at this time, Ling Xian was always paying attention to him, and what was even more excessive was that just when he was about to escape, he suddenly appeared and arrested him. That's embarrassing. However, just as Suming was about to explain, another voice suddenly appeared. "Okay, I said how to look for half a day and can't find two of them. Are you planning to elope?" To be able to make such an intelligent remark, there is no one else except little Lori. And the truth is also the same. Suming looked for Prestige, and saw the swallowing girl wearing a gothic lowly suit standing there straight, one hand on the waist, the other pointing at the two of them, small mouth bulging, an expression that I have caught you. However, although the way little Loli appeared was very weird, the timing was indeed just right. For a while, the atmosphere of Lingxian's painstaking management was completely destroyed. After sighing lightly, she also quickly explained to the little Loli. "Little one, don't talk nonsense. What is elopement? It's so ugly." Ling Xian's tone was full of helplessness, and she didn't have any tricks for the little Loli who suddenly visited. Originally, Ling Xian had a complete plan today, although the relationship between her and Suming has grown by leaps and bounds in this month. But, very strangely, neither of them broke the last piece of paper. To put it bluntly, now the two are still above friends, and the lovers are not full. And the two are also very arrogant, both waiting for each other's confession. Then, she was also painstakingly planning how to get Suming to confess to him. However, this month, she failed. And this time, seeing Suming ready to slip away, although she was a little annoyed, she was also keenly aware that this was an opportunity. Then, she was ready to use this opportunity to get Suming to sign a series of unequal treaties. Even, in order to achieve her goal, she secretly used her divine power to lower the temperature near Suming. In other words, the cold that Suming felt was really cold. And at that moment, after all, she was reasonable, and the effect was also good. However, he didn't expect that little Lori, this Chang-biting Jin, suddenly killed and directly destroyed the atmosphere he painstakingly managed to call a clean. However, the little Loli with big nerves obviously did not have this intuition, and after hearing Ling Xian's words, she replied thoughtfully. "What? Not elopement?" Then, the question seemed to stump her, making her ponder. After seeing her like this, Ling Xian also nodded with satisfaction, and the well-behaved little Loli was still very cute. However, what he didn't expect was that after the little Loli pondered for a moment, she suddenly raised her little head, and a pair of water spirit eyes seemed to be able to speak, blinking vigorously, revealing a look of horror. And her small mouth also suddenly opened round, and after a long time, she spit out a shocking sentence. "It's not an elopement, are you going on a wedding trip?" And after these words came out, before Suming and the two could react, the little Loli's mouth was like a cannon, and one question after another popped out of her small mouth. But when did you get married? How do I not know? None of you invite me? By the way, is this a honeymoon? When are you ready to have a baby? Have you figured out the baby's name? At this moment, looking at the curious baby-like little loli, Suming was stupid. To see the ununderlined version of the novel, please download the Fila novel app. At this moment, looking at the curious baby-like little loli, Suming was stupid. And Ling Xian is a little better, but it is definitely not much better. Bai Yu's little face is also suddenly covered with redness. For a while, she is also ashamed and angry. Of course, although she was also embarrassed, her hands were not slow at all. Directly pulled the little loli who was still asking indiscriminately, and at the same time took out a large lollipop in his left hand. Then, involuntarily, it was directly stuffed into her mouth. Suddenly, little Lori's voice stopped. Now she is also happily holding a lollipop the size of his fist and eating slowly, and her eyes are also narrowed into a line. Very cute. After the magic voice of the little loli disappeared, the two breathed a slight sigh. And at this time, Suming also saw the strength of little Lori's combat power for the first time. I heard that the natural dull cut is black, and Suming didn't believe it in the past, but now it seems that the deist friend of Station B does not deceive him. At this moment, he also refreshed his cognition of little loli again. Of course, although the little loli did not stop, the influences still were. The atmosphere was awkward for a while. Of course, the little loli, who has no heart and no lungs, does not seem to feel it at all, and eats an oversized lollipop happily. And Suming and Ling Xian were wide-eyed. Suming is okay, after all, men, these things don't matter. But Ling Xian, now like a steamed crab, the skin of the whole province is extremely hot, even if it is a lot of distance, he can feel it. Hey, why is Ling Xian so easy to shy? This royal sister is not qualified at all. After sighing softly, Suming could only change the topic and resolve the embarrassment. Therefore, he also squatted down and asked softly to the squinting little loli, "Why are you here? Aren't you playing with Uncle Charles?" After returning from the tour, Suming lost the little loli to Uncle Charles. After all, little loli and Charles are surprisingly well coordinated. One old and one young, they are all lords who are not afraid of heaven. Charles met little loli and seemed to awaken his old urchin's attributes, and the two played and listened to it happily. And, for little loli, Charles is a mobile power bank. Therefore, after seeing such a coincidence, Suming didn't care. "Drink all of you together." Little loli replied to him inarticulately while eating a lollipop. This vague sentence made Suming have a black line. Involuntarily, Suming single-handedly took the lollipop that Li was licking, and then said positively, "Speak well." Suddenly losing the food in her hand, Li was a little annoyed. However, although she was a little angry, she still had no way to deal with the extremely powerful Suming, so she could only admit it. "None of you take me with you, let's play together." Little Lori's eyes stared closely at the lollipop in Suming's hand, and her little face was puffed up. "You're going too?" Hearing this, Suming was also a little surprised. Little Lori nodded heavily. Hearing her repeatedly sure, Suming's whole person was not good. Of course, what is even worse is the spiritual appearance. She is full of plans, her two-person world. However, let her leave the little loli, and it seems a little reluctant. After all, the little loli's pitiful appearance now is too foul. And for Suming, he was already immune to the cute selling of little loli. However, thinking that if the two of them traveled to the universe, little Lori would be quite lonely on Earth. After all, this is not the time it used to be. In the past, little loli did not have the habit of living with everyone, and she slept all day and then looked for food. However, after tasting the excitement of being with everyone, it was too cruel to let her go back to live that lonely day. Therefore, after thinking slightly, Suming looked away like a spirit. And what he was thinking, Ling Xian naturally knew, so he did not hesitate without any hesitation, so he nodded gently. And after seeing this scene, Suming nodded, and then returned the stick in his hand to the little loli. After seeing him agree, little Lori's eyes showed an extremely excited look. Even, she didn't take the lollipop at the first time, but threw herself into his arms for the first time, and then was to kiss him on the face. "Haha, brother Suming, I like you, you're the best." Little Lori's performance simply flattered Suming. Of course, his hand was not slow at all, but he caught the little loli, and then gently patted her pink back, and sighed softly. "Now that I know my well, I won't be naughty in the future." After hearing this scene, the little loli in his arms leaned over again, did not give Suming any time to prepare, and kissed him heavily on the other cheek before eating the lollipop with Miazi. "You, little witch." Feeling the wetness of his cheeks on both sides, Suming couldn't help shaking his head. And the scene of their blind date and love naturally fell in Ling Xian's mind. Seeing this scene, Ling Xian's big grooves were about to be crushed. Is she jealous? It's just a little envious that Suming can hold the little loli, and envious that the little loli can be held by Suming. That's right, she is very envious of both. However, after confirming the passengers, Suming did not delay. At this moment, Suming was full of pride, like a soldier leading troops to fight on the battlefield. Xiaoai set off and moved towards the Sea of Stars. However, before he fully experienced this feeling, Xiao Yi's helpless voice sounded. "Brother, you haven't set the coordinates yet." Suming. At this moment, the scene was a little embarrassing. Even Ling Xian was amused by this scene, and couldn't help but hide his mouth and chuckled. And Suming also immediately said to everyone, Okay, just set a coordinate at will, just take it as a space jump device test. After hearing him say this, Xiao Yi also nodded immediately. Then, a coordinate was entered at random. Brother, the space jump device has begun to charge, please be ready. Xiaoi's voice also sounded immediately. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. After Suming entered a coordinate at random, immediately after, Xiao Yi's voice had already sounded. Brother, the space jump device has begun to charge, please be ready. The words did not fall. Suming felt that the lights in the cab were dim. At the same time, a line of large characters appeared on the screen. The space jump has begun to prepare, after 10 seconds of jumping time. At this time, Suming also immediately put the little loli from his arms on the seat, and at the same time helped her fix the safety device. On the other side, Ling Xian seemed to be a little curious about this, and the well-behaved one also sat on another seat. Even though, the space jump is not a little dangerous for her. After solving the little loli, Suming also sat on another seat in the last 3 seconds. Then, staring straight at the big screen in front of him. I was looking forward to it more and more. After that, the countdown finally ended, and Xiaoi's voice sounded at this moment. Space jump in progress, jump coordinates. The words did not fall. Suming presented a very strange scene in front of his eyes. The world beyond glass suddenly became distorted, and everything was spinning. Moreover, as time accelerates, the speed of rotation also increases suddenly. Less than 3 seconds. A horn was formed in front of the destroyer. The horn is large enough to accommodate the passage of an entire warship. And this horn mouth is a bit like a horizontal seabed whirlpool, dark inside, unable to see a trace of light, as if to swallow everything. At this time, the shield of the destroyer was also activated spontaneously. The destroyer who stared at the shield also slowly drove towards the bottomless cave, as if stepping into the abyss. This scene made the 3 of them all open their eyes together. After all, although all 3 of them will have spatial passages. However, their spatial passage is not the same as the current wormhole, and the current scene is even more shocking. The speed of destruction was very fast, and in a moment the entire battleship had entered the wormhole. In the wormhole, countless streamers are flashing, and at a glance, everything shows a strange arc. Everything seemed very peculiar, and they were meeting for the first time. The wormhole was not long at all, and he could see the exit not far away, at the speed of the destroyer, a matter of seconds. Carrying the 3 people, the destroyer also drove towards the exit. And in an unknown star field where Suming was jumping in space, a group of starships are hidden in a belt of rubble, not far from the jump point, which is a natural space wormhole. These warships are all equipped with firepower, and the direction of firepower is also aimed at this space jump point. The center of the battleship group is a more luxurious battleship, which is very lively at this time. Laughter, shouting, women's cries, mixed together. From the inside, this group looks like intergalactic pirates. Interstellar pirates are a kind of deterrence based on robbing passengers on interstellar voyages. It's not the same as the pirates on Earth who value peace. After all, on the Earth, pirates generally just seek wealth, and after getting the money, they generally will not cause trouble. After all, the Earth is so big, if it is too cruel, it is almost okay to commit public anger. However, intergalactic pirates are different. Because the universe is too big, interstellar pirates are more rampant and cruel than on Earth, killing people at every turn. After all, the universe is so big, they can just do it and leave, and they can't find it if they want to. Moreover, on Earth, even if the ship is broken, even if it jumps into the sea, there is still a slight possibility of survival. However, in interstellar war, a chopping ship is shattered, and basically everyone inside has to go. Therefore, interstellar pirates are deeply hated in the eyes of those interstellar merchants. And this gang, apparently waiting for the fish to take the bait. Because it is a pirate, the ship is also very loose, and the inside is also very chaotic. At this time, maybe it is about to open, and these people are playing very messy. Just as everyone was shouting, a gate suddenly opened. In an instant, the originally noisy voice was suddenly sluggish, and even the crying slave girls suddenly trembled, and then covered their mouths to prevent themselves from making the slightest sound. The door opened, and out came a big man with burning marks on his face. After glancing around, the big man immediately asked aloud, "Why hasn't the Yongda gang come yet?" Hearing his question, a thin monkey immediately emerged from the crowd and immediately replied, "Head, the news we got is like this, saying that the courage of this time period will pass through this jump point. I think there is something on the road, and it is delayed. The universe is more mysterious than the sea, the situation is more changeable, and sudden accidents are also frequent." Therefore, after hearing this, the big man only frowned, and then did not say anything. However, just as he was about to leave, a big man with a nose ring squeezed out of the crowd. The nose ring man saw that the boss was just about to leave, so he asked softly, "Head, I think this trip is still a little dangerous. After all, their strength is not weak, and they are still marauders." Speaking of this, the nose ring man did not say anything. He knew that the person in front of him must know what he wanted to say. The fame of the marauders in the universe is also not small, and compared to their small organization, people can be regarded as a big business. They can't afford to mess with it. However, hearing him say this boss did not panic at all. Instead, he said to them with a confident face, Brothers, tell you a secret, Yongdo has been famous by the Marauder organization because of the smuggling of children. Even if we intercept him today, the Marauders will not find us. Besides, I heard that they have found a good baby, enough for me to eat for most of my life. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. Moreover, hearing him say this, everyone was very excited, so excited that they couldn't help themselves, and they kept cheering. The boss is awesome. Yes, kill the bravery, we will get rich. Kill brave. After seeing this scene, the nose ring man was not good to say anything. He also won't tell the boss that he has always had a little crisis in his heart, as if they are going to be in a big disaster in a few days. However, he did not have the slightest root in this anxiety, and he could only roughly speculate that it should be another tough battle with Yongdo. However, thinking of this, he was also a little puzzled. This anxious nose ring man also has no slightest root, and he can only roughly speculate that it should be another tough battle with Yongdo. However, thinking of this, he was also a little puzzled. After all, since Yongdo was driven out by the Marauders, although he was okay to mix, he was miserable compared to them. Even there is only one battleship. It stands to reason that with so many warships besieging one, and still being prepared, how could it be impossible to lose? Moreover, the location they chose is also very good. Their wormhole is one-way teleportation, and the entrance to the wormhole at the next moment is also very far away. After the courage comes out, they can't run away if they want to, and no reinforcements will appear. So, thinking about it, they are now victorious. Because there should be no surprises, right? However, he thought so, but how the inexplicable sense of crisis in his heart became stronger and stronger, as if he would die without a corpse if he didn't escape now. Could it be that you pushed too hard yesterday night? The body can't stand it? After thinking fruitlessly, he could only come up with this reason. After shaking his head slightly, he had no clue and could only give up. On the other side, in a distant star field, the Brave spacecraft is also rushing towards the next space jump point. The speed of the spacecraft was fast, and it instantly streaked across a planet, leaving a long tail flame. Inside the spaceship, everyone is also very lively. Yongdo wiped his whistle, his gaze a little calm. You mean, after receiving the message from that smelly boy, he took the initiative to contact us and announce the location of the Cosmic Spirit Ball. His words were full of doubt. You know, he asked Star-Lord to find the Cosmic Spirit Ball, but Star-Lord betrayed him and sold the Cosmic Spirit Ball to Junki, which made him very angry, and vowed to catch Star-Lord and then punish him fiercely. Of course, Xingzhou was also very smart during this time and had been avoiding him, which made him even more annoyed. However, at this time, he actually received a message from Star-Lord, and Star-Lord also took the initiative to announce his location. This made him a little incomprehensible. Xingzhou did not want to escape at this time, but took the initiative to invite him to capture, and there was a problem with how to think. The other man hesitated after hearing this, but still said, Yes, we did receive a message from that kid, but his position is really bad. In the prison star of the Nova Legion, it is heavily guarded there. If we act rashly, it is easy to unite with the Nova army to have a grudge. Hearing this, Yongdu was slightly silent. Although he is a mercenary, he is still worried about the Nova Legion. After all, people are a force, they are just a battleship. However, as soon as he thought of the Cosmic Spirit Ball in Xingzhou's hand, Yongdu was ruthless, gritting his teeth at several people. Go directly to the prison star, not to the Nova Legion. And he is now among these people. His prestige is also very high, and after hearing his order, everyone also responded immediately. Diversion prison star. As one order after another was passed, the warship that was galloping suddenly froze, and then suddenly turned around, galloped away in a new direction. And their diversion is very abrupt, and those interstellar pirates naturally do not know. However, although those pirates did not wait for their target, they waited for a fat sheep. When Suming and the others just came out of the state of space jumping, they were absolutely stunned. Looking at those densely packed little red dots on the glass, as well as various alarms, Suming was still a little confused. What's going on? These little red dots Suming also knew, and these little red dots were the local battleships detected by the destroyer. It's just that these are too many, right? Xiao Yi also immediately explained to Suming. Brother, there are 32 local warships, of which only one is the main ship, and the others are all auxiliary ships, and the weapons of these ships have been fully charged and are ready to be launched at any time. Hearing Xiao Yi say this, Suming and the three were even more confused. What's the situation? Is this waiting for the rabbit? How do they know where we can exit? Is this specifically waiting for us? In the universe, there are no enemies? This matter, Suming's mind was full of question marks. He really couldn't figure it out. Looking at these fully charged warships, he saw that he came prepared, specially waiting for them. However, he is also the first time to go far away, and there are no enemies in the universe, at most a Thanos. However, even Thanos couldn't have known that he would appear from here, right? Of course, Suming is now confused, and he is even more confused about these people in the interstellar pirates. The little leader was also confused when he saw the sudden appearance of the destroyer. It's different from what the intelligence says. Doesn't it mean that the ship of valor is also a cigar-like? How many meanings does this flat inverted triangle mean? Moreover, is Brave's spaceship so big? How do you feel that this ship is very difficult to mess with? And, in the end, how did this spaceship suddenly come out of space? Before taking the exit of the jump point, they were completely unprepared. They are in a very strange state of mind right now. It's a bit like a hunter guarding the mouth of a rabbit hole, waiting for an unknown amount of time, and suddenly there is a harvest. However, the first thing that came out was not a rabbit, but a tiger, and, even more weird, this tiger did not appear from the rabbit hole, but fell from the sky. The plot is so weird. Because the current situation is somewhat complicated, the squads of these battleships did not rashly choose to fire, but very wisely invited their boss out. After the Scar Man appeared, when he saw the destroyer, he was also confused. However, then he was relieved. Although it is not clear why it did not wait for courage, but looking at the sale of the Doom, it is not a bad money lord at a glance. So now it's a bonus. After all, it's all robbery anyway, who is not robbery? As for it, it looks like the destroyer is very difficult to mess with. This problem, in his opinion, is certainly not a problem. After all, so many of their battleships are not vegetarian. Moreover, looking at the sale of the destroyer, even if he loses a few battleships, he will not lose money. Phila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend. Under the influence of many factors, Scarman believes that this wave can be tried to do it. After all, in his opinion, this wave is just winning blood and losing 1 or 2 battleships. Profit drives him. Therefore, after thinking of this, he also immediately began to issue orders. Little ones, this time we did not wait for the little lamb, but waited for a fat sheep. It is simply a gift from heaven to us. What are you waiting for? To her. Mother. The fat sheep of the cannon? And when those little brothers heard this, they also immediately cheered. Fire the gun, open the gun, we opened the meat. Haha, finally waited. I don't know, is there a beautiful girl on it? Haha, you haven't played enough of those last time. Hey, don't say it, it's long dead. Everyone was already intoxicated with the joy of reaping the fruits of the war. After all, in their opinion, although this spaceship looks very terrifying, it is already fish meat on their chopping board surrounded by their many warships. Therefore, everyone cheered, showing bloodthirsty and cruel smiles. There is only one person, the man with the nose ring. Since the appearance of the destroyer, the crisis in the heart of the nose ring man has reached its peak. In his eyes, the seemingly weak destroyer is a ferocious beast that chooses people to eat, and even the bright red color on the edge of the destroyer seems to be dripping blood. Just a glance. His heart was creepy, as if he was going to die in the next second. And the moment he heard their boss give the order to attack, his whole heart seemed to be crushed. It's terrifying, that battleship definitely has a big horror existence, and it's an existence we can't provoke. At this time, the nose ring man is definitely not a fool, and he also thought that something was wrong with the situation for the first time. Therefore, even though his whole body was a little soft because he was shrouded in fear now, he still used all his strength to shout out a sentence. Boss, don't do it, there is a problem with that battleship. At this time, everyone was cheering, excited, and waiting for the results of the battle. The voice of the nose ring man is naturally very abrupt when these people see it. For a while, the joyful atmosphere suddenly froze, and everyone looked at the nose ring man. All of them were full of thick puzzlement. And that Scar old nature is also not happy. However, for the sake of the face of the nose ring man, he also did not have a seizure. After all, their identity as an interstellar pirate ring man is somewhat special. Although this person has no combat effectiveness, his intuition is very good. Relying on his instincts, he took a lot less bends. It's half a military division. Therefore, after seeing the nose ring man, the boss was also a little alert. What's wrong? Is there something wrong with this battleship? The boss looked at the nose ring man and asked suspiciously. Boss, there is definitely something wrong with this battleship. In the perception of this battleship, there is a big horror on this battleship. Seeing the boss ask, the nose ring man also raised his courage and immediately answered. Hearing him say this, everyone present was also slightly silent. Everyone knows that the nose ring man has some evil doors, and his advice is also very cautious. However, although very cautious, they also had to consider a situation. They haven't started work for months. Moreover, I heard that Yongdo had information about a certain treasure there, and in order to eat black, they spent a lot of money to buy Yongdo's whereabouts, plus they invested a lot for this battle. If they don't gain anything this time, they won't have a hard time in the future. This is how they are in this line. They do not open for half a year, they open and eat for half a year. Therefore, they definitely don't want to let this fat sheep go. However, in the face of the warning of the nose ring man, they must make a choice. Choose to believe, they will go hungry, and the next opening does not know when. Moreover, the expenses of their team are not small, and the brothers follow him not because of brotherly righteousness, but because they can eat fragrant and drink spicy, and if they are hungry, the hearts of the people will be scattered, and the team will not be easy to bring. If you ignore the early warning, you are afraid of causing some big trouble. At this moment, everyone looked at the Scar Man in unison, as if they knew what choice he would make. Sensing everyone's gaze, the Scar Man also felt such a strong pressure for the first time. After a long while, under everyone's nervous gaze, the Scar Man finally spoke. It's dry, if we don't do it, we're going to drink the northwest wind. The Scar Man's tone was also full of fierceness. After all, those who do this kind of knife-edge licking blood work are not lacking in ruthlessness. In the midst of danger and disappointment, he chose to take risks. Moreover, he thinks very well, once it is not right, then he can also immediately slip away. After all, the universe is so big, he does not believe in so many battleships, he still can't run away. And hearing his determination, the nose ring man directly softened, as if the strength of the whole body had been drained. At this moment, he really wanted to risk his death to stop it. However, he now has no strength. And the words of the Scar Man also aroused the bloodthirsty emotions of everyone, and everyone paid no attention to the nose ring man anymore, cheering wantonly. At the same time, after the boss's order was given, the naval guns of more than 30 battleships also began to fire shells that had long been charged. For a time, hundreds of beams of different thicknesses and colors were fired towards the destroyer in unison. Seeing these pillars of light coming, Suming and the others did not panic at all. Instead, a little curious. Curious how they dared to do it. After all, even blind people can feel the thick deterrent power of the destroyer. Perhaps, those people are already addicted to money. After thinking about it secretly, Suming gave up. It seems that he did not see the hundreds of light cannons, but looked at Ling Xian and little Lori with a curious face. Can you endure it? Yes, that's right. Suming's idea is very simple, just throw this kind of trifle to the two women. After all, save trouble. Even, you can throw it to the little lowly best. After going out, you can directly take a bite of those battleships. However, what surprised Suming a little was that the two women were not very attentive to this matter. They did not have the majesty and self-respect of the subgod level at all, and they had no intention of making a move at all. However, what surprised Suming a little was that the two women were not very attentive to this matter, and they did not have the majesty and self-respect of the subgod level at all. Moreover, for Suming's question, the two women also gave him a roll of their eyes. Little Loli began to complain without hesitation. Brother, you obviously want us to help you work. His mind was broken by the little Loli, and Suming was slightly embarrassed, but his face did not show it at all, but he said righteously. How can I say that? I'm here for your consideration. It's a subgod level. You always have to show some majesty, otherwise anyone can spread wild in front of you in the future. However, no matter what he said, the two women did not mean to do anything at all. And at this time, those beams of light finally fell on the destroyer. However, the scene that looked very shocking, hitting the destroyer, did not ripple at all, like raindrops, and even this intensity seemed to Xiaoai that even the shield did not need to be opened. And that's exactly what happened. However, these were expected by Suming and several people did not react much, only commenting occasionally. The weapons of these warships are not good, even the defensive shields have not been activated. In this regard, Ling Xian couldn't help but look like he was white again. Do you think that everyone is as extravagant as you, using vibranium as ordinary metal, and even the general frame of the entire battleship is vibranium? Hearing his words, Suming was also abrupt. It seems that the effect of vibranium is still good. Of course, they didn't hear his words, and if he could hear it, he would probably cry. However, this situation is not much closer to crying now. When he saw that the battleship on the opposite side did not dodge in the face of the attack of his own battleship group, his heart was extremely excited. It felt like pie in the sky. In an instant, he was already fantasizing that after capturing this battleship, selling it would definitely get a lot of money. He also has an intuition about the value of an item. When he saw this battleship, he faintly felt that the value of this battleship could exceed his imagination, and there must be some valuable treasures in it. It is for this reason that he is willing to take risks. And in fact, it is also the same, the battleship made of vibranium, the entire universe is not so luxurious, this architecture alone can buy the entire earth, the value is of course high, and his intuition is not wrong. It's just that seeing the firepower net he is proud of falling on the other people's battleship, there is not even a trace of it, as if it is a bath for someone. He was stunned. Completely confused. You know, in order to deal with bravery, he spent a lot of money to upgrade his battleship. Especially the weapon systems of many battleships, he also strives to meet the moment, he can beat the courage. However, now this scene directly shattered his entire worldview. Of course, he already knew subconsciously, his intuition was not wrong, this battleship must be made of very valuable alloy. It's just that he also knows that he can't afford to mess with people who can use this alloy. At the same time, he knew that today he was in big trouble. As a good leader of the Interstellar, he also showed his strong command ability at the first time. Quick, retreat, withdraw as fast as you want. The next moment, his terrified voice appeared inside everyone's battleship. And at this moment, everyone was also awakened by his shocked look. Quick, retreat. At this moment, everyone has already returned to their senses, and needless to say, everyone knows what to do. However, although they knew what to do, once they operated, everyone couldn't help but tremble. Something went wrong in the busy, and the whole pirate was also a mess. There were even accidents involving spacecraft collisions. And Suming, who saw this scene, couldn't help but laugh. Especially the little Loli, as if seeing the clown performing, directly laughed. Since you shot, then don't run any of them. After sighing softly, Xiaoai also reacted immediately. At the same time, the destroyer battleship also reacted. All the guns began to charge in unison. For a time, hundreds of white photoelectric lights immediately appeared above the pitch-black destroyer. Between the flashes of light, this rich dangerous crisis is overflowing. And the interstellar pirates who saw this scene also instantly felt the crisis that destroyed everything, and that feeling directly made the already flustered people become even more flustered. For a time, spacecraft collided, and spacecraft and rubble collided from time to time. There are even 2 ships damaged by the collision. Of course, for this situation, Suming was also very blinded. Am I that terrible? These people's mental quality is also too great. Can this kind of mental quality still be a pirate? However, none of this affected Xiaoi's decision. Without the slightest hesitation, after a short charge, hundreds of gunboats also shot towards the battleship groups of those numerous interstellar pirates without hesitation. At this moment, white pillars of light filled the sky, intertwined one after another, turning into a web of death, and rushing towards the group of more than 30 warships. At this moment, all the pirates were stunned. Ru Meng's back feels like a tarsal maggot, and you can't shake it off. For this, the Scar Man's heart rose unprecedented regret and despair. Who are theirs? Who is the Supreme Star? Or the Nova Legion? Why am I obsessed? Now, the Scar Man can't think of anything at this moment, and his mind is full of how to escape. However, in order to hide, they chose to secure more than 30 warships in the gravel belt, and the space for activities was very small. In addition, they were already very chaotic, and it was also very chaotic between busy mistakes, and they couldn't get out for a while. This kind of almost fixed target, Xiao Yi, is naturally impossible to play crooked. Just the first round of shooting, all the spaceships turned under the death light net, completely annihilated, turning into one fireball after another. The firelight suddenly appeared, and it was also an extremely rare scene in the depths of the dark universe, as if fireworks, all kinds of brilliant lights still flickered, and it looked good in an instant. It's so pretty, it's so beautiful. Little Lori looked at these light masses, her little eyes flashing with excitement. In the eyes of little Lori, the value of these people is only so. And Ling Xian's gaze also revealed a soft color. At this moment, she also didn't know how she suddenly thought of those bloody love dramas she watched on Earth in her spare time. At this time, it should correspond to a candlelight dinner. Ling Xian didn't know why, but a very wonderful scene suddenly appeared in his mind. In her vision, she and Suming enjoy a candlelit dinner on board the destroyer. Outside the spaceship, flamethrowers and flames appear, adding a romantic atmosphere to this dinner. Perhaps this illusion was too much for her, and for a while, Ling Xian was a little obsessed with it. And Suming was extremely speechless when he looked at the two women who were shining with light in their eyes. Naturally, he also saw the loss of concentration between the two for the first time. There is nothing he can do about it. After all, the creature of a woman is too wonderful. Even if he wants to break his head, he will not think that just watching an explosion. Ling Xian's thinking has drifted to an extremely strange place. The battle started very abruptly and ended very quickly, from the time the interstellar pirates began to attack, and the end of the war took less than a minute. A minute later, in those gravel belts, except for a few sporadic spaceships that were still on fire, the other spaceships were only a piece of wreckage. However, just when Sumingdo was already over, Xiao Yi suddenly pointed to a coordinate on the map and said to him, "Brother, there are still life fluctuations there." Oh, in this case, who survived? In this regard, Suming was very surprised. After all, this level of explosion, there are still people who can survive, which shows that this person's combat effectiveness is also very powerful. For a while, Suming raised some vigilant looks. To this, he also reacted immediately. Ling Xian, go and take a look. However, what surprised Suming a little was that after he said this, Ling Xian did not respond in the slightest. Ling Xian. Suming was a little puzzled and turned his head. Then, in his field of vision, he saw Miss Ling Xian, whose eyes were unfocused. Obviously, the current spirit was still in a state of wandering the world, and he did not hear his words. This scene, watching Suming, is also a black line. Spirit. Suming stretched out his hand and tapped her jade-like forehead hard. Oh, what are you doing? At this moment, the spirit finally returned to his senses. However, perhaps the influence of fantasy is not yet small, and the spirit of this moment also leaks his unknown side. Now Ling Xian rubbed his forehead with one hand and pointed at Suming with the other, his eyes full of grievances and shame. In that way, Suming, who looked at it, was also confused. Such a big reaction. Suming was also very surprised. However, he did not think much about this, but pointed to the increasingly weakening signs of life on the map, and continued to say to him, "You're not going to check it out." Ling Xian looked at Suming, and his little face was full of shame. Especially seeing that Suming didn't say a word, he directly arranged a task for himself, and he almost jumped his feet in anger. She now wants to throw away the phrase "the old lady is gone, who loves who will do it." However, although she wanted to do it very much, after thinking about it, she could only silently sigh, "Concubines can't do it." Then, blocking the breath, one turned around and disappeared above the destroyer. In the next second, the spirit appeared at the location shown by the signs of life on the map. Here, in addition to a ruin, he saw an almost scrapped escape pod. In the escape pod, the breath of life is getting weaker and weaker. Is this it? Although, there was still an escape pod, which made Ling Xian a little surprised. If in normal times, she would probably be interested in studying it again, but now that Sister Ling Xian was in an extremely bad mood, she also had no appetite. Then, expressionlessly, she grabbed the one-person tall escape pod and disappeared in place. In the next second, she was back on the spaceship. "This is what you want, don't bother me with such a trifle." After throwing the escape pod in his hand to Suming, Ling Xian walked towards the lounge with a huffed face, leaving Suming with a confused look. What's the situation? What's wrong again? Someone messed with her. Looking at Miss Lingxian's bulging back, Suming directly came to a wave of confusion. Of course, after a few moments, he was not paying attention either. After all, women are creatures that are not in the scope of his understanding, and he will not answer this question. The next moment, he set his eyes on the escape pod. This escape pod can already be said to be devastated. It's tattered, as if it's going to fall apart at any moment. Of course, the tragic situation of the escape pod, Suming can also expect it. After all, it is not easy to survive this kind of explosion. If he found a brand new escape pod, Suming would have to doubt his life. What surprised Suming very much was that in such a short combat environment, there were still people who were able to escape back to the escape pod, which surprised him very much. Open him, Xiaoi. Yes, brother. Xiao Yi also reacted immediately, and 2 laser knives also shot out from 2 directions, and began to cut the top cover of the escape pod. Less than 10 seconds. The roof of the escape pod has fallen off, revealing the unconscious nose ring man inside. It turned out that the nose ring man saw that his boss was determined to start a war, and knew that he could not be persuaded, so he exhausted all his strength and directly touched the nearest escape pod, which escaped a disaster. It's just that the impact of his escape pod's hesitant explosion, the flight function has been damaged, and even the life support system has been partially damaged. Of course, when entering the escape pod, he also knew that in this environment, even if the escape pod was not destroyed, it was only a slow death, but he had no other way. Of course, for now, it seems that his method is still useful, at least as the only survivor. It's just that it fell into Suming's hands, which he probably didn't expect. And after Suming saw the nose ring man, he was also a little surprised. In his perception, the nose ring man seems to have some secrets hidden in him. With a slight smile, Suming also immediately said to Xiaoi, Xiaoi, wake him up, he seems to have some secrets in him. Yes, brother. What surprised Suming very much was that in such a short combat environment, there were still people who were able to escape back to the escape pod, which surprised him very much. Open him, Xiaoi. Yes, brother. Xiao Yi also reacted immediately, and 2 laser knives also shot out from 2 directions, and began to cut the top cover of the escape pod. Less than 10 seconds. The roof of the escape pod has fallen off, revealing the unconscious nose ring man inside. It turned out that the nose ring man saw that his boss was determined to start a war, and knew that he could not be persuaded, so he exhausted all his strength and directly touched the nearest escape pod, which escaped a disaster. It's just that the impact of his escape pod's hesitant explosion, the flight function has been damaged, and even the life support system has been partially damaged. Of course, when entering the escape pod, he also knew that in this environment, even if the escape pod was not destroyed, it was only a slow death, but he had no other way. Of course, for now, it seems that his method is still useful, at least as the only survivor. It's just that it fell into Suming's hands, which he probably didn't expect. And after Suming saw the nose ring man, he was also a little surprised. In his perception, the nose ring man seems to have some secrets hidden in him. With a slight smile, Suming also immediately said to Xiaoi, Xiaoi, wake him up, he seems to have some secrets in him. Yes, brother. As soon as the words fell, 2 water jets suddenly erupted from the cabin. Cold water jet poured on the nose ring man's head. The next moment, the nose ring man sobered up. Who TMD poured water on me? After the nose ring man woke up, he didn't figure out the situation, confused, directly angry, and couldn't help but start scolding angrily. For this, there is no need for Suming to say, Xiaoi has already made a choice. Before the nose ring man's voice fell, 2 bright and shaking electric lights had already split towards him. Instantly, the screams of the nose ring man sounded. And this sharp pain also immediately reminded him of what the situation was now. Seeing the strange environment and looking at the strange person, the nose ring man seemed to remember something, and some of them had dry mouth. This. His voice was very small, his face was full of fear, and he looked cautious, like a mouse caught by a cat. This is the destroyer, the black battleship you just attacked. Whether Suming was teasing him or not was also answering his doubts. When the nose ring man saw Suming, although he already had a little guess, just after Suming confirmed, his eyes still showed despair and shock. At the same time, there is no bitterness in my heart. However, Suming didn't have the heart to wait for him to sort out his mental activities. Without delay, he asked directly. Now, on the 2 questions, I hope you can cooperate. Hearing his words, the nose ring man's face also showed a glimmer of light, and the whole person immediately jumped out of the escape pod, hurriedly knelt in front of Suming, and couldn't stop saying, Lord, my lord, if you ask, I must know everything. First, I want to know, how did you find out about my whereabouts, and who is behind you? Suming's expression was very serious. Until now, he is confused. After all, the coordinates of his space jump were chosen immediately, and there was no reason why others would know to fight. Unless the man does not know the power of the prophet. Well, the Marvel universe is very perverted, and it's not too strange to have an unknown prophetic ability. However, even if that person has the ability to predict the prophet, what does that being mean by sending these shrimp soldiers and crabs to ambush him in the future? After all, you don't know the ability of the prophet. Is it possible that you can't see the strength of these people clearly? Or, which kind of existence is only good at predicting his whereabouts, and he also has a half understanding of his strength? After all, it involves the system, it is difficult to predict. Therefore, that existence needs some cannon fodder to test it, to see if his strength is strong or weak. From beginning to end, Suming did not think in the direction of this being an accident. After all, if it was an accident, it would be too much of a coincidence, right? Moreover, after experiencing the incident of the life court, the current Suming has always had the idea of wanting to harm Diaoming. Therefore, it is not too weird that he has this idea, at most it is a murder paranoia. Of course, for his question, the nose ring man is a little confused. After a long while, he looked at Suming carefully, and then whispered to him, that, my lord, we don't even know who you are, how do we know your whereabouts, we are just a group of intergalactic pirates, and there is no one behind it. The nose ring man's voice was a little aggrieved, cautious, a little pitiful. However, after Suming heard this, he was also confused. What? You mean, the target was not us, but just happened to run into? Well, my lord, that's exactly what it is. But, it's too coincidental, I just jumped randomly, and this crashed. Suming still didn't believe it. Hearing this, the man with the nose ring almost cried. He also felt that it was too coincidental, and they tried their best to get a fight. As a result, Yongdu did not come, and a fiery star suddenly appeared, and then their entire team was eliminated without the slightest resistance. He also wanted to say that TMD is too coincidental. However, in fact, it is also true, seeing that Suming still did not believe it, the nose ring man quickly assured. Adult, although it is very clever, but it is really true, I really dare not lie. In the last sentence, the nose ring man's voice was a little crying, and he also felt a little wronged. Seeing that he wiped his nose and wiped her tears, Suming also believed what he said for the time being, which should be a coincidence. However, he became curious again. By the way, since you didn't rob and kill me, who are you here to rob and kill? Sir, our boss heard from the news merchant that Yongdo has made a big deal, and there may even be news of the Cosmic Spirit Ball, so our boss planned to intercept this batch of goods, and then set up an ambush here, but waited for a long time, did not wait for Yongdo, but waited for you. Saying this, he didn't say anything, and explained it all clearly. Suming also understood it all. Courage, Suming naturally also knows. And from the mouth of the nose ring man, he also knows that the plot here should now come to the plot of Guardians of the Galaxy I. And according to this person's statement, Suming almost speculated that the current plot should be that Brave entered the prison star, rescued Star-Lord, and then turned to help the Nova army fight Ronan. Thinking of this, Suming felt that although this trip was a little bizarre, it was unbiased, just in time for the major events in the universe. Now, though, he has one more question. But how do you still have time to run to the escape pod? This is also the question that Suming is most interested in. After all, it took only 10 seconds from the exchange of fire between the two armies to the destruction of the enemy ship on the opposite side. How could this person be so lucky to run into the escape pod? Moreover, he also found that there was a feeling in this person that he was very concerned. Hearing this question, the nose ring man hesitated slightly, quietly looked at the surrounding environment, and finally swallowed his spit and said softly, "My lord, I am a natural intuition that can predict danger to a certain extent, and as soon as my lord's battleship appears, I know that this battle will be lost, so I prepared in advance." Hearing this, Suming suddenly became a little interested. "Since you have this ability, why don't you advise your boss?" I persuaded, but the boss felt that he could try, but he couldn't beat and run. The nose ring man's words made Suming a little funny. At the same time, though, his mind moved. Inside the spaceship, two beams of light suddenly lit up. The two beams of light were unbiased, just covering the whole person of the nose ring man. At the same time, after being covered by the beam, he found that his whole body seemed to be untouched and could not move at all. Moreover, at this time, he felt as if his whole body was covered with red fruit, and all his secrets were exposed to this pillar of light. This scene happened very suddenly, which made the nose ring man even more frightened. Lord, don't kill me, although I am a pirate, but that is also forced. I am an early warning device among them, but there is no killing in my hands." What the nose ring man said was not a lie. Before he became an interstellar pirate, he was also a member of the caravan, and then he was robbed by interstellar pirates, and in order to survive, he also had to serve interstellar pirates, and he was also a prophet and the like. And these, Suming did not care. What he wanted to know now was why this person was so special, and the ability to prophesy. You know, he is in a system, even Gu Yi has no way to see his future, but this person can sense the crisis he brings, which makes him a little surprised. And Xiao Yi also knows what he is interested in. Under the light of 2 explorations, all the secrets of the nose ring man are not hidden. Less than 10 seconds. And so it happened. Xiao Yi manifested, the gemstone above his head exuded a bright light, and a pair of eyes also showed a look of surprise. "What's wrong, Xiaoai? Is there any surprise discovery here?" Suming, who saw this scene, also immediately asked out loud. "Well, brother, do you know what I found?" Xiao Yi pounced, and his hands hung around Suming's neck, like a swing, and fell on his chest. "What's wrong? What secrets have been discovered? See what you will enjoy." Seeing this, he couldn't help but touch Xiaoai's little head. "Brother, tell you, I found the genetic code that belongs to Atlantis at the bottom of his genes." Xiao Yi did not beat around the bush, and directly announced the final secret he discovered. Hearing this, Suming was very surprised. "Atlantis, isn't that the secret we've been looking for?" Yes, no coincidence is not a book. Xiao Yi also sighed with some emotion. You mean, this man is the legendary Atlantean? Suming looked at the nose ring man who was trapped in the air with a shocked face, and he was a little unbelievable. It can't be said that it is an Atlantean people, it can only be said that it is related to that civilization, and it may also be their descendants. Xiaoai corrected his point of view. Suming pondered for a moment and came to a somewhat unbelievable conclusion. However, you mean that it is because of this genetic code that he has the ability to predict danger? It should be so, because I searched everything in my body, except for this one that originated from Atlantis, there was nothing abnormal. Hearing this, Suming lowered his head and pondered. It's hard to believe, but the Marvel universe is like that. Mutation seems to have everything, even beyond the basic physics of today. Therefore, he is also very curious about this kind of power. Is this the result of the evolution of Atlantis life levels? Because it should be. This gene has obvious traces of evolution. Xiao Yi heard it and immediately explained to Suming. After hearing Xiao Yi's confirmation, some thoughts suddenly rose in his heart. For this thought, he also immediately said to Xiaoai, Xiaoai, deeply examine this gene sequence to see the degree of genetic modification, and then start to interpret the code of Atlantis with the monument of life and time. Yes, brother. Before the words fell, the two beams of light suddenly increased. In an instant, the nose ring man also fell asleep in an instant and lost consciousness. Then, the in-depth analysis began, and Xiaoai also went all out. Xiaoai, don't kill me, this is the only descendant of Atlantis. And at this time, Suming was also careful with him. Okay, brother, don't worry, he can't die. For this, Xiao Yi naturally knows the importance of this person. After seeing Xiao Yi busy, he did not delay, but towards the set destination, and the entire spaceship immediately headed towards the new legion. And little Lori seems to have only come to her senses at this time. However, when she saw the nose ring man hanging in midair and sleeping, her eyes once again showed curiosity. And at this time, the little Loli seemed to come to her senses. However, when she saw the nose ring man hanging in midair and sleeping, her eyes once again showed curiosity. Brother Suming, what's wrong with him? He just wants to sleep on it. Suming didn't have the mind to explain, but casually began to flicker. However, at this time, looking at the empty cab, he finally remembered that it seemed to be less spiritual. Therefore, he also immediately ordered to the little Loli, go and see your sister Ling Xian, she seems to be a little wrong just now, isn't her body not very comfortable? Oh, and this? Hearing this, little Loli was also a little surprised. Well, yes, you go and see. Suming nodded affirmatively. He was also a little puzzled, and thought that Ling Xian's relatives had arrived. However, sub-god level spirits would even have relatives? Suming was a little skeptical about this. It's just that this is the best explanation he can think of. After hearing this, although little Loli's face was full of doubts, she still walked towards the lounge after thinking about it. The Destroyer's lounge is not far away. As soon as little Loli entered the interior, she had already heard a steady stream of broken thoughts coming from the lounge inside. Sister Ling. After the little Loli heard the broken thoughts, her little face also suddenly showed a suspicious look. She also knows a lot about Ling Xian, even better than anyone else. After all, although their age difference is somewhat large, their relationship is not ordinarily good. Coupled with the only two sub-god level goddesses, they naturally have a lot of communication. However, it was precisely because of this relationship that he was shocked by the fragmented thoughts he heard now, and he was a little unbelievable. After all, in her impression, Sister Ling Xian was very independent and self-reliant, and she looked like a strong woman. And thinking about this kind of thing is not in line with her painting style at all. However, although there were some doubts, the strong curiosity also instinctively drove her, so that she instinctively began to contract her existence, carefully touching towards the lounge. Sneaky look, it looks like a thief. And the spirit in the lounge, although the strength is stronger than that of the little Loli, but in the case of mental calculation and unintentional, she naturally did not find the little Loli slowly approaching. Moreover, she is also a chaotic heart now, which makes it easy for little Lori to succeed. Now she is ashamed, angry that everything has been gathered. Nerd, idiot, wooden man, big dumb. Suming, you are a big fool. The more Ling Xian spoke, the more angry he became, and finally he couldn't help jumping his feet, and finally he didn't even know where to take out a small puppet. And this puppet can be recognized at a glance, it is a scaled-down version of Suming. Moreover, there is a thin line on the puppet to show a name Suming. And now, Ling Xian has obviously replaced this little puppet with someone and is putting him to death. After slapped the palm-sized little puppet heavily, he said breathlessly, "Nerd, you're pissing me off." Ling Xian was a little aggrieved. Her status as a sub-god level strength, as well as an eternal daughter, what do you want? As a result, when I got here, I always felt that something was wrong there. Sure enough, you are to blame for everything. After snorting again at the puppet in his hand, Ling Xian opened another round of broken thoughts. Of course, this is not the key is that his broken thoughts are not leaked, and all of them are clearly heard by little Lori. And the little Loli who was squatting in the corner of the wall was extremely curious in her heart after hearing these broken thoughts. She didn't hear clearly who her Ling Xian sister was thinking about. Therefore, driven by curiosity, she also cautiously poked a small head out from behind the door and stared straight at the scene in the lounge. And her first gaze was attracted by the doll in Ling Xian's hand. Ling Xian's craftsmanship is surprisingly good, at least if not a blind person can basically recognize it. It is a completely scaled-down version of Suming. Nature. The sharp-eyed little Loli also instantly recognized the person represented by the puppet. That puppet, is it Brother Suming? As if she had discovered a shocking secret, little Loli was also pleasantly surprised. At the same time, the curiosity in my heart has become stronger. After all, this kind of thing was also the first time she had seen it in Ling Xian's sister. There is a problem between sister Ling Xian and brother Suming. However, with terrifying intuition, little Loli discovered Ling Xian's strange attitude for the first time. However, I just don't know what brother Suming thinks now. In this regard, little Loli is also very helpless. For her, it can be seen that there is a problem between the two, even if she has attended a cram school. If she can still come up with ideas, it will be too perverted. Therefore, after thinking slightly, he wisely decided, first standing still for the time being, choosing to observe secretly. So, the little Loli continued to squat in the corner. It's just that what little Loli didn't expect was that when she eavesdropped on Ling Xian's broken thoughts, Ling Xian didn't find it, but when she stuck her head out and secretly looked at the puppet, Ling Xian found her for the first time. The next moment, Ling Xian's neck was completely stained with a layer of red. At the same time, he was also busy putting away the little puppet in his hand. However, when she saw that little Loli was still ready to squat in the corner, Ling Xian's face was unhappy. After all, at the beginning, I didn't know, let you eavesdrop, this is not a big deal. However, I have found it all, and you have heard so much news, it is too much to be satisfied. Therefore, for little Lori's inch-like behavior, Ling Xian is not used to it at all. A flash. Ling Xian appeared behind the little Loli, and then looked at the little Loli behind the door with a little butt. She also smiled bitterly. The current little Loli is also very interesting. The butt was pouting high, and the little head was tightly pressed against the door, as if he wanted to eavesdrop more clearly. Moreover, little Loli eavesdropped too seriously, and did not notice the appearance behind her at all. And at this time, Ling Xian looked at such a serious little Loli, and naturally would not live up to her kindness. Little Loli was also too serious in eavesdropping, and did not notice the appearance behind her at all. And at this time, Ling Xian looked at such a serious little Loli, and naturally would not live up to her kindness. Without the slightest hesitation, Ling Xian stretched out his evil hand to little Loli with a cruel smile. That moment, little Loli, who was eavesdropping vigorously, suddenly felt a strange cold in the whole person, as if it was in a big winter, and the whole person couldn't help but shiver. Did the air conditioner leak out? Little Lori muttered softly. After all, according to little Lori's physique, even the temperature of the North and South Poles is only a little cool in her eyes. Therefore, she was completely unconcerned about this chill, and after muttering softly, she turned around and left it behind. And her action is crying and laughing. Even the little demonic thought in his heart faded a little. However, although it is a little lighter, she can't do it if she wants to completely let go of the little Loli. Therefore, after a slight hesitation, Ling Xian stretched out his hand towards the little Loli's crystal little ears. And the first time she stretched out her hand, little Loli felt an unusual breath. After all, although there was a gap between her and Ling Xian's strength, the gap was not so obvious. Now that they are so close, Ling Xian's hand little Loli naturally senses it. Hey, who is trying to calculate me? After muttering softly, little Loli frowned, very puzzled where to think about the source of the crisis, and did not think of looking back. And after Ling Xian saw that little Loli had noticed something, he also knew that the opportunity must not be lost, and this truth would not come again. Strike decisively. The two big white and tender hands also pinched in unison towards the little Loli's ears. The next moment, a scream with great penetration also resounded throughout the destroyer. Even Suming, who was thinking about the original plot, was shocked, and forgot all the memories that had been painstakingly sorted out in his mind. In an instant, Suming felt that the whole person was not good. Xiaoai, show me what these two are doing again. Yes, brother. Xiao Yi's eyes were inexplicable, and at the same time opened a projection. Above the projection, it is the live broadcast screen of little Loli and Ling Xian. However, now these two people surprised Suming. On the screen, Ling Xian and little Loli are scuffling together, wrestling together without any image. No, it can't be said to be a scuffle, it can only be said that the two women are making a fuss here. Even, the skirt on Ling Xian's body was overturned by the little Loli, revealing a lot of pictures that were inappropriate for children. These two, Seeing the scene of the two fighting, Suming was also speechless for a while. Is this a benefit to me? After sighing softly, he asked Xiaoai to turn off the picture. Then, slowly reminiscing about the original plot again. On the other side, after Suming's side turned off the projection, Ling Xian and little Loli breathed a long sigh of relief. Come down, hurry up, or I'll get angry. Ling Xian blushed and whispered to the little Loli who was holding him deadly. No, sister Ling Xian, you actually bullied me. I'm going to tell my dad and let her help me out. At this time, little Loli was uncharacteristic, grabbed her desperately, and just didn't let go. Hearing her words, Ling Xian was also a little helpless now. She won't tell little Loli that she already knows the attributes of her daddy, and can call her daddy over and count her as winning. After all, little Loli has called Swallowing Star I don't know how many times in so many years, but how many times has Swallowing Star responded? Yes, not once. As if in the eyes of Swallowing Star, little Loli is a stranger. Therefore, little Lori's threat was useless in the eyes of the insider, and even wanted to laugh a little. In this regard, Ling Xian was also helpless, and could only try her best to persuade her. Well, hurry up and let go. Just now our appearance was seen by that big fool. If we don't let go again, he should laugh at us again. Humph, he doesn't dare to laugh at me. If he dares to laugh at me, I will. I'll tell daddy. Little Loli is a little short of breath, obviously knowing his father's attributes. Of course, despite what he said, he still let go with some reluctance. It seems that in her heart, Suming's prestige is still quite high. In this case, Ling Xian stood up in a hurry, tidied up his clothes slightly, and at this time, he suddenly thought that he was disheveled at that time, and he must have been seen by Suming. Thinking of this, his face was as if it was ripe with an apple, and it was red and almost dripping blood. At this moment, she could only push all the responsibility to little Lori. It's all to blame on you. I don't blame you. If you hadn't teased me behind my back, how would I have fought back? Little Loli did not let go at all, and grasped this key point desperately. Who was there first to sneak around the corner? It's not that you're not feeling well? People kindly came to see what happened to you, and why did you blame me? Little Lori pouted, looking like I'm not happy. You just bully me there. How could I be uncomfortable? Sister, I'm also a sub-god level. I don't need you to come over at all, right? Ling Xian was a little helpless, seeing the little Loli like this. She didn't know whether the little Loli was real or fake. Didn't know. Is it? Then why did Brother Sunaing say that you were not feeling well, and also said that your relatives came? Little Loli looked aggrieved, but suddenly seemed to think of something. Her eyes suddenly flashed this light, and asked Ling Xian. Huh? Sister Ling Xian, what does it mean that relatives are here? Now the little Loli is like a curious baby, looking at Ling Xian with a pair of curious eyes. After Ling Xian heard these words, a black line appeared. Although the little Loli has lived on the earth for an unknown number of years, and is actually a 10,000-year-old Loli. However, because of her special reasons, little Loli spent so much time sleeping in her subspace 99.99% of her time in order to reduce energy consumption. That is, recently, I met Ling Xian and Suming to break away from the state of a 10,000-year-old house girl. Therefore, although she is an old monster, her mind is still as pure as a child. Moreover, there are many things that he is completely unaware of. Chapter 145, Ling Xian's scheme. Little Loli often slept, and only recently met Ling Xian and Suming to break away from the state of a 10,000-year-old house girl. Therefore, although she is an old monster, her mind is still as pure as a child. Moreover, there are many things that he is completely unaware of. In addition, her age is also the age when curiosity is very strong. So, this time it was Ling Xian's turn to be dumbfounded. She is different from the little Loli. She does not need to sleep. In so many years, she has lived very freely. Therefore, she naturally knew the meaning of Suming's words. And it is precisely because of this that she is even more dumbfounded. This. Looking at the little Loli obviously interested, Ling Xian also knew that she seemed to be confused. After all, although the little Loli was a little confused, she was not confused at all in the place she was interested in. Therefore, Ling Xian felt that it was a little difficult. After all, it was still a little difficult for her to explain what relatives were, and how women on Earth were different from them. However, the little Loli seems to be a little conflicted with her, and she is also surprisingly attentive to this topic. The white and tender little hand tightly grasps the hem of Ling Xian's skirt, and keeps swaying. A bare child who can't explain it well. I will tear off all your skirt. Sister Ling Xian, what exactly is a relative? Who are your relatives? This. Ling Xian had a headache at this moment, and he was completely speechless. And at this time, little Loli's enthusiasm did not decrease at all. At this moment, Ling Xian's heart was full of resentment. The monstrous grievances were all towards Suming. This kind of resentment, even Gaang will kneel and sing conquest after seeing it. Suming, you are dead. Why do you tell little Gali everything? How do you explain this to Gali? This question has clearly aroused her interest. I can't figure it out. Suming, you've caused a big trouble. At this moment, the hidden state of the spirit broke out. Of course, she naturally did not read the lesson, but muttered silently in her heart. However, she also knows that the priority now is to stabilize the little Loli. Therefore, at this moment, her mind was running rapidly, and her thoughts were also thousands of thoughts, skipped I don't know how many times. The next moment, a wonderful answer appeared in her heart. The moment he thought of the answer, a smug smile appeared at the corner of Ling Xian's mouth. Then, looking at the little Loli in front of him who did not give up, he said softly, Golly, I don't know about this problem. At this moment, Ling Xian's acting report, suspicious look, and just the right performance can directly make those little fresh meat die of shame. Her acting skills are extremely powerful, and even the shrewd little Loli seems to have deceived the past. But, doesn't Sister Ling Xian know everything? Little Lori's eyes showed doubt, and her tone was also very hesitant. Seeing little Loli like this, the corners of Ling Xian's mouth turned up slightly. She knew that little Lori was about to be fooled. Therefore, she added another fire, squatted down gently, as tall as the little Loli, and looked directly at the little Loli without hesitation, with a sincere tone in her tone. Golly, Sister Ling Xian doesn't know everything. I also don't know anything about the earth. At this moment, Lingxian's emotions fully exploded, and he completely deceived little Lori. Seeing her like this, the last trace of doubt in little Lori's heart disappeared. Looking at Lingxian, little Loli nodded helplessly. Well, unfortunately, I still want to know what this means. Little Lori's tone carried this faint loss. After all, little Lori's curiosity is not fake, she really feels curious. And seeing little Lori's lost look, Lingxian finally put his heart down. Then, a devilish smile was born at the corner of her mouth. At the same time, a very powerful idea was born in her heart. Suming, you are dead, I will make you feel pain. After thinking secretly in her heart, Lingxian began her counterattack plan. Golly, you're wrong, I don't know, you can go and ask your brother Suming. With a gentle smile on his face, Lingxian suggested softly to the little Loli. That's right, Lingxian's method is very simple, that is, directly throw this question to Suming. After all, this problem was caused by Suming, and there was no problem at all in throwing it to him. Moreover, you can also hold her with a stone's throw. It's a double killing. At the same time, she also wanted to see how embarrassed Suming, who had always been holding this hizo, was pressed by the little Loli. And after little Lori heard him say this, her eyes also bloomed with new colors. However, there was still some hesitation on her face. Brother Suming? Will he know? In the eyes of little Loli, even sister Lingxian didn't know the news. Would brother Suming know? After all, in her image, Suming's presence is more of a long majesty. For this, Lingxian is obviously a free way to deal with it. I saw that her eyebrows showed wisdom, and she explained to the little Loli in a soft voice. Golly, let's see, is brother Suming the smartest person? After hearing this, after thinking for a while, the little Loli also nodded in agreement. Did the word come from him? Lingxian's smile is even better. Well, that's right. Then ask your brother Suming this question, do you have any doubts? After hearing Lingxian's analysis, little Loli finally showed an expression of realization. The corners of the eyes are also brightly colored. Yes, I should have asked brother Suming. Seeing that the little Loli finally realized under her own order, Lingxian finally showed a triumphant smile. At this moment, she seemed to have won a battle, and her mood was also very refreshing. Suming, I see how you explain it. Lingxian watched his plan come true, and his mood was also extremely happy. And for little Lori, her whole body once again ignited a strong thirst for knowledge. This thirst for knowledge was even stronger than just now, and even, Lingxian was a little afraid. The little Loli, who was full of energy, did not delay at all, and said impatiently to Lingxian, Sister Na Lingxian, I'll go find brother Suming first. After that, she didn't wait for Lingxian's reply, so she hurriedly jumped and thought about Suming and ran away. For more free follow novels, https://discord.com/ in the little Loli, who was full of energy, did not delay at all, and said impatiently to Lingxian, Sister Na Lingxian, I'll go find brother Suming first. After that, she didn't wait for Lingxian's reply, so she hurriedly jumped and thought about Suming and ran away. And seeing the back of the little Loli far away, Lingxian was in a happy mood. Then, she is also not in a hurry, a little right hand. A projection suddenly appeared in the void. And inside the projection, it is Suming, who is thinking hard about the original plot. And Lingxian's other hand also took out a cup of popcorn out of nowhere. Then, she sat casually in the void, watching the live broadcast while eating popcorn, leisurely, like those young people watching movies. Moreover, the movie she watched is still the latest live broadcast, or the live broadcast of Little Loli vs. Suming. And what she was expecting did not wait long, and after a while, she saw the little Loli bouncing in the projection. What do I think you do? After Lingxian little Loli appeared, an expectant smile immediately appeared on the corner of her mouth. She also wanted to see Suming, who was usually calm, embarrassed under the pressure of little Lori. On the other side, under the cover of spiritual intentions, Suming naturally did not know that his every move was in the sight of others. Now he is almost sorting out a little clue. However, at this time, the uninvited guest who thought he was jumping in front of him. Brother Suming, what do you mean relatives? Little Loli hugged Suming, her eyes were full of curiosity, and her tone was also very sweet. However, the lethality of little Lori's words is not small at all. As if thunder hit hard, Suming only felt that his head had directly turned into a blank, and even the thoughts that had been painstakingly sorted out were completely messed up into a pot of porridge. For a while, Suming's whole person was stupid. Tilting his head slightly, he thought that he had misheard, and after a moment of silence, Suming asked the little Loli again with a suspicious look. What, golly, what did you say? Little Loli smiled, her eyes flashed with endless light, and the appearance of the curious baby was also fully displayed. Brother Suming, I just asked, what do relatives mean? Suming was sweating for a while, and he didn't know how to respond to this question at all. After all, seeing that little Loli was now a blank piece of paper, if this kind of thing was to be educated, it was not him who was responsible. After all, Swallowing Star is only Loli now, and it is not that she does not recognize this daughter. God knows, Swallowing Star knows that he taught his own family's little ones, and will not directly hunt him down across the entire universe. Therefore, Suming said that he was very annoyed, the problem was very tricky, and it was very troublesome, it was simply a hot potato. He was also blinded by this. However, another question popped up. That's where did little Lori hear this word? He hated the person who called the word little loli now, and if it weren't for him, he wouldn't be so tricky now. Therefore, he also immediately asked the little loli, that, golly, where did you hear that word? Suming's tone was full of resentment. However, after hearing this question, little loli was also suspicious. Brother Suming, isn't that word you mentioned? Little Lori's voice is very sweet, as if it is glutinous rice, soft and sticky. However, after Suming heard it, it was like a thunderbolt on a sunny day, and he seemed to hear the sound of his mentality exploding. It's me? At this moment, Suming really did not shirk his responsibility, but really forgot. After all, God knows that he just joked casually, and the little loli just remembered, which made him a little confused. Yes, didn't you say that Lingxian's sister's relatives came and were not feeling well? Little Lori's eyes flashed with hesitation, and her tone was also a little displeased. When Suming heard this, he remembered the beginning and end of this matter. At this moment, his mentality completely collapsed. This is self-inflicted? Suming has nothing to say now, after all, the cause he planted. He also knew that the urgency of the delay now should be to solve this matter. After all, although he and little loli have not known each other for a long time, they are also people who know little loli's character, and they also know that once he gets serious, he will basically be a dead drill. Therefore, if he found it tricky just now, it is even more difficult now. After all, if it is not done well, it is not comfortable to swallow stars, and he will come to Earth for a day trip directly, and he can't afford it. As for the fact that Swallowing Star had ignored Swallowing's sister for so many years, Suming didn't believe it at all. After all, he can also figure out the character of Swallowing Star. He now seriously suspects that in addition to finding food, Swallowing Star's biggest hobby is secretly watching little loli. Observe secretly. After all, he didn't believe that Swallowing Star didn't care about Swallowing's sister at all. Otherwise, when the Swallowing sister in the original book was ready to use the ultimate erase, how did the Swallowing Star happen to appear? Therefore, Suming did not want to die. In case the little loli is not taught well, the next moment Swallowing Star is estimated to come, let him taste the love from Swallowing sister's father. Although Star Swallowing is a guy with a 10,000 round wheel in the original work, he doesn't believe that in reality, Star Swallowing's strength is still so low level. You know, there is a certain ability to correct in reality, and some obviously unreasonable situations will be repaired. Moreover, they have defused the danger of Thanos, Dormammu. It is not possible to ensure that the will of the world forcibly pulls the Swallowing Star in order to balance. After all, Suming's appearance had already affected the circulation of this world. Unsurely, this will is so frustrated, in order to get rid of him, a foreigner. Therefore, Suming was also extremely cautious about this matter. However, with so much explanation, the priority now is to stabilize the little loli, or find a way to fool the past. It's just that Suming couldn't help but feel a pain in his brain after looking at the little loli who was already a little puffy because he didn't answer. After all, little loli is not so confused now, and is on the dividing line of shrewdness. For this, he is also very helpless. And his helpless and anxious scene, the secret observation of Ling Xian also showed a triumphant smile. The current little loli is not so confused now, and is on the dividing line of shrewdness. For this, he is also very helpless. And his helpless and anxious scene, the secret observation of Ling Xian also showed a triumphant smile. Humph, tell you to bully me, now I see what you do. At this moment, Ling Xian was very proud and happy. After all, Suming who looks like this now, he is really very rare. Moreover, Suming's self-inflicted plot is too attractive. No, this is very rare, I must record it, when the time comes, this is evidence. Lingxian's appearance, a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. On the other side, Suming naturally did not know what Ling Xian thought. Now he is meditating here. At this time, he felt that there had never been a moment, like now, he felt that his brain was not spinning fast enough. He felt that even when dealing with Dormammu, it was not so tricky. After all, although Dormammu is also a creation god, he is a new one after all. Besides, isn't there still little loli and Ling Xian to help? It's just that if after the arrival of Swallowing Star, he can't guarantee that little loli and Ling Xian will not help. What to do? What to do? How do you fool little loli? Suming was a little anxious, and his wit flashed with wisdom again at this moment. He suddenly thought of a good idea. How can I forget her? Wouldn't it be perfect to leave this kind of question to her to answer? After thinking of paying attention, Suming's face also showed a look of I'm so witty. At this moment, he was very proud. Then, he asked softly to the cute little loli. Golly, this question, I can't explain it, or will you ask your sister Ling Xian? He will definitely give you a very memorable explanation. On the other hand, this was the way Suming thought of it, and directly threw this matter to Ling Xian. First, Ling Xian was a woman after all, and the words thrown at him were not embarrassing. Second, even if Ling Xian taught the little loli badly, he would not risk offending eternity, and Ling Xian hardened compared to Uncle Swallow. Thinking of this, Suming's mood suddenly improved. I'm really witty. At this moment, Suming also praised his wit. However, what he didn't know was that his every move was in the eyes of the parties. Seeing that he was ready to push the matter to himself, Ling Xian was resentful at that time. Sure enough, little loli is because you brought a bad. However, in the blink of an eye, she laughed. Haha, you still want to kick me, I see how round you are. Then, she waited to see Suming's good show. And that's exactly what happened. Little Loli heard Suming ask her to go to Ling Xian, and her eyes were full of grievances at that time. At the same time, the pink little face is also quickly inflated at a speed visible to the naked eye, pouting, looking like the baby is unhappy. Seeing this scene, Suming was stunned on the spot. What's the situation? Isn't little Loli closer to her Ling Xian's sister? Let her go to Ling Xian. Why is she still angry? Did I say something wrong? Could it be that the two of them had an awkward fight just now? Is Ling Xian's real relative here? And then the body was also uncomfortable, and the temper exploded, and then the two fell out like that? Hesitantly, Suming's mind has been warmed up, and the speed of operation is now also soaring. In the blink of an eye, he thought of many answers. Even, he was a little surprised by the speed of his mind. However, what surprised him a little Lori's expression is also more and more crying, as if she has been wronged, and even in her eyes, there is already a trace of mist spreading, and even faintly tears are condensing. What's wrong, Golly? Who bullied you? Suming, who saw this scene, was also stupid. After all, although the little Loli is a loli, but the personality is still very cheerful, has always been happy. Suming is still the first time to see the little Loli like this, so he also quickly comforted softly. However, what he didn't expect was that hearing his words, the moisture in little Lori's eyes became even stronger, and it was not just as simple as crying. At this moment, Suming seemed to have felt the killing intent from Devouring Star. Golly, tell me, who bullies you? I'll teach him a lesson. Well, Suming was also busy and began to comfort. Then, what made Suming a little dumbfounded was that little Lori's tears had already dripped. What's going on? Is my comfort technique so low level? Why did she cry more and more comfortably? Little Loli's crying, Suming was dumbfounded. After all, this development is a little different from what he expected. How did it become like this? Be all abroad. Of course, fortunately, although the little Loli cried, she finally spoke. You bully me, Sister Lingxian too, you all bully me. Although the little Loli spoke, Suming was even more confused. How could I bully you? Suming was a little anxious. After all, he now highly suspected that some daughter was secretly observing all this in some unknown place. And at this time, little Loli actually said such words. Isn't this putting him on a fire and roasting? After all, the secretly observed swallowing star may come over in one step and give little Loli a blow. You obviously bullied me. I asked Sister Lingxian, my sister asked me to ask you, and then you asked me to ask Sister Lingxian. You are simply lying to me. At this moment, the little Loli cried directly, crying miserably, and even that voice simply smelled sad and saw tears. For this situation, Suming was even more confused. After all, he never expected that little Loli was sent by Ling Xian. That's embarrassing. For a while, Suming didn't think of anything to comfort the little Loli, so he let the little Loli's golden beads drip one by one. And Ling Xian, who was secretly observing, was also happy after seeing this scene. Haha, this is retribution. Seeing Suming's embarrassed, and then helpless look, Ling Xian was simply like a new year. She's so proud now. After all, in her memory, since she met Suming, it seemed that her queen's temperament had been suppressed by Suming, which made her depressed. Now I am also very happy to see him deflated. On the other side, seeing little Lori's pitiful appearance, Suming was also speechless for a while. However, at this time, he also knew that he had to find a way to solve this matter. Therefore, under the pressure of devouring stars, Suming's mind was racing rapidly. Under the consumption of glucose sugar regardless of loss, in the brain state of overclocking, Suming found a very clever method after a while. Xiaoai, come out, find you something. Before the words fell, Xiaoyi appeared in front of Suming. Now Xiaoyi and little Loli are about the same age. As soon as she appeared, little Lori's gaze was on her body, and even the gold beads did not fall any further. After seeing this scene, Suming was also secretly relieved. At the same time, he faintly felt that he had made the right move. Xiaoai, this matter will be solved by you. Without delay, Suming directly threw this question to Xiaoyi. Okay, brother Su. Xiaoyi, who knew his thoughts, naturally did not shirk, but was very happy to explain these issues to Xiao Lori. Sister Xiaoai, will tell me. The mist in little Lori's eyes was not dry, and she looked at Suming with a little expectation. Hearing this, Suming squatted down and wiped off the remaining gold beads on the little Loli's face with his hand, with a strong gentle color in his tone. Well, don't you like playing with Xiaoai the most? Now Xiaoai tells you, don't you like it? Like. Hearing this, little Loli also nodded hurriedly, and even a little impatient. However, a moment later, he turned to Suming and asked, but, brother Su, sister Xiaoai, does he understand? Seeing little Loli asking this question seriously, Suming couldn't help but be a little handsome. However, he knew that it was time to stabilize the little Loli. Therefore, his tone was gentle again, and then he said softly, don't worry, Golly, I don't want to explain, or give it to your sister Xiaoai, she will definitely give you a very memorable explanation. However, hearing his words, the corners of little Lori's mouth gambled again, with a strong dissatisfaction in her tone. Brother Suming, that's what you said when you tricked me into looking for Sister Lingxian just now. Suming. Being slapped in the face on the spot, or being slapped in the face by little Loli, Suming felt extremely embarrassed. However, even if he was embarrassed, his face did not show the slightest, and he was still very calm. Golly, it didn't count just now, it was a mistake. Xiao Yi definitely knows, Xiao Yi is very smart. After Suming explained again, Xiao Yi also immediately responded, yes, golly, don't you still believe me? After speaking, Xiao Yi walked over and took little Lori's little hand. Looking at Xiao Yi's sincere eyes, Xiao Loli could only nod in agreement. Okay. After hearing her promise, Xiaoai also reacted immediately, directly took her hand, and then walked towards the side of the room, looking like she wanted to whisper to you. Little Loli did not refuse Xiao Yi, and obediently followed little Loli. After little Loli left, Suming let out a long breath. Finally fooled over. At this moment, Suming only felt as if he was tired, as if he had fought a vicious battle. However, it seems that the war has been won so far. However, after a moment, he was confused again. Just now, what am I going to do? At this time, he suddenly remembered that he seemed to be sorting out something just now, and then he was interrupted by little Lori. However, now his brain was blank, and all thoughts had disappeared. Therefore, Suming continued to be confused. On the other side, seeing that Suming directly threw this question to Xiaoai, Ling Xian was also stunned. She did everything she calculated, but she didn't calculate that Suming and Xiaoai were helpers. The key is that Xiaoai's identity is special, and the relationship with Xiao Loli is also excellent, and it can even be said to be the best. Therefore, this matter, leaving it to Xiaoai is the most suitable. Therefore, Ling Xian is very depressed now. After all, she was trying hard and wanted to do things. In his opinion, Suming's embarrassment just now was not even foreplay. But that's over now. Therefore, the degree of depression of Ling Xian can be imagined. It's just that she doesn't have anything good to do now. You can only take out the puppet and pinch at it. Humph, you big fool, you don't know to let me. It's all to blame you, blame you, blame you. On the other hand, after Suming consumed countless brain cells, he finally remembered what he was going to do next. Next, it should be the plot of the Guardians of the Galaxy, that is, the plot of Nova Legion versus Ronan the Accuser. Ronan still has power gems there. Anyway, now that he has collected 2 gems, it is not a problem to have another one, there should be no problem. Suming, who had returned to his senses, also immediately thought a lot, and after a while, he recalled all the things he had just considered. After that, things are simple. To the Nova Legion. Suming also immediately gave the goal. However, immediately afterwards, he seemed to think of something, and then added, let's jump directly in space, it's so fast. Yes, brother. Xiaoai also responded immediately. At the same time, the destroyer also reacted immediately. As the light dimmed slightly, the space jump device recharged. The coordinates are also entered by Xiaoai, and everything is ready. A few seconds later, as a black vortex took shape, the space jump began again. It was no different from the scene last time. After experiencing a colorful passage, the destroyer suddenly appeared in a strange starry sky. This starry sky is obviously different from just now, at least you can see the stars, no longer a piece of black pressure, at least some color. Brother, in front of it is the alert range of the Nova Legion. Xiao Yi also made an explanation in a timely manner and told that the destination was not far away. Unlike any spaceship in the movie that can dock, although the Nova Army is not a very famous force, it is a force after all, and for the capital planet, the protection is relatively strict. If only an ordinary spaceship was okay, after all, it was basically not too aggressive, and the body size was there. However, the words of the destroyer, unlike any spaceship in the movie that can dock, although the Nova Army is not a very famous force, it is a force after all, and for the capital planet, the protection is relatively strict. If only an ordinary spaceship was okay, after all, it was basically not too aggressive, and the body size was there. However, the words of the destroyer, well, this kind of anger, this look, it is estimated that as soon as you enter the People's Cordon, you will be stopped by the People's Army, and then start a long negotiation, right? After all, this look, saying that it is not aggressive and threatening, no one will believe it. Therefore, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, Suming felt that he should change a guy to enter the Nova Army. Moreover, it seems that Ronan has not arrived yet, and it will be good to wait until he arrives and then transfer the destroyer. Anyway, this point is not long, for the destroyer, a matter of minutes. Therefore, Suming was very relieved. At this time, Xiao Yi pulled Xiao Loli out. Little Loli changed his role as a witch, her face was red, and she hid behind Xiao Yi a little shyly, only revealing half of her head and a watery little eye. Then, a small eye also stared straight at Suming. Looking at her like this, he knew that Xiao Yiyin should explain clearly to Xiao Lori. And at this time, the big stone in his heart finally landed. Seeing little Lori's shy look, Suming was also very amused. This little witch, finally solved. He also knew that little Lori's current state was only temporary, and it was estimated that it would not be long before he returned to the original state. However, his purpose was also achieved. Of course, he also knew that the next step should be to draw little Lori's attention elsewhere. Therefore, after seeing the little Loli, he also immediately made an invitation. Golly, I'm going to get off the battleship later, are you going to come too? This topic really attracted little Loli. Hearing him say this, little Loli also no longer cared about hiding, directly from behind Xiaoai, and then hurriedly jumped to the front. A pair of water spirit big eyes also immediately bloomed with a curious look. Get off the battleship? Where to go? Little Lori's tone was a little impatient. Let's go to the capital star of the Nova Legion. Suming naturally did not hide it, but directly said the destination of their trip. It's just that he didn't say what the reason for where to go, and he believed that little Lori must not care about this. In fact, after hearing the destination of this trip, little Loli's face immediately showed a clear look of longing. Okay, I'd love to see it too. Little Loli has been on Earth for a long time, and has not played a ball for a long time, and she must be very interested in going to other planets, planets with scientific and technological civilizations. The attitude towards the little Loli, Suming. And to his surprise, a voice also sounded. I'm going to. This voice was so sudden that it made Suming a little confused. The two looked for prestige, and saw a displeased spirit now behind the two people. However, after seeing Ling Xian, little Loli, and Suming were taken aback. Because the current state of the spirit is too scary. His face was gloomy, as if it was going to rain. There was also a deep anger hidden in the corners of his eyes, as if he was about to erupt at any time. For this, Suming and little Loli looked confused. Sister Ling Xian, what's wrong? Little Loli subconsciously hid behind Suming, revealing half of her head, with a hesitant tone in her tone. Little Loli didn't know that her strength was obviously much higher than Suming, but she subconsciously wanted to hide behind Suming. It seems that Suming has a strong restraint effect on Ling Xian. It's not much, I'm fine. Ling Xian forced down his anger, glanced at little Loli quietly, and then gritted his teeth and replied. However, his words, the two must not believe it. Little Lori shook her head even more wildly. She is cute, not stupid, she can obviously feel the Ling Xian's sister's anger. However, after her keen diagnosis, he also immediately determined that the target of this anger was not him, but brother Suming. Therefore, the clever little Loli naturally will not find it unpleasant, and immediately withdraws. He slipped away from behind Suming without any nostalgia. In the end, he also threw him a look of self-seeking blessing. And this is also the case, little Loli only felt that after leaving behind his Suming brother, she felt that the pressure of the whole person was completely relaxed, as if she had been resurrected. And the little Loli relaxed, and Suming was blinded. From the look Loli gave him from the little child, and the trace of murderous aura that came from Ling Xian, he could feel that Ling Xian was already full of anger towards him. However, although he knew the source, Suming's confusion did not diminish at all. What's the situation? What's wrong with this? Did I touch her mold again? Also, why are you targeting me again? Could it be that real relatives are here? I heard that women come to relatives, and their emotions are easily unstable. Is it the same with goddesses? At this moment, countless questions began to linger in his head, like a dead knot one by one, so that he could not get around. His head is big. However, he had no problem with this trip. After all, with another spiritual appearance, he is not unacceptable, and he is also left anyway. Of course, the reason why he didn't go to call Ling Xian at that time was because he thought that Ling Xian was not feeling well, so he was ready to let Ling Xian rest well. Therefore, he didn't say anything more, just asked Xiao Yi to prepare a small spaceship. On the other side, after seeing that Suming did not pay attention to himself, Ling Xian's anger became even more filled. She is very angry now. Very, very angry. At the beginning, he was just depressed because the trouble he thought didn't make Suming difficult, then now he was completely angry and out of anger. They go to play and they don't call me, it's just too much. Ling Xian felt that he was very, very wronged, and even since he was a child, he had never suffered such grievances. Fila reminds you, 3 things to read, bookmark, recommend, share. When Ling Xian started, if he was just depressed because the trouble he thought was not difficult for Suming, then he was completely angry now. When they go to play, they don't call me. Ling Xian felt that he was very aggrieved, and even since he was a child, he had never suffered such grievances. Even if a young lady who was a living lady was angry here, she didn't take her with her when they went out to play, leaving her alone to face the empty spaceship. How she felt, she was like an outcast grudge. Therefore, Miss Ling Xian is finally about to break out. Well, though, if it had been before, she would definitely order a planet with this kind of anger and have fun. However, as soon as she saw Suming, she unconsciously fell shorter, and her momentum was not so strong. Even, her intensely flame went down more than half. Therefore, although she was very angry and wanted to break out very much, in front of Suming, she also showed her anger at most. However, what disappointed her was that after Suming saw her like this, although it was a little incredible, although he also felt a little troublesome. However, he was more confused, and he couldn't think of where he offended this young lady again. In this regard, he can only sigh that the team of the eldest lady is really difficult to bring. A little Loli, a royal sister, is not a fuel-saving lamp. However, who asked him to spread this matter? The 2 women also recognized him, and it was more troublesome to change others. To this, Suming could only sigh that the world was impermanent. After sighing, he could only say to Ling Xian, "Since you want to go, let's go together. Anyway, you are idle and idle." The understatement made Ling Xian's anger even richer. However, obviously, Suming did not think deeply about the reason why he was angry. Or, the reason why she was angry, even Suming couldn't think of it. Therefore, after Suming confirmed that she was also going, he went directly to the preparation room and began to log into the Nova Legion. Then, there was only Ling Xian, who was slowly angry, and a little Loli with a confused face. Seeing Suming leave like this, Ling Xian's whole person was dumbfounded. And so he went? Then, seeing that the situation was not good, the little loli was afraid that the war would affect her, and she immediately said to Ling Xian, "Sister Ling Xian, then you are busy first, I will go and help brother Suming." Before the words fell, the little loli hurriedly chased Suming's back and went, the hurried look, as if there was a ghost behind. Seeing little loli like this, Ling Xian was speechless for a while. However, at this time, her anger exceeded the critical value. However, she couldn't vent anything. After all, she knew that this destruction was Suming's painstaking effort. If she vented for a while, the battleship was destroyed, although it could make Suming's heart ache, but which scene was not seen by the spirit phenomenon. Therefore, thinking about it, she was helpless, and she didn't seem to have any way except to need that little couple. So, after thinking for a while, she took out the familiar little puppet. "Humph, it's all to blame on you." After drinking lightly at the little puppet who was exactly the same as Suming, she began to ravage the blow. Thanks to this little puppet, although it looks like it is stitched with pieces of cloth, in fact, the cost of this little puppet is extremely expensive. This little puppet is not simple, the thin layer of cloth on the surface, although it looks inconspicuous, but in the feel, it is no different from the real person. Not afraid of fire, not afraid of knife cutting, and even sub-god level power can be all knotted. Of course, if it weren't so expensive, it is estimated that it would have turned into flying ash in the hands of Ling Xian. However, even though this muppet is very expensive, the quality is very good. However, in the hands of the spirit in this state now, the puppet still seems to be a little unable to hold on. One can imagine how angry Ling Xian's anger is now. Fortunately, she only had a glimmer of sanity, at least not to let the tragedy of the little puppet's destruction take place. Suming, who was in the state of Ling Xian, naturally did not know. Now he is communicating with the little loli who caught up. "Golly, why did you come up?" The fact that little loli chased after him still surprised Suming very much. After all, usually, little loli still likes to stay with Ling Xian. After hearing this question, little loli did not answer immediately, but first shrunk her neck in fear, and then secretly looked behind her. Her action surprised Suming. Who is she afraid of? Out of the two of us, the spirit is now in the spaceship. Is she afraid of the spirit? However, why is he so afraid of Ling Xian? Isn't the relationship between the two quite good? Could it be? It's really funny now? Uncontrollably, Suming also asked to the little loli, "What's wrong with you? Are you afraid of Ling Xian?" After hearing his words, little loli nodded instinctively, and then seemed to remember something, and immediately shook her head wildly. Little loli nodded and shook her head again, directly looking at Suming stupidly. "What's wrong? Say it well." At this time, little loli asked Suming softly, "Brother Suming, didn't you notice that sister Ling Xian seems to be a little different today?" Hearing this question, Suming also nodded in agreement. After all, he is not blind, let alone a fool, and naturally he can feel that there are some problems with the current state of the spirit. However, he did not pay much attention to it. After all, women understand. It's just that when little loli saw his unimpressed look, she was a little anxious, and quickly pulled Lei Sumin's hand. "What's wrong?" Looking down at little Lori's pitiful eyes, Suming was a little confused. "Brother Suming, I'm all with you today, don't leave me behind." Little Lori's tone was full of pleading. "What's the situation?" Although Suming didn't know why the little loli became like this, but seeing the pitiful appearance of the little loli, he couldn't bear to refuse the little loli again. "Well, then you have to be obedient." Seeing this, little loli also nodded wildly. After that, it's simple. The things Xiaoi had already been prepared, and only the people they were riding on were left. What Xiaoi prepared for the three was a small starship.